Welcome in to another episode of Preferred Walk-On, a college football show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman and producer Eli right now. Very special episode, Dalton. One of our favorites that we do every single offseason. We are officially in preview season right now. We're going to have a marathon stream today, probably at least 3 hours, breaking down every single team in the Power Four. This week is SEC. We're going to break down all 16 SEC teams in their entirety, Dalton, basically telling you what you got to know about the program going into the season, their biggest strength, their biggest weakness, breaking down their quarterback, breaking down their star offensive player, breaking down the star defensive player, and giving you guys a bottom line on every team. Basically, what's the ceiling for this team? What's the floor for every team? I cannot wait, Dalton, to get into this marathon stream today.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Last year, we had over a 3-hour episode when we did our SEC preview. And Max, I know you're just off vacation. Are you good? You're in shape to go? Did you get enough sleep? Did you use the bathroom before? Is everything you set with everything to go for the next couple hours?
Barely.
How you feeling? This is really more than even just previewing the teams. This is now like, they talk about, every coach puts their team through some sort of conditioning test. They got to get in football shape. That's what today's episode feels like. Are you in football shape, Max? Are you ready?
We're running gassers right now on this marathon stream. I'm probably not in the best shape to do it. I went to a concert, Noah Khan concert in Fenway last week, went to the Cape Cod this past weekend. A lot of beers were consumed, I would say, over those past 10 days or so. So I'm in rough shape right now, but I'm in good enough shape to get through the stream today. I'm very excited to get through this stream today. Again, all 16 SEC teams will be getting their own in-depth preview here live on this show. Before we get started, want to remind you guys right now, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. That really helps us out. And also, you'll be here for when we do future streams, whether it be the Big 10 or the Big 12 or the ACC. Also, if you can follow along to all of our social media accounts, whether it be the TikTok account, the Twitter account, the Instagram account, and also if you guys can, check out the audio version of the show, Apple or Spotify. Leave a review, leave it 5 stars if you can too. That really helps us out as well. We got a few people in the chat right now, Dalton. We're going to be live reading the chat as well during the show, so get active in the chat too. Dalton, let's get started, man. And how we're going to do this, actually, I should have said this before. We're not just doing it in alphabetical order like we did in previous years. Dalton, you and I actually ranked every team collectively in every conference, and we're going in reverse order. So we're going to start off with our lowest ranked team in the SEC, working all the way up to our number 1 team in the SEC. Dalton, our number 16 team, our last team in the SEC right now, is the Arkansas Razorbacks. And no way around it. It was kind of a disastrous year last year for Arkansas. 2-10 record, tied for the worst record in program history. They were winless in SEC play last year. Sam Pittman, their head coach, was fired after 6 seasons on the job. He started off 2-3 on the year, got fired midway through the season. Bobby Petrino, the former Arkansas head coach, he took over, but he only went 0-7 in his 7 games there. Arkansas's offense is actually really good, right, under Bobby Petrino. Top 25 offense in the country with guys like Taylor Green leading it. But the reason why, Dalton, they only won 2 games last year, they had the 8th worst defense in America in terms of EPA per play. Now, the new head coach is Ryan Silverfield, coming in from Memphis. Ironically, one of the teams that actually beat Arkansas last year. He has a 29-9 record over the last 3 years with the Tigers. Really got really busy in the transfer portal this offseason, Dalton, remaking this roster. 42 transfers incoming for Arkansas, the 3rd most in the Power 4, the most of any SEC school. They also lost 38 transfers, 6th most in the Power 4, 2nd most in the SEC. Ryan Silverfield hired Ron Roberts as the defensive coordinator, Florida's defensive coordinator last year. Tim Cramsey is the new offensive coordinator. He was the OC at Memphis under Ryan Silverfield. Kind of have a quarterback battle to replace Taylor Green between KJ Jackson and AJ Hill that I'll break down more in just a second. They also, Dalton, they lost a star running back in Mike Washington Jr. too. The top 3 receivers are gone. 3 starters on the offensive line are gone. Only 3 starters on defense are back too, with 6 transfers projected to start on that side of the ball. And for me, Dalton, really, I think the biggest strength of this Razorback program is their run game, even though they lost Taylor Green and Mike Washington, because last year they were 4th in EPA per run. But Braylon Russell comes back. He's a really good player at 6'1", 235 pounds, 5 yards per carry in his career. Sutton Smith transferred in from Memphis. He led the Tigers last year with nearly 700 rushing yards. KJ Jackson at quarterback is a really good runner as well. And Memphis has been top 15 in EPA per run in each of the last 2 years, running a lot of inside and outside zone and utilizing the quarterback's legs very well. So I think the run game, even without Taylor Green and Mike Washington, this will still be a really big strength for Arkansas next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think you summed it up pretty well. When you look at this team last year, I mean, also they played in so many close games, right? 7 of their 10 losses were by single digits, and they had one of the toughest schedules in the country. You look at the way they lost to Ole Miss on turnovers, right? Memphis, a last-minute fumble as they were driving in, right? A tight game with Tennessee, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, LSU. I mean, last year could have gone so much differently for this team, but, the strength on offense just couldn't quite keep up with their weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball, right? It was a real problem. This team gave up the second most points in the Power Four during the regular season last year. Just can't have it, right? So now when you look at what Ryan Silverfield needs to do coming into a team that's losing some veterans like Taylon Green, Mike Washington, Julian Neal getting selected in the third round of this year's NFL draft by the Seattle Seahawks, guys like that are gone, right? So he's got a young team. He's got a lot of transfers coming in, like you mentioned, and he's really got to balance out this football team. And if you ask me, the biggest question on this entire team is, can they get anything more out of a brand new secondary than they did last year? Because they did have Julian Neal, and he was probably the best player on the defense last year. But as a unit, they were an absolute disaster. And even this year, when you look at the turnover, 7 out of the 8 defensive backs that played 150 snaps last year are gone. They allowed the second most points in the Power Four during the regular season, like I mentioned, 126 in the country in yards per pass attempt allowed, 129th in the country in explosive pass rate allowed, the 8th worst in the country last year. Just way too many times for as good as their offense was that they're getting in these shootouts up in the 30 and 40 point range, right? So to me, you look at some key guys like a Jaheim Johnson coming in from Tulane. You look at a guy like Christian Harrison coming in from Cincinnati, maybe a Carter Stoutmeyer from Colorado. When you look at what they've brought into this secondary, they really need to be able to just function. Like if they have an average secondary even last year, they might go 7-5 or 8-4 with the offense that they had, but they just could not get any big stops in big moments. So there is a boatload of transfers. Safety Miguel Mitchell is the only returner to that unit, and probably rightfully so, considering the way the rest of it performed. When you look at this team and this defense, they need to get so much better on the back end of it. If they can be an average secondary this year, they can stay in games and give themselves a shot.
Yeah, Ron Roberts has his work cut out for him right now, coming in as a new defensive coordinator for Arkansas. Because, like you said, Dawn, it really was why Arkansas went 2-10 last year. The offense was excellent. It was a top 25 offense in the country. Defense, though, was one of the worst in the nation, which is why they lost 10 games last year. And Dalton, one of their star players from last year, Taylon Green, he's no longer with the program. He's now with the Cleveland Browns, and their loaded quarterback room, or if loaded is the right word to put for that. A lot of names, I should say, in that quarterback room right now. It's kind of a wide open competition for Arkansas to replace Taylon Green at quarterback. So maybe talk a little bit about the competition, and also KJ Jackson is right now projected to beat out AJ Hill for that starting job.
Yeah, Jackson's got one career start. Hill played a little bit last year for Memphis when I'm losing the name on the Nevada. Brennan Lewis. When Brennan Lewis was hurt last year for Memphis, I just lost his name there for a second. But when you look at these two guys, I mean, you're looking at a competition between two really young kids. Obviously, Ryan Silverfield is familiar with AJ Hill. KJ Jackson, the incumbent, staying at Arkansas, even despite the coaching change. And when I look at Jackson as the favorite to win this starting job, you've got a big physical specimen on your hands, right? 6'4", 223 pounds. He's got probably maybe A- arm strength. He's got a really good arm. The deep ball comes naturally to him, and he's very, very mobile. You mentioned it. If he's going to be the starter, he's also going to be a weapon in this run game. He's got plenty of velo in his arm. He can throw. I think a lot like Taylon Green, what you're looking for is big explosive plays down the field, right? That's what you got with Green. It was explosive plays with both his arm and his legs. A lot like Green also, though, you're going to have to see him mentally kind of progress throughout his career here, better decision making, and the accuracy's got to be a lot better. The throwing mechanics from the pocket are a little bit stiff. It feels like he's a little more comfortable improvising and playing playground football right now, but there is a lot of potential here for sure. When you talk about athletically and the build that you have in a guy like KJ Jackson, definitely somebody you can win with in the right system. We'll see what this offense looks like, but it's definitely going to be based around the run game, the RPO game, the straight play action game, and then to me, just finding a way like they did last year, really the last 2 years with Taylon Green, Green, creating explosive plays and ripping off 15, 20, 30-yard chunks, right? So maybe it's a little inconsistent early on with either quarterback because they're both so young, but especially if Jackson is in there, like you mentioned it, the strength should be a big physical run game with a heavy play action passing game to really to complement it down the field.
Yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting battle between him and AJ Hill. We think KJ Jackson's gonna win that job right now, but AJ Hill was I believe, top 20 quarterback coming out of high school too. So yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see who wins that job. But I think KJ Jackson right now is probably the favorite as a slightly more experienced player right now too. And Dalton, a guy who's gonna be really important for this offense, replacing Mike Washington at running back, is Braylon Russell at running back too. So I really think this run game is gonna be key for Arkansas next year. Braylon Russell, 6'1", 235 pounds, very bruising running back, averaged over 5 yards per carry in his career, with over 3 yards after contact per carry in his career. He ran for about 300 yards last year with an 82 PFF rushing grade. He did miss 3 games due to injury. Now, of course, at 235 pounds, doesn't really have the top end speed that you look for at running back, but he loves to lower his shoulder and punish defenders. And that sort of play style works really well in a gap scheme because 433 of his 640 career rushing yards have come on gap runs. It'd be really interesting to see how he fits in the zone heavy scheme that Silverfield ran at Memphis, although a lot of it was inside zone, so there'll still be a lot of running between the tackles for Braylon Russell. He's not really much of a receiver right now, only 48 receiving yards. He also doesn't really break that many tackles despite being so physically imposing. He more kind of inflicts punishment onto defenders, but he does go down relatively easy when he's contacted. Kind of lacks the juice to shake defenders or pull away from them too. But Dalton, he's a really critical player for this Arkansas team next year because I think that run game between Braylon Russell and KJ Jackson is going to be really big because I don't know how much of the passing game they're going to be able to rely on next year.
I think the third guy to mention in there also is the transfer from Memphis with Ryan Silverfield, Sutton Smith, right? I think what you could have in the backfield with these two backs is kind of that thunder and lightning duo of Russell with the physicality and Sutton Smith with the big play ability and maybe a little bit of receiving ability as well. So I think you're going to have these two backs staying fresh throughout football games. And what they're going to be hoping for is that they can get ahead early and control the pace of the game, right? Not put too much pressure on the young quarterback to come back. It's again why the defense is going to be so important to keep them in games and not fall behind early in some of these games to put the pressure on the quarterback. But in Russell and Smith and then Jackson potentially as the rushing threat at quarterback, there is definitely a lot of hope for this run game. Got to rebuild on the offensive line a little bit, lost a couple veterans, but I think this really needs to be the core of their football team, is to control the pace, run the football, be the more physical team with this backfield.
Definitely. Yeah, shout out Neckbone in the chat right now. He's with the Woo Pig in the chat. We got Arkansas fans in the chat right now. Dalton. How about the defensive player spotlight? Probably the guy Dalton's going to get taken highest in the NFL draft on this defensive line, and Quincy Rhodes Jr. back for another year.
Yeah, the good news in their front seven is they're bringing back their team leaders in pressures, tackles for loss, and sack. That's Quincy Rhodes Jr., the edge defender, kind of a hybrid, but edge defender down there on the defensive line. Massive build, 6'6", 275 pounds, might even be more than that right now. Reminds me a lot of Keldrick Falk out of Auburn, who ended up going in the first round last year. The length and the power absolutely play in the run game. When you see this guy first and foremost play against the run, it's so similar. He can line up over the tackle. He can line up off the edge. And when you just have this big 6'6" monster to deal with, whether it's in that 5 technique or out on the edge, it's a lot to handle, right? There's a reason that build and his power, that's the reason he's a top 40 consensus prospect for next year's draft, right? So he's got to kind of like Falk, kind of get the pass rush arsenal going a little bit more. 40% of his pressures last year were against non-power 4 teams. So you'd like to see him improve there. But I think there's a very similar build here, at least when you talk about guys like Keldrick Falk and Michael Williams, where they're just so big and so physically imposing that he's really the number one guy that you have to work around both in the run and passing games, right? He's also going to be their premier pass rusher. It's just a matter of how much he can tap into that ceiling. Does he have a better get off this year? Can he really play in that wide 9 and really get one-on-one with the tackles and pin his ears back and more consistently beat the elite tackles in the SEC? But he's by far their best defensive player going into this season, and he's really going to be the key to that entire front seven. Quincy Rhodes Jr. is a guy to watch out for all season.
Yeah, he's right now getting a lot of first-round hype. I remember last year even, a lot of people thought he could have been a top 50 pick in last year's NFL draft, decided to go back for his senior year at Arkansas. But yeah, he definitely could be a first-round pick in this upcoming NFL draft too. So he's a really big name to watch out for on that Arkansas defensive line. All right, Joel, let's go to the bottom line now for the Arkansas Razorbacks. And instead of kind of like a one sentence or two sentence thing, like, oh, if this goes well, maybe they can have a decent season. What I kind of want to do for this one is look at the schedule for every single one of these teams and kind of say, okay, what is the minimum? Like, what is the if worst case scenario happens for Arkansas this year? What's their record going to be? On the flip side, what's the best case scenario for Arkansas? Now, don't give out your record prediction just yet because we're actually going to do that tomorrow in our full SEC prediction show. We're going to give you guys the exact record we think every single team is going to have next year. But what's the best case scenario for Arkansas and what's the worst case scenario you think for Arkansas this year?
The reality this year for Arkansas and a new coaching staff and the amount of turnover they have, especially on the offensive side of the ball with those two stars in their backfield, there was a lot of missed opportunities last year. That's why they turned over this coaching staff. This is a rebuilding year. Obviously you hate to say that for any team in any given season because you don't want to give years away. But if this team made a bowl game, I think that would be a wildly successful year, right? And when you think about, okay, there's some games where they might just be overmatched. You think about playing playoff teams like Georgia and Texas A&M, right? You got some other really tough games against teams like Texas and LSU. But then there's some 50-50 games, I think, in the bottom half of this SEC that are they capable of winning on the right day? Sure. South Carolina, if they don't improve, right? Vanderbilt without Diego Pavia, right? You look at Auburn kind of in the same situation, trying to figure out everything with a new coaching staff, right? So if you can win a lot of those 50-50 games, you can maybe climb your way to 6-6 or even 7-5, but it's a very tough schedule they're dealing with. There's 5 or 6 games here that it's hard on paper to see if they have really a great shot to win, especially against teams like Georgia and Texas and LSU. But this is a rebuilding year. They're very, very young on offense. Ryan Silverfield is going to use this year to really try to put the culture in here. And if they do make a bowl game, I think that's a very successful year, and it would be something to build on, especially with the idea that, okay, that would imply that KJ Jackson really, he really is your foundational quarterback, and this is the guy that's going to carry you for the next year or two.
Yeah, I think we're in lockstep here. I think the floor is what you did last year, which is 2-10, because you played North Alabama and Tulsa. You should win both of those games. I think the ceiling is probably around 6-6 or 7-5, like you said too, Dalton, because you play Georgia at A&M, Tennessee, Missouri, at Texas, LSU. Like that's 6 games right there that I think Arkansas is a significant underdog. And then also the swing games that can go from 2-10 to 6-6. You're at Utah with a brand new head coach in Morgan Scalley. We'll see how they are this year. You're at Vanderbilt, out at Auburn, South Carolina. Those are more 50-50-ish games for Arkansas. So yeah, I'm with you. I think bowl game is the best case scenario for Ryan Silverfield this year at Arkansas. Absolute worst case scenario, which I don't think will happen. I think they will win more than 2 games. But worst case scenario, I don't see this team going 0-12 or 1-11. I think they are going to beat North Alabama. They're going to beat Tulsa. It's from there. How much can you improve on last year's disastrous year at Arkansas? That is what I'm looking at right now. So yeah, 2-10, somewhere between 2-10 and 6-6 or 7-5 is where I would place the expectation for Arkansas next year. All right, Joel, let's get to another school that has a brand new head coach, actually a brand new head coach, a guy who's never been a head coach before. At number 15 for us in the SEC is the Kentucky Wildcats. Head coach is Will Stein, now in his first year as the head coach at Kentucky. Last year, 5-7 record for Kentucky. Had a 4-8 record the year before that in 2024. So back-to-back losing seasons for Mark Stoops. He got fired after 13 seasons in the job. First time having back-to-back losing seasons at Kentucky in a decade. Will Stein gets hired as his first head coaching gig. He was Oregon's offensive coordinator for the last 3 seasons. He was actually born and raised in Kentucky, played for a rival school in Louisville, and Oregon. Dalton had by far the most efficient offense in America under Will Stein over the last 3 years. Led the nation in EPA per play, yards per play, and successful play rate over those last 3 years. His offensive coordinator will be Joe Sloan, who was LSU's offensive coordinator for the last 2 years. His defensive coordinator is Jay Bateman, who was Texas A&M's defensive coordinator for the last 2 years as well. So Jay Bateman coming over to Kentucky, leaving A&M because, of course, Mike Elko is the defensive-minded head coach. Jay Bateman will be running Kentucky's defense really by himself this year. And kind of like Arkansas, Dalton, a team that completely remade itself in the transfer portal, adding 31 transfers, including 13 projected starters. And I don't know about you, Dalton, but I am so excited to see Will Stein, who has been, in my opinion, the best offensive coordinator for the last few years in college football, finally get a shot at being a head coach.
Yeah, I think it's kind of exciting when you look at this Kentucky program because for years and years, especially offensively, right, it's been such a grind. This is a team that prides itself on being physical and having a good offensive line, and you've seen really good running backs come out of there, right? You think about Chris Rodriguez and Ray Davis and Seth McGowan last year, and it's so predicated on the run game. And the question is always, well, can they throw the football? Can they create explosive plays through the air? Can we create a more exciting and more two-dimensional offense? And really, that's what Will Stein obviously always had at Oregon. Now there's more resources there at Oregon, and they get some elite players with elite speed, but he's going to try to build that with this Kentucky team, right? So it's a new crew, but I think the idea is to try to create this culture of, hey, we need to be a little more modern on offense. We need to be a little more explosive on offense, and we need to be more two-dimensional. Because even if you look at the season they had last year, right, they were 4-1 when they scored at least 24 points. So their defense is good enough to hold a lot of these SEC teams down, but 1-6 when they scored less than 24. And the quarterbacks really were the problem. They tried to bring in Zach Calzada. That didn't work. Cutter Boley, obviously replacing him a few games into the season. It was kind of up and down. There were good moments, but this is just a program that can't consistently find a great passing game. So if they can find that with Will Stein, whether it's Kenny Minchey and whoever else in the long term, it's going to have a different look to it. And I think that's the hope this time around with Stein and with Joe Sloan as the offensive coordinator. We need to get more two-dimensional. We need to get more explosive, and then we can really start to score on these SEC defenses more consistently.
Yeah, I think the biggest strength for Will Stein in his first year at head coach for his roster is the trenches, right? I love the trenches on both sides of the ball for Kentucky right now. 4 projected starters coming in on the offensive line from the portal, including our number 5 center in college football in Colton Price, transferring in from Baylor. Lance Hurd started at left tackle over the last 2 years for Tennessee. He was 9th in PFF grade last year in the SEC. Tashabola, I should say, starting right guard at Ohio State for the last 2 years. And the defensive line is really good too, Dalton. Like I was talking about just a second, and Tavion Gadsden, our number 10 D tackle in the country. Both starting edge rushers coming back as well in Sam Green and McQueese Humphrey Grace. Both of them were pretty solid last year too. And Jamarian Harkless transferred in from Purdue and was a starting D tackle at Purdue last year too. So offensive line and defensive line should be both pretty strong for Kentucky next year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this team has always prided itself on that. And Will Stein knows, even coaching at Oregon, look, you got to be really good on the offensive and defensive lines to keep up with the big boys in these big conferences, right? So I think it is smart for him to stabilize the offensive and defensive line, especially with all those transfers on the offensive line. Some really experienced guys. Price and Hurd, like you mentioned, should be the stars of it. But that's where everything starts. And then they've got a young group around it that's going to try to work, behind them and through in the run game. Obviously, need to be able to protect the young quarterback in Kenny Minchey. So really smart to build this team through the trenches. You got to like the direction that's going in.
What's the biggest question mark that you have for the Wildcats next year?
It's just everything about this backfield, right? So when you talk about quarterback and running back, right? And I'm going to do my best in a lot of these weaknesses to avoid quarterback as the biggest weakness, because we're going to have a separate segment about him. But I think it's worth mentioning here because Kenny Minchey, playing at Notre Dame, is a backup at Notre Dame the last couple of years, lost the competition last year to CJ Carr, third stringer 2 years ago behind Steve Angeli and Riley Leonard, only 32 career dropbacks, and that's all in mop-up duty, right? So, I mean, the biggest question on this entire team really is the quarterback, right? And Will Stein obviously worked with some great quarterbacks at Oregon. What he did with Dante Moore last year, just unbelievable work. And you look at now, okay, is he the whisperer? Is he going to turn Kenny Minchey into a solid SEC starter? And then I look at the guys next to him in the backfield. This team, and it's unusual for the Wildcats here, they got a lot of questions at running back too, right? CJ Baxter coming in from Texas, and we remember him having a really good freshman year in 2023, but torn ACL kept him out all of 2024. Still dealt with more injuries last year. He's only got 193 rushing yards over the past 2 seasons at Texas. CJ Baxter, a lot of talent. Obviously, wasn't he one of your former 5-star prospects, I think? So when you look at Baxter, I mean, there's all the talent in the world, but he's got to stay healthy. And then kind of the same story for Javante Barnes, right? So when you look at him, 2022, foot surgery, setbacks in 2023, had 577 yards in 2024, ankle injury. Last year, 4 games, and then an injury. So what does this backfield look like if it can even fully get on the field and for any extended stretch of the season? It sounds great. Kenny Minchey, CJ Baxter, Javante Barnes, we got a lot of talent back there, but Minchey's inexperience and the injury history, especially with the running backs, is a concern for me. And Will Stein is still going to want to run the football and take the pressure off of Minchey as a guy with so little experience.
Yeah, it's not even like we're saying that it's necessarily bad. We just don't know what it is yet, right? Because Kenny Minchey, like you said, very inexperienced quarterback so far. CJ Baxter was the number one running back, I believe, coming out of high school in his class, but like you said, been really banged up in his career so far. And Javante Barnes, same way, right? He's a really talented player, but he's also been banged up a lot, pretty much every single year of his career too. And Dalton's getting into now the quarterback, Kenny Minchey, is going to be Will Stein's first quarterback as a head coach. Again, not a lot of dropbacks to watch for you in this segment, but what did you make of Kenny Minchey when you watched the limited work he had at Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, from the very little that we've seen, I think he's got good enough all around tools, right? He's got a good arm. I don't think it's an A plus rocket of an arm, but he's got a good arm. He's got decent athleticism. When you talk about being a factor, say in a read option game, I think he could take anywhere from 5 to 7 carries a game and have a little bit of an impact with his legs. So he's got some athletic ability, right? Spottier on the ball placement. I think his mechanics and his delivery kind of make the ball placement a little bit closer to average than great, right? And he's pretty quick to leave the pocket instead of seeing things through to his second and third read, but that just kind of comes with the inexperience, right? So how much of that can we work out in practice as the established starter and early in the season, maybe in a couple of those easier games like you mentioned? But I think with Minchey, it just comes down to, look, this is in theory, a solid football player to work with. Obviously, 3 years as Notre Dame's backup, the last couple in Mike Denbrock's offense. We'll see. I mean, it really is. He's one of the most wait and see quarterbacks in the country, really. Because I mean, even the reps that you see, it's when Notre Dame's up like 35-0 or whatever in the fourth quarter last year. So not a whole lot to work with as far as the tape, and zero career starts. Again, 32 career dropbacks. He looks like he can be a solid all around player, but we got to see him get the experience.
Yeah, definitely. I remember there's a lot of Notre Dame fans really excited about him. And when he entered the portal, I know a lot of people ranked him as one of the top quarterbacks in the portal. You and I are always a little more hesitant on him and pump the brakes on him a little bit more because we just haven't seen enough out of him yet. But he's a very talented kid. And, you know, you look at what Will Stein has done with previous quarterbacks as offensive coordinator, whether it be Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel or Dante Moore, all have had pretty insane success under Will Stein. All of them going on to be at least first or second or third round picks in the NFL draft. Dante Moore most likely going to be that as well. So we'll see if Kenny Minchey can reach that ceiling. But he's got a great head coach and Will Stein helping him out at quarterback as well. And also Dalton, a great guy who's taking snaps from in Colton Price, who's our star offensive player here for Kentucky at center. Transferred in from Baylor. He's a redshirt senior, our number 5 center in the country, 6'3", 318 pounds. He has played at least 400 snaps in 3 straight years. Last year, top 15 in the country in both pass blocking grade and run blocking grade from PFF. Only 7 pressures allowed on over 480 pass blocking snaps, and the 8th best pass block efficiency score in the nation as well. So a great pass blocker and a really, really good run blocker as well. And like I said before, Dalton, the strength of this Kentucky offense is easily their offensive line, and a major reason why is a top 5 center in the country in Colton Price.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, when you have a guy like Price, you have a guy like Lance Hurd at left tackle, it gives you a real chance to compete with the better teams in the SEC. You've got to be stable in the trenches, especially when there's so much at stake with these running backs, with this quarterback trying to really feel his way through games right now, because so much of what we're going to watch with Kentucky, especially early in the season, is just the development of Kenny Minchey. Right now, if you have a stable offensive line with a top 5 center and a really good left tackle and really a solid unit, experienced unit all the way around, that gives them a chance, right? That's the one thing you want to do, is give your young quarterback a chance. And if they do that for Minchey, you get him clean looks, you get him looks in this offense that is so good at creating explosive plays as we've seen in the past, then you really start to get a chance to win ball games and everything comes together. But having a guy like Price leading the way, a veteran center like that who can set protections and do all of the little things to take things off of the quarterback's plate, that's big time to have that in the middle there.
Let's talk about a guy, Dalton, who'll be going up against a lot in practice this year. Our number 10 defensive tackle in the nation right now, in Tavion Gadsden.
This is a guy who we haven't seen a ton of, but when you look at the potential of Tavion Gadsden as a guy who's 6'5", 303 pounds, and led all Power 4 defensive tackles in pass rush win rate last year, this is somebody who really could explode this year in a more full-time role. Only played 345 snaps last year, but kind of like we talked about with Quincy Rhodes in Arkansas earlier, the length and the power absolutely play. When he gets extended, you have a real problem on your hands, and his quickness, his first step quickness off the ball to shoot gaps too, is really, really good. This is one of the guy who could really really break out as a pass rusher if he just gets a bigger workload this year. And I think they need to make him really the key of their entire defense, right? He's got so much talent. He's got a great build. And I just think the two things that would say, okay, let's see a little bit more. One, the small sample size, and two, standing at 6'5", plays with high pad level a little bit, especially in the run game, right? If he can keep the pad level down, and it feels like we say this with, we said this for a couple of years with Deion Walker coming out of Kentucky too, where it was like, man, this guy's he's got everything you could want. Just get the shoulder pads down a little bit. So Tavion Gadsden in there in the middle, he's a guy who can really move around the line of scrimmage. He's got big time pass rush potential, as we saw last year. Let's see it over a course of 500 or 550 snaps now this year, and he could be the key to their whole defense.
Yeah, again, top 10 D tackle in the country. You stole the words right out of my mouth, though. I was going to say it's a lot like Deion Walker. Not quite as massive as Deion Walker was, 330, 340 pounds when he was playing at Kentucky. He's only 300 pounds, but very tall player like Deion Walker with great length and quickness like Deion Walker, too. And, I mean, Deion Walker had a really good rookie year, I would say, for the Buffalo Bills last year. I could see Tavion Gadsden being a similar type of pass rusher in the NFL too. So I'm really excited to see what Tavion Gadsden could do on hopefully a bigger workload, because you're right. He was number 10 in our D tackles list going into the year. If he had a heavier snap count and maintained that kind of efficiency, he could have been top 5 really on that list, the way he was rushing the passer last year. Just got to see a little bit more of a workload for Tavion Gadsden this year. But this guy has a very, very high ceiling at defensive tackle right now. All right, Joel, let's get to the bottom line for the Kentucky Wildcats in their first year under Will Stein as head coach. What is the minimum record that you would expect for Kentucky this year? And what do you think is the absolute ceiling for the Wildcats this year, too?
Another team here with a very, very tough schedule, right? If you're in the bottom half of the SEC, you're looking up a lot. I mean, you look at games against Alabama and Texas A&M and LSU and Oklahoma. I mean, you've got playoff contenders left and right. Louisville as the yearly out-of-conference game, obviously, at the end of the year, too. So, I mean, the minimum, you have 2 games they absolutely should win against Youngstown State and South Alabama. Obviously, some 50-50 games in there. Vandy, you never know what happens in that rivalry with Louisville. We'll see what Florida looks like with a new coach. South Carolina's on their schedule. So some 50-50. If they can put this team together and the backfield, that's the big one to me. If the backfield is stable, quarterback and running back for this team, they can compete with a lot of these teams. I think their defense is good enough to do it. They're good enough in the trenches to do it. But what's the difference here between competing and winning? It's really making big plays with the football, and they're going to need that out of their quarterback and these 2 running backs to stay healthy, right? So to me, I think, again, in his first year as a head coach, a bowl game would be the goal. If they were to go 6-6 or 7-5, a lot like Arkansas, then you're talking about, I think that's a really successful year and something to build off of. I think they're going to fall short of that, especially with their schedule and being at a quarterback disadvantage most weeks, but we'll see. It's all really just going to depend on Kenny Minchie's development and if those running backs can stay healthy.
Yeah, again, minimum here, and I don't think they're going to hit this minimum, but I mean, in terms of they're going to go higher than it, but I think minimum is 2-10, right? Like Arkansas too, because you mentioned before, Youngstown State and South Alabama, they should win those games. And then after that, you got a lot of 50-50 games, right? At South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Florida, the rivalry game with Louisville, even I would throw in the Missouri and Tennessee games, even though they are on the road too. But yeah, I think maximum I could see, like you said, Dalton, 6-6 or 7-5 for Will Stein. So I'm a huge fan of Will Stein as a head coach, but I think it'll take him some time to build up this program right now. So we'll see what he could do in his first year at Kentucky. But yeah, around 7-5, 6-6 is the ceiling, I think, and minimum is 2-10. But I think they're going to go better than 2-10. I would expect a better year than that. But making a bowl game, I think, would be a successful year for Kentucky this year. So that was number 15 for us in the SEC. At number 14 now, Dalton, for us in the SEC is the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who really showed some improvement in year 2 under Jeff Lebby as a head coach. They went 2-10 in 2024. They went 5-8 last year and made their first bowl game in 3 years, losing to Wake Forest in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. They brought back defensive coordinator Zach Arnett, who was a defensive coordinator at Mississippi State for 3 years under Mike Leach and was actually the head coach for 1 year after Mike Leach unfortunately passed away. The Bulldogs had a top 20 defense in the Power 4 during the 4 years with Zach Arnett calling the shots, and Jeff Lebby remains the play caller on offense without an offensive coordinator there too. But yeah, I'm really excited to see Zach Arnett, former Mississippi State head coach, return to the program as defensive coordinator, because they had a great defense under Zach Arnett when Mike Leach was the head coach. And Zach Arnett's got a lot of talent to work with, Don, namely a potential first-round pick and a top-5 corner in the country in Kelly Jones on that side of the ball. 3 transfers coming in the secondary. There are some question marks up front on the defensive line, and the offense has a lot of question marks up front and in the receiving core. But Kamario Taylor's a really exciting talent at quarterback, and they have a very solid running back, too, to help him out in Fluff Bothwell.
Yeah, it was such an interesting year they had last year, starting 4-0, big win over Arizona State, a big dramatic win over Arizona State. And then it just kind of fell apart on them, especially a couple of close games against Tennessee, against Florida. They took Texas to the wire, right? And then it just felt like the defense kind of caved in from there. So they got to become a more balanced football team, right? I think Kamario Taylor has got a ton of potential at quarterback, just got to clean up some things. But we saw him even in a Wildcat role and in a couple of starts later in the year, looked really good. I thought even in the loss to Ole Miss, I thought there was a lot of big time moments in there. So Kamario Taylor really is going to be at the center of it. And then up front on defense, they've got to be a lot better. Like you mentioned, we'll talk about it. There's potential in the secondary with Kelly Jones and those guys. And this is a defense that's kind of built from the back end forward, but they've got to be better up front. The run defense has to be better. If they can just keep themselves in games on defense, we know Jeff Levy's offense is very fast paced. He's going to allow the quarterback to really dictate the tempo of the game. And they're going to be in a lot of high scoring games, but got to be able to get stops in the midst of that, right? So if they can become a little bit more balanced with a little more dynamic quarterback full time here in Kamario, they do have a shot to win some more football games and really finish the year the way that they wanted to last year.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm really excited, Dalton, for the secondary, honestly, for Zach Arnett on that defense side of the ball. I mentioned before Kelly Jones, talk about later on in this episode, top 5 corner in the country, maybe a first-round pick. Isaac Smith has been a starting safety in each of the last 2 years. He was very, very solid in coverage last year for Mississippi State. Quentin Taylor played 400 snaps last year at Iowa State as a redshirt freshman, very solid at corner too. Marcus Williams, one of the best run defending safeties you'll find in the country, coming in from Rice. Jordan Gilbert was a starter at 2 different SEC schools in LSU and Texas A&M at one point. Kendall Dolby was a starting slot corner for Oklahoma at one point. Braylon Womack entering his true freshman year, top 50 recruit in the country as a safety right now too. So even outside of Kelly Jones, a superstar corner, you've got a lot of experience in the secondary and a lot of talent really right now, Dalton, in the secondary too.
Definitely. I mean, this is a group that's built from the back end forward. And when you have a headliner like Kelly Jones and then a lot of other talented players like that in your back 5 back there, you do stand a chance at least at not giving up so many explosive plays, right? I think when you look at the perimeter of this football team, really on both sides of the ball, there's a lot of really good athletes, right? And I think this secondary is the best example of it. You mentioned some of the guys that they've brought in, talented guys. It's really built around Kelly Jones and his ability to lock down one side of the field. But this is a secondary that actually is going to cause a lot of SEC quarterbacks some problems this year.
What's your biggest question mark right now for the Bulldogs?
It's the trenches on both sides of the ball. This is just one of those teams that you've got, I've said it before, you've got to be able to compete in the trenches in this conference, right? They lost 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen this past year. When you look at this offensive line, their left tackle, the projected left tackle for now, Jakeem Shumpert Perkins, 12 career snaps, right? You're going to get DJ Chester in there from LSU, a really rough couple of years there at LSU on an offensive line that didn't play all that well, right? You're getting Blake Steen back at right tackle, who transferred in from Virginia last year and then suffered a season-ending injury in week 1. He's a solid player when healthy, but now he's coming off of a season-ending injury. We got to see him come back after basically an entire year off. That's the offensive line with a lot of question marks. And then on the defensive line, they basically got no pass rush last year. There was nobody who got 3 sacks, and they didn't add a ton. They got Dalen Evans in from Texas A&M. You got Amari Williams in from Florida State. They're hoping a healthier Will Whitson this year, who didn't play at all last year, can add to the pass rush. But that would be a concern for me. For as good as their secondary is there going to be too much heat on them again because they're just not getting to quarterbacks. This team was one of the worst pass rushing teams in the league last year. I would worry about both their ability to pass protect and to rush the opposing passer. They need to surprise us in the trenches so they could have a big problem in a lot of matchups.
Yeah, exactly. I don't care how good your secondary is. If you're, holding the ball back there for 3 or 4 seconds, somebody's going to get open, right? So you need to have a better performance from your pass rush this year, and also you need a better performance from your offensive line with a lot of new starters on that offensive line right now, especially because, Dalton, they have a brand new quarterback, a really exciting one though, in Kamario Taylor, who showed a lot of exciting things as a backup, as a true freshman, was a highly rated recruit coming out of high school. I believe a top 10 quarterback coming out of high school a couple of years ago. He now enters his first year as the starting quarterback for Jeff Lebby.
Yeah, this is an A-level athlete. When you talk about a guy, if you want to make your quarterback the entire gravity, the center of your offense as a dual threat, Kamario Taylor is the guy that you want. He's got A-level arm strength. The deep ball comes very naturally to him, and his elusiveness as a runner is just outstanding. Think about this, Max. Only 74 carries last year. 498 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns, 28 missed tackles forced. I'm excluding sacks there because that's the right way to do it. I mean, when you look at what he can add in this tempo with Fluff Bothwell next to him in the backfield, he can create so many explosive plays with his legs in the option game, as a scrambler in the design game. You saw Lebby already putting packages in for him last year as a true freshman in these Wildcat formations. And now he's just got to work on the little things when it comes to playing quarterback, right? Takes a little bit too long in the pocket, right? He's so used to being the best athlete on the field. And sometimes you're not. Sometimes you got to speed that up and get the football distributed where it needs to go, right? The strength to me is as a deep passer and a guy who can create vertical throws down the field. In Jeff Lebby's offense, that's exactly what they want to do. But you can't always do that against every opponent. If he improves the accuracy, this could be one of the breakout players in the SEC because he's an absolutely dynamic athlete with a big-time arm. He's just got to clean up the process a little bit, right? The footwork's got to get better. The accuracy's got to get better, especially underneath. But all the potential in the world. He's got as much potential as any quarterback in the SEC.
Yeah, I've heard the Anthony Richardson comparisons coming out of high school because of how physically talented he is. And when you watch him, man, he is extremely, extremely physically talented, both as a runner and as a passer. So I cannot wait to see Jeff Lebby incorporate him into the offense a lot more this year. He played a good amount last year as a backup, but now as a full-time starter, really cannot wait to see if he can live up to the top 10 quarterback at a high school hype that he had a couple of years ago. Helping him out, though, in that backfield, Dalton, is Fluff Bothwell, who's a really good star running back for Mississippi State right now. Now he's a true junior. He missed 2 games last year with a lower leg injury, but he was fantastic as a true freshman the year before at South Alabama. I actually believe he was the guy that we did in our Mississippi State preview last year for our star offensive player. Bowling ball frame, 5'10", 230 pounds. He had almost 700 rushing yards this past season with 6 touchdowns and over 100 receiving yards, 10th most explosive runs in the SEC, 11th most yards after contact in the SEC with over 400 of them. And really, that kind of build is really great in a gap scheme right now. He's a good downhill physical runner. He has averaged 5.6 yards on gap scheme runs last year and a 95 PFF grade on gap scheme runs in his career, which is outrageous too. He runs very, very hard through contact. He won't really shake too many defenders, but he will lower his shoulder and inflict pain on them. Really kind of a lot like Braylon Russell, who just talked about earlier in the show. He brings physicality as a blocker too, which I love seeing too. It's not just when he has the ball in his hands where he's looking to inflict pain on defenders. There were a few times where Kamario Taylor was running in a touchdown, Dalton, and Fluff Bothwell was a leading blocker out there and pancaking somebody in the end zone too. So love to see that from your running back. Not the most explosive player overall as an athlete, which is to be expected for a guy his size. And he's had kind of a serious issue with drops in his career as well as a receiver. But I'm hoping for a fully healthy year. He actually kind of had like a scary leg injury last year. Fortunately, it was not as bad as it looked for Fluff Bothwell. But if he is fully healthy, he and Kamario Taylor could form a very, very dangerous and a very, very physical rushing attack for Mississippi State next year.
Yeah, I agree. They complement each other so well when you think about Bothwell and the physicality between the tackles. And this team was actually a lot better running off tackle last year than they were between the tackles because of their offensive line. But if they can open up some lanes between the tackles for Bothwell to work, that's really going to help them stay on schedule. And then the threat of Taylor in the backfield full time instead of having a guy who was pretty immobile in Blake Shapen last year, I think that's going to really help space out these front sevens that this team is going against. So I think the complementary bit of his power and Taylor's speed in the backfield, that's going to be a real problem, especially if Lebby can get him in a rhythm, get that first down of every drive, and then get the up tempo going, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to play like one of the fastest offenses in the country, and those two guys in the backfield could really set that pace in the run game, especially on that very first and 10.
Don, tell me more about the star overall player from Mississippi State, a top 5 corner in the country, projected first-round pick in the NFL draft right now, really a freak athlete, and cornerback Kelly Jones.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The word is freak. I mean, 6'4", 195 pounds, pretty fluid mover. The length in his strides are just ridiculous when he really needs to turn and run and cover ground. And I'll tell you right now, you are not getting vertical on this guy. So often, especially in college, quarterbacks are taught, okay, you see somebody in press coverage against a guy on your side that you like. All right, go get him. Don't go get him with Kelly Jones. That's not going to work. He's just so overwhelming, especially when he's in press man. And really, the entire coverage scheme, at least last year for this team, was dictated through Kelly Jones' ability to just shut down one guy. If you're going to beat him, you better move his man around the formation. You better get him moving horizontally, because you are not just going to line up and throw go balls on him. It's not going to happen. And I've told you before, I said it last time here when we did our all SEC team, but one of my favorite stats, maybe my favorite stat of this entire offseason, 11 catches allowed last year and 11 forced incompletions, also had 2 interceptions. So, I mean, the advice would be, and I think this is why it's really fun for Mississippi State that they added so much talent around Jones. The first thing I would say when I'm playing Mississippi State is you probably just shouldn't test him. It's probably not going to be worth your time. But there's a lot of other talented players in that secondary too. So you might have to get a little bit creative, or you're just going to have to run the football really well, because this guy's a freak. The frame and the speed is going to get him drafted very high. The technique is getting better. You could see it by the week last year. Maybe get a little bit better with the footwork and some off-zone coverage, but he's got everything you could want in a quarterback, and he was lights out last year.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Notre Dame thing where it was like, don't test Leonard Moore, but it's like, okay, then who else are you going to throw out right now? No, I don't think Mississippi State's secondary is nearly as good as Notre Dame's secondary right now, but Kelly Jones is a superstar, man. And like I said, could be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. You don't really find guys with that kind of length and height and that kind of speed too often. And also, he was absolutely dominant last year at Mississippi State. Only 11 catches allowed and almost 40 targets last year is an outrageous number in the SEC. So yeah, definitely watch out for him, because he is pretty easily the best player on Mississippi State's roster right now. All right, Dalton, bottom line time now for Mississippi State in year 3 under Jeff Lebby. What's the floor for this team? What's the ceiling for the Bulldogs going into next year?
I mean, the absolute floor, because I mean, they're just better than this, is 2-10. You look at 2 pretty easily winnable games against Louisiana Monroe and Tennessee Tech. And then you go, there's a lot of in between games. And look, they played a lot of close games with a lot of very good teams last year. Again, Tennessee and Florida and Texas and Ole Miss, even they gave them a run early on before Ole Miss kind of took over. Trinidad Chambliss took that game over. But you look at the talent on this team. I think now we get into the tier of the SEC where you go, Mississippi State's expectations now should be to make another bowl game. They made a bowl game at 5-7 last year with all the APR rules and all that stuff. But this time it should be, hey, we got to be at least 500. We got to try to have a winning season here. And you look at some of the more even games on their schedule, right? They're at Minnesota, so I think that's going to be pretty 50-50. Minnesota's obviously a pretty good football team, but it's not out of reach, right? They're at South Carolina, tough road game, but South Carolina only won 4 games last year, right? Vanderbilt, we're expecting a little bit of a drop off. Auburn is rebuilding. Missouri trying to figure out some things, at quarterback especially. So there are winnable games, and you know what I always say about those. There are winnable games on this schedule, but I do think Jeff Lebby should expect this team, especially if his quarterback develops. I mean, I know it's so often about the quarterback, but when you're looking at Kamario Taylor and his talent, he's got the arm and the legs with the talent eventually to take over. He can completely take over football games, right? He is a dangerous, dangerous athlete that you have to game plan so much just for him, let alone all the other guys they brought in. You've got Fluff in the backfield. I really like the addition of Marquise Johnson at wide receiver, Aiden Williams and Anthony Evans back at wide receiver. Like, this team has enough talent to have a winning season. No question about it, right? And this is why they're ranked a little bit higher than a couple other teams behind them here, but it's going to be about their quarterback, and the bowl game really is, I think, more so than like, okay, a bowl game would be wildly successful. I think they should expect it, right? I think somewhere in that 5-7 range is probably about right, but there's some games, there's going to be some competitive games that they've got to come through late in these football games in a way that they didn't last year.
Yeah, bare minimum is 2-10, because they have 2 games, like you said, that they absolutely should win in Louisiana Monroe and Tennessee Tech, but they're going to be better than that. I do think that too. I think the absolute maximum, now that I'm looking at it again, maybe 7-5. I think as you look at a schedule, I mean, you got at Texas, at Ole Miss, at LSU, and we'll get to those teams a lot later in our preview right now. Alabama, you got at home too. Oklahoma, you got at home. So like, I think those are 5 games, and I'm like, okay, I really would be pretty surprised if they won that game. But I do think 7-5 is possible for Mississippi State next year. Now we'll see if I predict 7-5 in tomorrow's episode. But yeah, I think somewhere between 3 or 4 wins and 7 wins is probably the expectation I would have for Mississippi State in 2026 right now. So it'll
I
be
think
interesting.
that the sneaky one there that you mentioned, home against Alabama, because we're not exactly sure on a lot of parts of their team what Alabama's going to look like. We'll talk about that later, but I think that could be the sneaky one. Maybe if I was looking at like, okay, where does a Mississippi State pull off a big upset? Alabama's they've always had issues with mobile quarterbacks, right? The last couple of years. And again, there's so much that Camario himself is the X factor. Because if he hits his potential as a top 10 recruited quarterback and this dual threat freak and everything he can do, a lot of the nature of these games change, right? So I think when you have a quarterback with this type of potential, it is very exciting, especially going into his first full-time year as a starter. Mississippi State's an interesting one. I think especially going into that building for some of these teams, Alabama, Oklahoma, Missouri, Auburn, some of these teams going into that building, they get the momentum going in Jeff Levy's offense. There is some potential here.
Definitely. Shout out to our guy Harbs in the chat saying first time in a long time, about to drive from Pittsburgh to home. So he's going to be listening right now. We'll get to your Florida Gators later on in the show, Harbs. We're going in reverse order of our SEC rankings right now. Yeah, shout out Harbs in the chat right now. So let's get to the next team on our list here. That is Vanderbilt, who is coming off an unbelievable season this past year. And really, 2024 was a great year for them, too. They went 7-6 that year. It was their first winning season since James Franklin's final year at Vanderbilt in 2013. But even that 7-6 record was a mere appetizer for what was to come in 2025. They were 10-3 this past season, and they finished number 15 in the final AP poll. It was the best year for Vanderbilt football since 1948, which was the only other year in school history where they finished in the top 15 of the AP poll. So 1948 was the last time that, over 70 years ago, was the last time, almost 80 years ago, really, was the last time Vanderbilt was that good. Diego Pavia finished in second place for the Heisman Trophy, highest finish for a Vanderbilt player ever. Eli Stowers won the school's first ever John Mackey Award as the best tight end in college football, the most efficient offense in the Power Four in terms of EPA per play. We talked about it earlier in our all SEC team, but Tim Beck is back at offensive coordinator for his third season right now. I would argue right now the best offensive coordinator in the SEC, one of the best offensive coordinators in college football. Steve Gregory is back at defensive coordinator for his second year, too, with Clark Lee at head coach helping him out. And they also don't listen. You lost Diego Pavia, the best quarterback in Vanderbilt history, but you did flip Jared Curtis from Georgia. He's a Nashville native, number 2 quarterback coming out of high school, number 3 overall player coming out of high school, and he's also Dalton, the first 5-star recruit in Vanderbilt history. So we'll talk about him later on because he's probably going to start immediately as a true freshman. But even though you lost an absolute superstar in Diego Pavia, a lot of exciting stuff for Vanderbilt with Jared Curtis coming in too.
No, absolutely. I think the biggest thing, and obviously Pavia was the leader of it, and Eli Stowers, and obviously Tim Beck and Jerry Kill and everybody coming over from New Mexico State, what they showed and what you want to show, especially in this era of college football, is that it's possible, right? Like it never felt possible that Vanderbilt in this current world of the SEC could win 10 games. And now I think that's what they've shown. Now, will it happen this year or every year necessarily? No, but Clark Lee has such a great idea now of what he's trying to build, the vision that he's trying to build. And last year they were a legitimate playoff contender, right? So he can look to his football team and a lot of guys who've really grinded through the past year or two and go, hey, listen, it's right in front of us. We just got to go out there and play well enough, and we're playing in big games in the SEC every single week. That belief, that's what you want. I mean, that's the type of belief that gets you a top 3 QB in the country in high school in Jared Curtis, right? And trying to keep this thing sustainable and put the resources and the money into it, right? And having a season like that, it has such long-term ramifications, as long as you don't just go back and crash and win 2 games the next year right away, right? So I think when you look at the talent on this team, still a good amount of it. Obviously, you lost the leaders in Pavia and Stowers, but there's still a roadmap here to winning ball games, especially if they have a young quarterback who can develop very, very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much lesser extent, Dalton. It's really like the Indiana of the SEC last year, where it was like a program that historically was horrendous in college football, and all of a sudden rattles off a 10-win season in this new age of college football too. So it is possible for programs like Indiana and Vanderbilt to turn them around. Hopefully it happens for my Syracuse Orange sooner rather than later, even though Syracuse has pretty good years too. But it is possible in this new age of college football to be really as good as Vanderbilt has been. Maybe not Indiana good, but Vanderbilt good is possible right now. We'll see what Clark Lee can do in another year at head coach. And really, Dalton, my biggest strength is in offense, it still has a lot of potential because I know you lose Diego Pavi and you lose Eli Stowers. That certainly hurts. Those are two mega stars at Vanderbilt over the last couple of years. But there's still a lot to like, I think, in this offense right now. It starts with Jared Curtis, the number 2 quarterback out of high school, top 3 player overall. He has gotten Matthew Stafford comparisons coming out of high school. Both of your top 2 running backs are back as well in Cedric Alexander and McKylan Young. Junior Sherrill, Donnie's guy in the chat right now, he's back. We'll talk about him later on, too. He was second on the team in receiving yards last year with almost 800 of them. Cole Spence, very good tight end, too, last year for Vanderbilt. Could become one of the better tight ends now as a starter for the Commodores. Ja'Cory Thomas is a big weapon at 6'3", 11th on the team last year. 11th in the Sun Belt last year in receiving yards. Tim Beck, mentioned before, one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. And yeah, you did lose 4 starters on the offensive line, but also, Dalton, the offensive line last year was really bad, and they still had the best offense in the Power 4. So they overcame a not great offensive line last year and still had the most efficient offense in the Power 4. And I know you lost Diego Pavi and Eli Stowers, but your starting running backs are back. You got a really good wide receiver in Junior Sherrill, and also a very, very exciting quarterback in Jared Curtis, too.
Yeah, this year is going to be a lot about the development of Curtis, and I'm curious to see what this offense looks like now, because last year they made improvements in the more traditional passing game as Pavia improved, things like throwing over the middle of the field and just the drop back game. Now you have a quarterback in Jared Curtis who is not going to run nearly as much as Pavia, I don't think, right? You're not going to get as many design quarterback runs as Pavia. So what does Tim Beck continue to do to adjust this offense to his players? Because that's always an element of play calling, especially that you have to go, okay, this is what I have to work with. These are the parts of the playbook that I can go with to really optimize this offense again. But so much of it is about Curtis. We'll see what the run game looks like. The offensive line, I thought they got a really big piece at center in Lyndon Cooper from Pittsburgh. I think that's a big addition to their line, especially with the way they have to operate, and they're switching guards and tackles and trying to make different reads on every single play, especially in the run game. But yeah, you have Cedric Alexander, you have Junior Sherrill, you have Cole Spence, who could take another step this year as the number 1 tight end. There is still a lot of potential for this offense, but like so many teams, it's going to be built around the quarterback, Jared Curtis.
And I think the biggest question mark, which has been the question mark for Vanderbilt really over the last decade, it feels like, will this defense be any better? It took a step forward, I think, last year, but this defense has got to be better to help out the offense a little bit more, especially without Diego Pavia really carrying the team anymore.
Yeah, they've got names, though. They've got experience. This is a team last year that I think in a lot of moments you could call an average defense. It's kind of that rule like I talked about with Mississippi State, where it's like, can you get stops when you absolutely need to? I think there was a lot of times that they were able to do that. Couple of games where, it got away from them early against Texas. There was a couple of moments where they struggled against Alabama. But you look at some of the names coming back. Miles Capers at defensive end, their best pass rusher. Brian Longwell at middle linebacker, really the leader of this defense. Jordan Matthews and Martell Height at corner, CJ Hurd and Ricardo Jones here at safety. Like, I think this defense has a potential to be even better than they were last season and really kind of even out this team. So if they're not, say a top 5 offense in the country this year, okay, this defense won't be, outside the top 80. Maybe they can get up into the 50s and 60s and really be a unit that can get more stops when they need them to, and keep this offense within range. Because there's going to be bumps in the road with a true freshman starting quarterback, we're assuming, right? But if you don't ask them to score 35 every single week, right? If you can get your team to a point where you go, hey, if we score 28, we're gonna win just about every game. If you can do that against the really good teams, this is a very experienced defense that I think still has another year of improvement in it.
Yeah, definitely. Listen, they were 88th last year in EPA per play, so still below average. But that was the first time in 7 years where they were top 100 in the EPA per play. So it was a step forward for Steve Gregory, who was promoted to defensive coordinator last year. I think you need another step forward this year from Vanderbilt on that side of the ball, too, because you don't have Diego Pavia, like I said, to carry this team to victories anymore. Speaking of quarterback, though, Dalton, let's talk about Jared Curtis, who's probably the only true freshman that we're going to be breaking down in these team preview series. We think he will be the starting quarterback day 1 for Vanderbilt. And like I said, one of the highest rated quarterbacks, the second highest rated quarterback coming out of high school and a top 3 player overall. Matthew Stafford comps before, and he's a very, very exciting and hometown kid starting at Vanderbilt next year, too.
Yeah, I think those comps make some sense when you look at the way that he moves and the way he throws the football, right? Really good build already at 6'3", listed at 225 pounds. And what he has that, only really the special ones have is just that loose, kind of easy going, a kind of whiplash that delivery that just the ball all of a sudden just flies out of his hand, kind of like Stafford. Mahomes has that a little bit too, with kind of that baseball release, right? But when you talk about this kid as an athlete, he's a very solid athlete, throwing on the move and the arm angles that he can give you when rolling, especially to his right and even back across. You're going to see probably a handful of throws this year when he's improvising where you're like, man, like Diego Pavia didn't even have those in him, right? He was kind of creating with his legs and getting the ball where it needs. But this kid's got just such a natural, loose arm that you feel like, man, he can make any throw on the field as long as we create it for him. You look at his high school career: 128 passing touchdowns, 25 picks, 49 rushing touchdowns. So certainly, I don't think again that he's going to be a factor as much in the design run game as Pavia was, but he can scramble, he can throw on the move, he can improvise a little bit, and I think he's going to be able to win in the pocket within the next 3 years, maybe even more than Pavia did. They've just got to build it right around him and protect him with this offensive line. But there's a ton of potential here, and you can absolutely see what the scouts are seeing in this kid, because there's just not that many that come out every year with arm action like this and guys who can throw the football this easily.
Yeah, I mean, his huddle tape, I highly encourage people to go watch it right now. His huddle tape is outrageous, right? The arm that he has, the throws that he can make off platform are some of the best that I've seen come out of high school in a very long time, honestly. So I cannot wait to see what he does at Vanderbilt this year as a starting quarterback. Of course, he won't be as dominant probably immediately as he was in high school, but very, very talented kid. I'm really excited to see what he could do immediately as a true freshman. Probably, at least as of right now, the only Power Four true freshman quarterback that we should have going into next year. And Dalton, a guy that he's going to be loved to throw to, is Junior Sherrill at wide receiver. Who Donnie, who in the chat right now, Donnie was texting me about Junior Sherrill earlier. Dalton saying, "Hey, I think this guy's really underrated. It could be potentially a first round pick in the NFL draft, man." And I mean, I kind of get it, dude. Like, and I watch his tape. He's a really talented player right now. He's a senior, 5'11", 200 pounds. He had almost 800 yards last year, 775 to be exact, 15th most in the SEC. 132 passer rating when targeted. That was sixth best in the SEC. He plays a lot bigger than his 5'11 size would indicate. He caught 7 of his 14 contested targets last year. Very shifty player, which works as both a route runner because he gets a lot of separation as a route runner, and also after the catch, he's really, really good too. He broke 10 tackles after the catch too. So our guy Donnie's a big fan of this guy, Dalton, and Junior Sherrill, and I could totally see why, man. He's a very, very fun player to watch on tape, and he should be the number one target for Jared Curtis next year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially after losing Trey Richardson in the portal to Louisville, Sherrill's going to play an even bigger role in this offense this year. You mentioned it. He gives you a little bit of everything. He gives you the toughness. He gives you the quickness. He gives you the route running. So if he can find that, if Jared Curtis can find that rapport with Sherrill early on this season, as well as Cole Spence there at tight end, this passing game still has a lot of potential.
Definitely. Who's the star defensive player that you want to shout out here for Vanderbilt?
There are several good candidates, right? Because there's some darn good football players on this defense who are all about the same level. But let me, just because I'm wearing the hat right now, let me go with the guy who transferred in from Florida Atlantic last year and really played well for this team at safety. Had a little bit of a low in the middle of the season, but hot start and then hot finish really once he figured out himself at SEC play. CJ Hurd back there at safety. This guy who does a little bit of everything for this defense. He can play back free. He can play up in the box. He can play in the slot if you need him to. It's kind of, the more we're seeing these positionless safeties kind of come into play here, I think he's becoming one of them for this defense. 66 total tackles, 25 stops last year, 10 pressures, and a sack. And I think he's just going to be a really good complement, especially bringing in Ricardo Jones last year, or this year, I should say, who had 6 interceptions last year at Clemson. I think it's going to be a really complementary nature with this safety room, with Hurd kind of down in the box more and Jones playing back free and picking the football off. You should really keep an eye on a very experienced and talented Vanderbilt secondary all around, but the enforcer of this group is former FAU Owl CJ Hurd.
Yeah, definitely. He's a really fun player to watch on tape, and you're right. That secondary is actually pretty solid at Vanderbilt next year, so I'm excited to see what they could do next year on that side of the ball. Dalton, what's the floor for Vanderbilt? Are they going to crash back down without Diego Pavia back to what we expect for Vanderbilt football? What's the ceiling for this team? Can they be as good, if not better, than this past year's team at Vanderbilt too? What is the expectation and kind of the floor and ceiling do you think for Vanderbilt right now?
It's so interesting because they do still have a good football team. And actually, the more, when we were preparing for this, the more I was looking at this defense, I was like, this should be a good defense this year, right? And they were obviously in so many high scoring games last year, and they're still trying to figure things out, especially in the trenches. But I think their defense can keep them in a lot of games, right? I don't think they're going to have the year that they had last year, obviously. But I think when you talk about Clark Lee setting a new standard, the floor should be about 4 or 5 wins. Obviously, a couple of easier games against Austin P and Delaware. They're playing Arkansas, they're playing Kentucky. We have Vandy ranked ahead of those two teams, but you got to go out there and win the games, right? And then there's just they get a lot of these tweener games, right? That, some teams we don't know what necessarily to expect. NC State, always solid, but it's at Vandy, and we don't know necessarily what Vandy's going to be yet. Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, even Tennessee in the rivalry game, their quarterback situation is up in the air. We'll get to that in a little bit. So I don't think they're winning 10 games again. I think anywhere from 4 to 5 to maybe 7 or 8. I think in that middle of the road, that's where they could be building. And I think if they do that, and let's say they go even 7-5 with a true freshman quarterback, I don't think that's a bad season, right? You can build off of that. And as long as you get to keep them from, getting in the transfer portal next off season, then you really have something to build. And it's something that a lot of other players in the portal and on the recruiting trail can go, hey, they've got this kid. They're still pretty good. They weren't just a 2-year flash in the pan. Now is the year that maybe they won't contend for an SEC title, but you have to make this sustainable. If they have another just solid 6 to 8 winning season in here, I think it becomes sustainable, and now you're really building around your young quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you have year 2 or year 3 of Jared Curtis, hopefully, and all of a sudden, if you're this good already, you still got more talented players to surround Jared Curtis with, then you could be just as good as the past 2 teams have been at Vanderbilt. I'm with you. I think the floor I think is 4-8. I think 4-8 is the worst case scenario for Vanderbilt this year. I think they should beat Austin P. They should beat Delaware. They have Arkansas at home, who we think right now is the worst team in the SEC. They should win that game. They're at Kentucky. They probably should win that game too. The 8-4 ceiling for me is because they at Georgia, they got Ole Miss, they got Alabama, and they got Tennessee. So probably should lose all 4 of those games. And then really the swing games for me, you got NC State, at Auburn, at Mississippi State, and at Florida. Those are the difference between, making a bowl game and not for Vanderbilt. So I think making a bowl game should be the expectation probably for Vanderbilt. Like 6-6 should be like a floor, or the expectation, I should say, for this program. Anything more than that should be seen as a success. Anything less than that should be seen as a failure for Vanderbilt right now. So I think worst case 4-8, best case I think for Vanderbilt is probably right an 8-4 season next year. So that wraps up our Vanderbilt preview right now. At number 12 for us in the SEC, Dalton, another school that has a brand new head coach, the Auburn Tigers, who last year losing record for the 5th straight season, tied for the longest losing season stretch in program history. First time it's happened in 75 years to have 5 straight losing years at Auburn. That led to Hugh Freeze getting fired midseason after 3 years at the helm. Alex Golesh gets brought in from USF. Bulls were 4-29 before Alex Golesh got hired. They were 23-16 in the 3 years with Alex Golesh, including a 9-4 record last year, which was their best record in 8 years. Golesh worked under Josh Heupel at UCF and Tennessee before he got the USF job. Kind of runs the same veer and shoot offense that Josh Heupel does too. They brought back DJ Durkin at defensive coordinator for a 3rd season. It was really a solid defensive coordinator, a guy that many people thought could be the next head coach at Auburn. He's staying on as defensive coordinator right now. Joel Gordon is the new offensive coordinator. He was the OC under Alex Golesh at USF. And really, Dalton completely remade this offense in the transfer portal. 10 of the 11 projected starters on offense are incoming transfers, and a whole bunch of them coming over from USF with Alex Golesh.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first story that you look at is when you just look at all of the guys coming over from South Florida. Byron Brown at quarterback, receivers, Chaz Nimrod, Jeremiah Koger, Keyshawn Singleton, offensive lineman, Cole Best, Cole Skinner, right? I mean, he's basically everything other than the running backs he's brought over from USF. And USF basically became G6 Tennessee, right? It was high flying. It was, fast paced. They want to run the most plays per game in the country, explosive plays downfield. Byron Brown is the dual threat. And then it was just, can the defense keep up with it? That's kind of how it was down there in Tampa. But I mean, you've obviously got a very good coach in Alex Golesh who took a team that was absolutely in the depths. I mean, you want to talk about at one point, they were legitimately, you could argue, the worst team in the entire country under the previous regime there at USF. He built them back to respectability. And now it's a matter of if he can bring this same program in the hypo Tennessee style of play to Auburn and really jumpstart this team. And it's really the opposite because the last, couple of years at Auburn, the big question we've had is like, hey, when are they going to get a quarterback? When are they going to be able to throw the forward pass without it being a major issue? Golesh is going to try to bring that now to Auburn and bring a two-dimensional offense to Auburn because this offense is always better when they run the ball. But that's going to be the big question to me is all these USF guys, are they going to be able to play up?
Yeah, honestly, that my biggest strength for Auburn, really, Dalton, is it should be a more explosive offense for the Auburn Tigers this year because you added a top 20 quarterback in the nation, in our opinion, in Byron Brown from USF. He had the fourth best PFF grade last year among all quarterbacks, only behind Julian Sayin, Diego Pavia, and Fernando Mendoza. He ran for over 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns at USF. A top 15 running back room in college football with Jeremiah Cobb back. We'll talk about in just a little bit. Baylor transfer Bryson Washington, who I really think is a really good player too, coming off of injury as well. They added 4 of USF's top 5 receivers from last year in the portal. And USF last year, Dalton, was 6th in America in terms of yards per play under Alex Golesh too. So, last year it felt like Auburn's a very defensive heavy team. They wanted to get in these low scoring games. Now with Alex Golesh, it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do and how much more explosive this offense can be. But I think it should be a big improvement from what we saw last year.
Yeah, the guy other than Byron Brown to me that I'd be really excited about. Keep an eye on Jeremiah Koger. He was a true freshman last year. He's built well, 6'3" with really good speed. I mean, he's just built like one of these guys who's supposed to be playing in this Josh Heupel, Alex Golesh type of offense. That's a young kid that has a ton of talent going into his true sophomore year. Chaz Nimrod, obviously very familiar with that offense, playing in both of these programs. Keyshawn Singleton can make a lot of big plays. And then, the biggest threat really and the thing that makes this offense go is Byron Brown's legs, right? When this team can get to running the football and hopefully physically dominating up front, which is going to be a question mark here in a second. But when you got backs like they have, and you've got Byron Brown, who's one of the hardest players at any position in the country to tackle, that's really what you want. You want to get the run game and the screen game going early, get the tempo going, and then take those shots downfield as it goes. But you mentioned it. There's a lot of explosive playmakers both on the ground and through the air in this offense.
Yeah, they certainly lost some really good players on this offense too. Like, of course, namely Cam Coleman transferring out of the program to Texas, and Eric Singleton Jr. transferring out of the program to Florida. So there is some talent in the receiving core to replace too. But I'm really excited about this offense next year. I think they finally have a quarterback, which is most important for Auburn because they really have not had that over the past really few seasons. It felt like at Auburn. So there is kind of one question mark I would say for this offense right now, and you're going to dive into it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for as much as we like all their playmakers and everything on the perimeter, they're building a brand new offensive line here. All 6 offensive linemen that played at least 250 snaps for Auburn last year are gone. So he's had, Alex Golesh has really had to hit the transfer portal. So when you talk about guys coming with him like Cole Best and Cole Skinner from USF, they're decent players. They're not great players, and they haven't shown to be even great players in the American. Now they got to go against SEC defensive tackles, right? Talk about Stanton Ramil in from Michigan State coming off an injury. Jack Lear from Stanford coming off an injury, right? Joe Simmons was the starting left tackle at James Madison last year. We know the type of success that team had, but again, you're moving up to the SEC. So how often can they win in the trenches to create this space for all these perimeter players and for their quarterback? Or is it going to be a case every week where Byron Brown's got to break 12 to 14 tackles every single week and figure it out himself? The better that this team is in the trenches, which is a big, big question mark. It's the biggest question mark on the offensive side. Certainly, the better this team is in the trenches, the better chance they have to score 35, 40 points on any given week. Because we know this offense can do it. We know these players on the outside and the quarterback can do it. Now they have to match that in the trenches. I would be a little more worried about them against the teams on their schedule with better defensive lines.
Yeah, because if that offensive line holds up, they have, like I said before, so much talent elsewhere at quarterback, running back, receiving core is still pretty solid too. This can be a real, and of course, Josh Heupel is one of the brighter offensive minds that we have in the sport, running that veer and shoot offense that Josh Heupel made famous at Tennessee. Has the potential to be a really good offense if the offensive line holds up. Because if your offensive line is not very good, that can all of a sudden the offense can crater around that, right? So it's very important to see how those front five do for Auburn this year. But Dalton, they have a very exciting quarterback nonetheless, though, behind them in Byron Brown, who, like I said before, a top 20 quarterback in America for us, transferring in from USF.
And boy, is he fun to watch. The dual threat ability between the deep passing ability and what he can do with his arm in this specific offense. And then the rushing ability is really what stands out. This kid is a game breaker with his legs. When you look at since 2023, and we're taking sacks out of this, okay? 2,483 rushing yards and 28 touchdowns, both top 6 in the country, and 123 missed tackles forced is the most among quarterbacks in the last 3 seasons. And there was some games in there even that he missed due to injury. I mean, you can see it even when USF had played upper level competition, Alabama a couple of times, Florida, Miami. He's one of the hardest players at any position in the country to tackle. The strength in the pocket, the ability, short yardage. You know who's going to get the ball? Not those guys in the backfield and their talents too. It's going to be Byron Brown to give you the extra number back there. He's 6'3", he's 235 pounds. He's elusive, he's powerful. It takes 2 and 3 guys to tackle him at a time. And then if they get in the rhythm of this offense, especially throwing vertically downfield to the speed that they have at receiver, he's a guy who can single-handedly take games over. He absolutely can. The flaws are the accuracy, especially underneath, is not great because his mechanics are very funky. We'll put it like that. You know, there's been a lot of talk about, Byron Brown's mechanics. What's going on here? And to anyone that's new to, I would go, well, you just haven't been watching USF because they've always been like that. And then when you talk about he goes through stretches, especially in bigger games. You know, last year, I think it was the Memphis game early in the game that stood out where it's like the ball security. It's like, dude, you're trying to do too much, right? Like there's certain shots downfield he's trying to force, trying to keep plays alive. And look, with his legs, I'd want him to keep plays alive. I get it. Fumbling can be an issue at times. So ball security is big. The accuracy is never going to be great. But when you talk about a big time electric playmaker with downfield throws and what he can do with his legs, you know, I would kind of put it the same way as I did with Kamario Taylor, again, where at any given game, he can be just the center of the football game. On either side, on both sides, right? He can just be like, wow, this kid's taking the game over. We'll see if he can do it in the SEC on a weekly basis. But what he's shown before, when he's right and the ball security is right, he's very, very hard to stop in this offense.
Yeah, if anyone doesn't know, the delivery is like right-handed Tebow-esque kind of. It's very elongated. Let's put it that way. So it is a little funky. He's got to work on it a little bit. But he's a great runner. He's actually made strides. It felt like as a passer last year at USF too, but. Yeah, an electric player, man, and one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks that we have in college football right now. And Dalton helping him out in that run game will be Jeremiah Cobb back at running back. Last year, 6th in the SEC as a junior with over 960 rushing yards, 5.5 yards per carry, also 6th in the SEC, 6th most explosive runs in the SEC too. He has really great acceleration at 5'11", 200 pounds. He explodes through the first and second levels of a defense. He ran a 4.4 240 in high school. He's probably even faster than that now. So he probably runs in the 4.3s in the 40-yard dash now. He changes directions at breakneck speed too. Doesn't really break that many tackles. Doesn't really add that much in the receiving game either. But Jeremiah Cobb is an electric player at running back. And now you have a guy in Bryson Washington who was a really good player at Baylor a couple of years ago. Didn't really play much at all last year due to injury. You have him now transferring into at running back. Auburn's running back unit might be the best part of their entire team right now.
Yeah, I agree. And when you look at Cobb and Bryson Washington coming in from Baylor, and then you have Byron Brown, who is arguably the best rushing threat out of all 3 of them, there is such potential now because Alex Golesh at USF, he had good backs and he had a deep rotation. Now, there was some days where it was like 6 different guys getting carries, right? he's never had running backs this talented, and I'm curious to see how that plays in this offense again with this level, with this tempo, the tempo that he wants to run it at, just like Josh Heupel in Tennessee. I think it's going to be so important, right? So everybody's going to think about the big plays and everything through the air and all the go balls and switch releases and skinny posts and all that. But this offense works at its best when they can run the football. If they can get that going with Cobb, with Washington, with Brown, everything just opens up everywhere else in the passing game, especially with the RPOs and the play action.
Definitely. All right, Dawn, who is the star defensive player that we're going to talk about for DJ Durkin's defense next year?
So as a unit, there's a lot of question marks for sure on this defense because they lost a lot of very key players, key veteran players, right? You talk about Robert Woodyard and Keldrick Falk, right? And, Jay Crawford out there at corner. But the one guy who's coming back, their snap leader right in the middle of it, their leading tackler, first team all SEC, the linebacker is Xavier Atkins. And this kid, best way to put it, he's a freakish athlete, man. It would not shock me if he ran a 4.3. Honestly, he's got the speed. When you watch him run, you would think he's a free safety. Honestly, he's got freakish speed. He led the SEC with 17 tackles for loss, 51 stops, 25 pressures, 9 sacks, an interception, a pass breakup. He is a playmaker, right? And I think he needs to get a little bit better with, some of the mental side and getting a little too aggressive, especially in the run game at linebacker. But you talk about a guy with a ton of potential and a boatload of speed. Xavier Atkins right in the middle of it all. You better know where he is every snap, especially when he's closer up to the line of scrimmage and he's going to start blitzing you because he becomes a real problem. And he's the type of pass rusher, even for being a little bit undersized, who can speed up quarterbacks. And he's a real weapon when it comes to spying more mobile quarterbacks as well. So that's really the guy to watch right in the middle of the star of this defense that makes so many plays for him, Xavier Atkins at middle linebacker.
Yeah, I had him in my top 10 linebacker list. You had him a little bit outside, which is why I missed the top 10 linebackers list too. But yeah, he's a fun football player to watch, man. He's kind of a do-it-all player for Auburn, a little bit undersized, like you said too, but he could fly around the football, play a little off the edge for Auburn too. He's a really, really fun player to watch right now as well. Dalton, let's get into the bottom line now for the Auburn Tigers in their first year under Alex Golesh as head coach. What is the absolute bare minimum? What's the minimum record that you're expecting for Auburn next year? What's the ceiling? In first year under Alex Golesh, if all goes right for Alex Golesh, what could be the record for the Auburn Tigers next year?
Yeah, this team's got a lot of variable because if you told me there's a scenario where, okay, all of the USF guys, it just didn't happen at the SEC level, and then the defense took a drop off, losing all these veterans, like, is it possible that there's a 3 or 4 win season in here? Yeah, they're going to beat Southern Miss and Samford, right? But, you look at some of those 50-50, they're probably better than Arkansas as we ranked them here, but you look at a lot of these 50-50 games. Week 1 against Baylor is going to be fascinating, right? The rematch, Auburn won that game, obviously, and we'll see where that goes. Florida, same thing. New coach, Alex Golesh and Byron Brown, they beat the Florida Gators last year, right? That's going to be something that I'm sure Gator fans don't want to hear about, but it's in there, right? So the confidence of beating that team. Vanderbilt, what are they going to be? At Mississippi State, what are they going to be? There is a cap here because there's some darn tough road games. Georgia, Ole Miss, Bama, Tennessee. Like, there's tough road games, and there is a lot to question about this team. The ceiling is in there with Byron Brown and the potential explosiveness on offense. But how do they play up in the trenches, really, on both sides of the ball? That's going to decide that. They should expect to make a bowl game with this quarterback and this much talent. I don't know that they can get more than about 7 or 8 wins, just especially with the amount of tough road games that they have on their schedule.
Yeah, 3-9 is the bare minimum. Southern Miss, Samford, and Arkansas. Arkansas at home, by the way, too. You should win all 3 of those games. We talked about Arkansas already. The swing games really don't. The funny thing is, when we put a floor and a ceiling in here, usually like the between the floor and the ceiling for Auburn is about, the floor and ceiling for a team is about like a couple or a few win difference. It's a 6-game difference for the floor and the ceiling. It really could be 7 games too if you want to look at that. 4-game difference for Auburn too. But you can look at it like a 5 or 6 game difference too when you look at the swing games for them as well. So I think 3-9 to maybe 8-4 is what I would say for Auburn, somewhere between there, probably. I think a bowl game should be expected for Auburn, but yeah, there's a lot of swing games in here that could really, have a great season for Auburn or make it a bad season for Auburn, too. So we'll see if they could beat, teams like Florida and Vanderbilt at home. Those are 2 huge games. Baylor at home, week 1's a huge game for them too. At Mississippi State should be a 50-50 ball game as well. It's going to be tough to beat, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, at Tennessee. You host LSU is going to be a great team too. It's going to be tough to win those games. So maybe 7-5 is the cap for this team, but that'd be a big step in the right direction. Because like I said before, they've had 5 straight years with 6 or fewer wins, right? So you got to do better than that if you're Auburn. So that's where I would say for Auburn is 7-5. If you go 7-5 and break that streak, that will be seen as a success. I think a pretty big one for Alex Golesh in his first year as the head coach at Auburn.
I think one of the other just real quick storylines that can't get forgotten here. It's an interesting dynamic with DJ Durkin staying as the defensive coordinator, because this team, especially up front in their defense, this was not a bad defense last year. They had one of the best run defenses in the country, especially in this. So many of the holdovers, they lost a lot of experienced players, but when you look at some of the holdovers that are staying, like a Xavier Atkins, like a Caleb Harris, like a Rayshawn Pleasant, right? Like they've got talent on their defense, and they're not losing the continuity on defense and in their defensive coordinator, right? Because, you had Golesh at USF, he had Todd Orlando with them, and it was some weeks was good, some weeks wasn't, but they're kind of keeping that same dynamic. So I think Golesh he felt good enough about Durkin in the way that he runs this defense to go, here, take the keys. We've got the offense. You stay on your side and I'll stay on mine. And that might be a dynamic that helps them a little bit too, to have some level of continuity. With so much change on the offense, there really isn't that much change on the defense outside of losing a handful of veterans on the field, but they're bringing back a lot of talented players too.
Certainly. Mohall in the chat is saying Max is not going to make it without a restroom break with the amount of water he's drinking right now. I think I'm going to be okay. I feel okay right now. But we are not even close to being halfway done yet, Dalton. So maybe we'll see. I think I'll be okay, though. I'll be okay. Maybe we'll get a Gatorade bottle under the table here in a little bit if I need it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens, Mahal. It's a good point in the chat right now. ZT in the chat saying, I'll call Auburn fans, ZT saying, I'll call the hotline if Auburn does not get 8 wins this year. And I'm not talking about the gambling one. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Auburn this year. I do like Alex Golesh, though. I will say Alex Golesh is a pretty good head coach for the Auburn Tigers right now. Dalton, let's get into the next team in our rankings in the SEC. That is the South Carolina Gamecocks. And obviously, very disappointing year last year for South Carolina. Only a 4-8 season. They're following a 9-4 year in 2024. They were 4-8 despite being as high as number 10 in the AP poll early on in the season. The defense was not as strong after losing so many guys to the NFL draft, but still a top 35 unit in the country. So it's still a pretty good defense. The problem is, though, was the offense went from being an average unit to one of the worst in America, and it really felt like their quarterback, Lenora Sellers, was really by himself on that offense. They were 123rd in successful play rate, 111th in EPA per play, 91st in yards per play. They're outside the top 100 in rushing grade, receiving grade, pass blocking grade, and run blocking grade from PFF. And because of it, Dalton, Shane Beamer fired the offensive coordinator, Mike Shula, after only 9 games total on the job there. It was his first year as OC, and he got fired after 9 games there. He hired Kendall Briles as the new offensive coordinator from TCU. Clayton White is back at defensive coordinator, his 6th year as defensive coordinator, but a very, very good defensive coordinator for South Carolina. And there's no way around it, Dalton. Shane Beamer is kind of entering this year now with his seat very much warming up, and he likely needs to make at least a bowl game in order to keep his job at South Carolina. He did sign an extension after the 2024 season that runs until 2030, so there is a bit of a buyout that South Carolina, if they were to fire him, has to deal with. But this is a kind of a make or break year now for Shane Beamer at South Carolina.
My apologies. See, Max long stream here. We get muted. See what happens here. I knew it was going to happen eventually. 3 hours, we're not falling asleep yet. Anyway, Shane Beamer's on one of the hottest seats in the country. I think when you look at, you mentioned it, got to make at least a bowl game. There's no reason, even last year with the talent that they had, that they should have only been 4-8, right? So, I mean, you've got to figure out a way to get this offense to function the way that it should, especially with the quarterback that you have. Lenora Sellers so committed to this program and the talent that he has. Obviously, many believe first-round, top 10 pick type of talent. The arm strength is there. The legs are there. You've got everything in your quarterback. You've just got to build it around him, and they didn't do that properly last year. So, a disappointing year, and if they have another one, his seat could be raging hot by or even before the end of it.
Definitely. I think the biggest strength on for this team is the defensive line. Our number 9 D line in the country going into the year. Dylan Stewart, our number 3 edge rusher going into the year. Projected top 5 pick in the NFL draft right now. Edge rusher, we'll talk about him later on too. Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, very strong run defender at defensive tackle, back for another year. Tomio Doroje, transferring in from Illinois, very good run defender at Illinois last year. Caleb Herring, an edge rusher, transferring in from Tennessee, started at Tennessee at edge rusher last year too. So top 10 defensive line in college football for South Carolina, headlined by a superstar in Dylan Stewart. That's to me is the biggest strength of the Gamecocks going into next year.
Totally agree. And some of the experience that so many of those young guys got last year is big. Obviously, Dylan Stewart getting healthy is going to be a big story as well. But when you talk about guys like Brownlow Dinley and Dindy, and Caleb Herring getting that experience last year as starters behind such a veteran defensive line group the year before, that's big time. They showed better in run defense than I thought they were going to in the preseason. And then Dylan Stewart, when he's healthy, is obviously one of the best pass rushers in all of college football. We feel very, very good about their defensive line. The other side of it in the trenches on their offensive line, that's the one where, I mean, last year, trying to be nice about this, but I really can't. They weren't just bad. Honestly, their offensive line last year was a disgrace. It was. I mean, Lenora Sellers, even for as mobile as he is, was sacked more than any quarterback in the Power Four last season, 40 times, right? They couldn't function in the run game. They couldn't pass protect. You could blitz them every play, and they couldn't figure it out. So they got rid of all of those guys, and they brought in a whole new crew in, right? You've got Jacarius Peak coming in from NC State. Now, hopefully, he can play a significant part of this season, even though he suffered an offseason knee injury, right? So you've got that. You've got Hank Purvis coming in. You've got Carter Miller coming in from UCF, Hank Purvis from Purdue. You've got a whole transfer offensive line that you're just hoping is functional, right? And injuries have already hit it. We'll see where Peak's recovery goes. Josiah Thompson is already out for the season with an injury. So there's not a ton of depth here. They're really hoping this group of transfers up front. But when you look at this unit, I mean, it couldn't be any worse, right? If it can get any better or even significantly better, especially if Peak is healthy at left tackle, you're talking about an offense that can function at a very, very high level, but they've got to take some of the heat off of Lenora Sellers because the way that they played last year, that unit they had last year, was inexcusable.
Yeah, and Dalton, it's been a massive issue. It's not just last year. It was since like really the Spencer Rattler days at South Carolina. Has been a massive issue at South Carolina. So it's been like 5 years running. It feels like where this offensive line has been a huge issue for South Carolina. You brought in some really good players on that offensive line, like Jacarius Peak. We'll talk about in just a second, but it's got to be a lot better for this offense to be a lot better next year because you got a very talented quarterback in Lenora Sellers. Dalton, a lot of people right now think might be a potential first-round pick in the NFL draft. Kind of a boomer bust player in a lot of ways. And if anyone's looking for, the most direct comparison to Anthony Richardson probably in college football right now, it probably is Lenora Sellers, which is great for the ceiling. But like Richardson's shown in the NFL right now, there is a low floor there too, it feels like.
For sure. I like Sellers' mechanics and his accuracy better than Richardson because Richardson had no sense of accuracy whatsoever. But when you look at Sellers, you're probably talking about the toolsiest quarterback in college football. He's 6'3", he's 235, 240 pounds. He can run like the wind. I mean, he can take off for a 60, 80-yard touchdown on you on any given play. He can scramble with the best of them. He's incredibly strong. I mean, but Byron Brown's the only other one, maybe even in the same class. But when you talk about breaking tackles in the pocket and making something out of nothing, there's probably nobody better than Sellers, and he's got a legit 70-plus yard arm. He can make any throw, and you're going to get the comparisons of just people going, okay, this is Josh Allen's level of physical tools, and that may be true, right? He's just got to, we'd like to see him protected a little bit better than he was last year because it was just way too much pressure, and you could feel it where he's just like, you know what, I got to break the pocket, and the game plan eventually became, hey, keep contained, make him sit there, and they're going to find a way to beat themselves. This year, if he's protected more so in the pocket and the accuracy can get back to where it was during that hot streak in 2024, especially underneath, you're talking about a guy, yes, he's got elite tools and he's got elite potential. The other thing is the offensive line was obviously not very good last year, but he's got to get rid of the football sometimes too. There's way, way too often where pressures and sacks can be attributed to him holding the ball too long and not letting a play die. 11th highest average time to throw in the country last year. So it's all of it. He's got to protect the offensive line a little bit. They were not good in front of him last year. And you can understand as the season goes on why he'd want to go and just make plays all the time because that was really their only chance to win games. But don't let him break contain. It's that simple. If you let Lenora Sellers break the pocket or you let him keep it on a read option, you're begging for trouble because he's the best athlete on the field and he's one of the best pure athletes in the entire country.
Yeah, honestly, and I think a guy, Dalton, who's really important for his success this year is Jacarius Peak, the left tackle for South Carolina, our number 11 tackle in college football right now. Projected second round pick in the NFL draft, transferring in from NC State. 6'4", 305 pounds, 11th best pass blocking grade in the country last year. The year before, he had the 5th best pass blocking grade in the ACC. So one of the better pass blockers in college football, which is a very welcome addition to that South Carolina offensive line and to Lenora Sellers' blind side right now. But like you mentioned before, Dalton, he suffered a knee injury in February during a 3-on-3 basketball tournament for South Carolina's football team right now. He missed the entirety of spring practice, still has not been fully cleared yet this summer. Head coach Shane Beamer did say that he expects him to be ready when week one rolls around, though. But it's not great that he's missed all of spring practice and probably all of the summer and maybe fall training camp too. So he might be like a game time decision for week one, which isn't great for Jacarius Peak, but he's really crucial. He's an X factor for South Carolina because that offensive line has been absolutely downright horrendous for the last 3 years at South Carolina. If they're going to take a step forward, Jacarius Peak has got to be the biggest reason why for the Gamecocks.
Absolutely. I mean, and the problem here with this injury, if he's not back by week one, they do not have a ton of depth. I mean, they need this front five that they brought in the portal with Peak and Purvis and Miller and some other guys. They need this unit to be a substantial improvement over last year's unit. Peak is the biggest reason. If you've got a left tackle who can handle one-on-one pass protection, it'll make such a big difference in this offense with this quarterback. But that's really, to me, the biggest point of suspense for this entire season, and especially leading into it over the next month and a half. Do we see Jacarius Peak in the early part of the season? Do we see him week one? Because if we don't, I'm not sure what their answers are at this point, especially with Josiah Thompson already declared out for the season. They don't have really very much depth at tackle at all. They need him to be healthy. He can be a top 15 to 20 tackle in the country, if not better, when he is healthy. But he's got to recover from this, because if their pass protection is as bad as it was last year, they're just going to have the same season they had last year.
Yeah, a lot of potential on this offense, right? And Mick Blick even saying in the chat that Nick Harbor's freaky fast, because another guy with high ceiling, right? One of the freakiest athletes, maybe the freakiest athlete really in college football, but got to see him develop a little bit more as a wide receiver too. Dalton, let's talk about maybe one of the freakiest players that we have in college football on the defensive side of the ball. That is Dylan Stewart, who, like I said before, right now projected to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft at edge rusher.
Another player that they're looking at to get healthy, because Shane Beamer had said he basically played with a broken back the second half of last year. So if it looked a little bit off from Dylan Stewart the last 4 or 5 games, it's because he was a little bit off, right? And he was trying to play through it and save this team and get their pass rush going. But our number 3 edge rusher, I mean, you could talk about he's got the potential easily to be the best defensive player, honestly, in the entire country. The athleticism is springy. The bend is crazy. I mean, some of the moves in the bend that he has and the burst that he has off the edge remind me of what we watched 2 years ago with Abdul Carter up there at Penn State. I mean, he's got everything. When he's right, the pass rush arsenal is ridiculous. The explosiveness is ridiculous. And Dylan Stewart really, for as many good experienced players as are coming back on this defense, right? You talk about Fred Johnson and Justin Okoronkwo at linebacker, Brownlow Dindy and some other guys on the D-line, Vakari Swain and Judge Collier at corner. They have so much experience on this defense, but the game breaker is Dylan Stewart. He's the guy that you game plan for, especially in the pass, in pass protection. And then you talk about him getting better in run defense, something we've talked about a lot over the past calendar years. Okay, got to get his lower body stronger, got to commit to it more in run defense. And he did get a lot better in run defense this past year. He's got the potential to be the best edge player in the entire country. He's the guy that you game plan for. Number 1, when you're playing against South Carolina, you've got to find him on any given snap. You've got to make sure he doesn't wreck the entire game plan with 6, 8, 10 pressures. If you can do that, then maybe you stand a chance, but he's got a chance to take games over every single week if he's healthy.
Yeah, he's a freak, man. He's an absolute freak. He's one of the best players that we have in college football right now. Like I said, NFL teams are going to be tripping over themselves to draft him probably within the first 5 or 10 picks of next year's NFL draft too. Like you said before, Dalton, you could see defensive player of the year upside, not in college football, in the NFL, honestly. Like that, he's that kind of special toolsy player that we have in college football right now. I cannot wait to see what he does developing his 3rd year at South Carolina, hopefully coming off strong off that back injury, because it was a kind of a step back in his sophomore year, but what he showed as a true freshman, man, was absolutely special, and he is certainly one of the best defensive players that we have in college football right now. Dalton, what's the bottom line for the South Carolina team right now? First of all, what's the minimum record that you think they're going to have? what's the maximum record that they could have? And also, what's the minimum record you think for Shane Beamer to continue being the head coach of this program in 2026 and beyond, or 2027, I should say, and beyond?
Boy, I mean, we're entering this year with South Carolina with so many more questions than answers. I think that's really it. The range is so wide. I think, look, this team went 4-8 last year when they shouldn't have, but if they don't get better up front on offense, they could win only 3-4 games again, right? You obviously like him against a Kent State and a Towson, right? But, Arkansas and Kentucky, we think they should beat them, but when you can't block anybody, you never know. And then you have, they have the potential even last year when they're playing close games with Missouri and Alabama and Texas A&M, right? They never should have lost to A&M. What was it, 28-0, wasn't it, or 27-0, whatever it was against A&M? It's such a wide range based, to me, fully on this offensive line. I mean, if their offensive line is somehow as dysfunctional as it was last year, yeah, they could just win 3-4 games again because they get blown out in the trenches every week. They also, if they have it right, it could look a lot more like 2 years ago where they can win 8 or 9 games and maybe even get on the periphery of playoff talk, right? Like they were in 2024. I think the last 2 years that you've seen when they were 9-3 and then they were 4-8, that's pretty much the whole range, because we've seen it in 2 years with Lenore Sellers at quarterback, and we've seen it in 2 years where, especially last year, they didn't block anybody at all. This offensive line is going to set it. I don't think there's anything else to it. The rest of this team, solid football team, good defense, legitimate game breaker of a pass rusher. The receivers are experienced. There's a lot of chemistry there with Sellers, a third-year starting quarterback, Matt Fuller at running back. They got everything you could want, and the offensive line could either have them rise up as a surprise team in this conference, or they could be terrible again if they can't block anybody. As far as Beamer goes, I mean, the bowl game is a minimum. I don't know necessarily that they would keep him at 6-6 with this team. It might take at least 7. It might take at least 7 wins for them to keep him. I think he really is coaching for his job this year.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the floor for South Carolina is 4-8. Like I said, Kent State and Towson, even the Kentucky and Arkansas games, they should win those games, although nothing's guaranteed, of course, in this conference, but they should win those games. 8-4, I kind of see as a ceiling. You're at Alabama, you're at Oklahoma, you host Texas A&M, and you host Georgia. I don't think they should be favored or even really be that close to being, it's not really a 50-50 ball game. They should lose those 4 games. In the swing games, you got Mississippi State at home, at Florida, host Tennessee, at Clemson. We'll see what Clemson is like at the end of the year, too. It's going to be really interesting to see what that Tigers team is like, too. But a great point, Dalton, that Mick Blicky's making in the chat right now is that South Carolina does have a pretty big scheduling advantage over Tennessee. We'll get to later on in this show. They're coming off a bye and are at home against Tennessee. The week before for Tennessee, they actually play against Alabama. Tennessee does the week before. So we'll see, how well Tennessee will be. Because that's always a huge, huge game, a huge rivalry game for Tennessee the week before. Can they get up the very following week at South Carolina to win that game? It's a great point in the chat by Mick Blicky, too, that it is a scheduling advantage that South Carolina has in that swing game, too. But I'm with you. I think 6-6 maybe, but even so, like, you'll have a new quarterback after Lenore Sellers going into 2027. I don't know if that'll be enough. I think 7-5 or 8-4. So really what I'm saying is South Carolina might have to hit their ceiling in order for Shane Beamer to continue coaching this team in 2027 and beyond. We'll see what happens this year, but I think, 7 or 8 wins might be the minimum for Shane Beamer, which I kind of think is kind of the ceiling for this program too when you look at their schedule. So we'll see what happens for South Carolina, but it does feel like Shane Beamer is coaching for his job in South Carolina right now. So let's get to our guy Harbs' team right now at number 10, the Florida Gators. And in 2024, Dalton, it felt like Billy Napier was turning around this Florida program, 8-5 record, an exciting true freshman quarterback in DJ Lagway that year too. But man, they came crashing back down to earth with only a 4-8 record this past season, their 4th losing season in the past 5 years. Billy Napier was fired after 4 seasons on the job. Started off with a 3-4 record and was fired basically midway through the season. Lagway did not really take the sophomore leap that was expected out of him. They had the 4th worst offense in terms of EPA per pass last year. So they brought in John Summerall as the new head coach from Tulane, who brought the Green Wave to their first ever college football playoff in 2025, an 11-3 record that year, an American championship that year too, a 43-12 record in his 4 years as a head coach, either at Troy or at Tulane. Troy had 2 of its 3 best years in school history under John Summerall during his only 2 years as Troy's head coach. So he's a great head coach. I'm really excited to see what John Summerall can do at Florida right now. He hired Georgia Tech offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner as his new offensive coordinator, and he hired Kentucky defensive coordinator Brad White as his defensive coordinator. Quarterback battle going on right now, which we'll talk about later on, between Aaron Philo coming in from Georgia Tech and redshirt freshman Tramel Jones. And whoever wins, Dalton has a really good group of weapons to work with. Back seven in the defense is really strong, too, with a lot of key players returning. But they do have some question marks on both sides of the ball in the trenches. But I'm really excited to see what John Summerall could do, man. He's been a terrific head coach for the last 4 years at Troy and Tulane. And I know some Florida fans look at a group of five head coach following Billy Napier saying, oh, man, not again. This one's different. This one feels different. I think John Summerall's a really, really good head coach, and he is very deserving of a top 15 job in the country like Florida is.
Yeah, the work he did at Tulane was fantastic, especially last year when you talk about, his quarterback, Jake Retzloff, was in the program for like 3 or 4 weeks before the season, and they still found a way to win the American and win the conference and all that. And just the culture he built there at Tulane after taking over for a really good coach in Willie Fritz, right, and keeping that going. But I think when you look at this Florida team, I think it's very similar to, and this is why it's been so frustrating in recent years, is that like South Carolina, we just talked about, this team has too much talent. They had too much talent last year to go 4-8. It's kind of inexcusable, right? When you think about, losing close games and competing with good teams, but not winning. You think about the LSU game and a million turnovers from the quarterback. And, you talk about the Georgia games that are close and the Ole Miss game that they were playing well early. There's just so many moments where you're like, you watch the Gators and you go for 2.5, 3/4 of any given game, you go, they're better than 4-8. Why are they only 4-8, right? And then they just can't find the consistency in the coaching in big moments. So if John Summerall can just change really the vibe of this team and just the ability to win those big games in big moments, it can change a lot. But this is a team over the last couple of years that's really underperformed what their talent level is, because you look at the names on their roster, they had a boatload of talent last year. One of the most underperforming teams in the country. They got a boatload of talent this year, especially at the skill positions. And the only thing I will give them a little lenience on, does it feel like every single time that sometime this time of year we have the strength of schedule talk, does it feel like the Florida Gators are like number one in strength of schedule going into every season? Like, they always have the hardest schedule. I know they play Georgia every year, they play LSU every year, they play Florida State every year, which ain't as hard as it used to be, but still, like, it just feels like they have the hardest schedule in the country every single year. And I'm pretty sure this year is no different.
Yeah, it's really hard. It feels like every single year because of those rivalry games that they have. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited for the future of this Florida program with John Summerall leading it. And Dalton, really what I'm most excited to see in this team this year is these skill position players that they have right now. Right now, the number 4 running back unit in the country with our number 4 running back in Jaden Ball leading it right now. Actually, the number 1 running back in the draft for NFL Stock Exchange podcast between Connor and Trevor right now, both of them having as a number 1 running back in the draft and maybe a first round pick at running back. They weren't a top 10 receiving core in the country for us, but they would have been top 15 with Eric Singleton Jr. transferring in, Vernell Brown III, and Dallas Wilson leading it too. Singleton is now back with Buster Faulkner, who is great with at Georgia Tech too. So I'm really excited to see him reunite with Buster Faulkner on that offense. So whoever the quarterback is for Florida is going to have a loaded group of skill position players to work with, whether it be at running back or in the receiving core.
Absolutely agree. I love the combination of Jaden Ball and Evan Pryor in the backfield. I think Evan Pryor is a very underrated player who can complement his quickness and vision, can really complement Jaden Ball's power. And obviously Ball is going to be the workhorse. He's the guy who's going to get 20 to 25 carries every single week. But Pryor, I think, is a big time asset. And then you look at, a Buster Faulkner offense, if they're going to run it somewhat the same as they did at Georgia Tech. Talk about speed. Eric Singleton, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown. It doesn't get much faster than that on the outside. And you've got Singleton, obviously the veteran who knows this offense, and then 2 very young kids in Wilson and Brown who have a boatload of talent. You're absolutely right. On the perimeter, this team could be as good as anybody. The biggest question mark that I would have is what their offensive line is going to look like, right? You lost your leader in Jake Slaughter at center. We thought the best center in the country, right? Austin Barber, obviously a multi-year starter for them and now an NFL player with the Cleveland Browns as well. The question marks on this offensive line to me are what's going to maybe hold back this potential, because it's another situation where one way or the other, if it's Aaron Philo or if it's Tramel Jones, you're going to have a young quarterback and you're really going to want to block for him. And you look at some of the key transfers coming in here: Emeka Ugorji from Stanford, right? Harrison Moore coming over at center with Faulkner from Georgia Tech, TJ Shanahan, the guard from Penn State. They need this group of transfers on the offensive line, a lot like we just talked about with South Carolina. They've got to perform. Florida the last couple of years has had a really good offensive line. Could be a drop off this year if these guys don't perform, and you really don't want to drop off in your offensive line play when you have one way or the other a very young quarterback that's going to be starting.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of the quarterback battle that we have going on right now, Dalton, it's going to be either Aaron Philo or Tramel Jones. We project Aaron Philo to win that job right now, even though Tramel Jones has turned heads a lot with the tools that he has as a very young kid right now. But Aaron Philo, of course, familiarity with Buster Faulkner coming in from Georgia Tech, and he did start a game at Georgia Tech in his career too. And honestly, Dalton, whenever he came in for Haynes King as a backup quarterback, he looked pretty capable back there.
Yeah, he played solid football. And I think the big reason, obviously, that Faulkner wanted him in this offense is because of his familiarity with the offense. And I think Aaron Philo, what he is very good at running the core concepts, right? I don't know that he'll take off and run as much as Haynes King. I don't know that he's as good an athlete as Haynes King. But you remember the game, was it 2 years ago against Miami when he had the bum shoulder and they were basically bringing in Philo as the passer and using King as the runner still with a bum shoulder and all of that. So, I mean, they have so much, Faulkner has so much trust in him to run this offense. He hunts for big plays, big time, especially throwing the ball deep down the field. Talk about deep seams over the middle, deep crossing routes that Eric Singleton especially is going to love, go balls. Like this is a player who wants to create the big plays in this offense with the speed. I mean, this is an unprecedented level of talent now that Faulkner and Philo have had to work with, when you're talking about especially Wilson and Brown on the outside and then getting Singleton back. They didn't have this at Georgia Tech. They had good players. They had some fast guys, Malik Rutherford and those, but they didn't have this, right? So if Philo is protected enough, the idea is going to be, hey, we're gunning it down the field, man. We're going to get in these heavy play action concepts and we're going to gun it down the field. But I also think Faulkner has faith in him to run the RPOs in this offense, to run the bootlegs in this offense. He's mobile enough to do anything he needs to do out on the move. It's just going to be a matter of getting the experience. How much can they get to the drop back passing game if they really need it and they fall behind in games? That was another issue at Georgia Tech. When they were ahead, some of the best front runners in the country. When they were behind, not so much, even with Haynes King, right? So I think that's going to be a big thing. But Philo's got all the capability to create these big plays. They just got to protect him.
Yeah, honestly, he's a guy who's very accomplished coming out of high school. He's only a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, I believe, because his size, only 6'1", about 208 pounds right now. But Dalton, he has the most passing yards in Georgia State history with almost 14,000 passing yards in his career. The previous record holder was Trevor Lawrence, right? So he broke Trevor Lawrence's career passing yards record in the state of Georgia, right? So Aaron Philo, very accomplished quarterback out of high school, has not really ever been a starter outside of the one game last year, but I'm really excited to see what he could do as the full-time starter this year at Florida. And he's got a very talented running back to help him out and ease the burden of the offense on him, Dalton, and Jaden Baugh right now, who is a top 5 running back in the country for us, our number 4 running back in America, 8th most broken tackles in the country last year, ran for nearly 1,200 yards last year after only almost 700 as a true freshman the year before. He's a massive build, 6'1", 228 pounds, but he carries it so well. I was actually really surprised to see he was that big when I watched the tape of him, man, because he looks so much smaller the way he moves out there. Over the last 2 years, he's been the most valuable returning running back in America, according to PFF's wins above average metric. Arm tackles will not work on him because of how strong he is. He's more agile than you'd expect, like I said before, too, with really nice vision, and also a capable receiver out of the backfield, over 200 receiving yards last year, too. So Jaden Baugh, one of the best running backs in college football right now. Like I said before, Dalton, he'll be the first running back taken in next year's NFL draft, too.
He's the workhorse. I mean, when you talk about the word workhorse and being used so often, for running backs, this guy really is it. You mentioned almost 230 pounds and as physical as any running back in the country. Buster Faulkner, regardless of who the quarterback is going to want to run the football. Evan Pryor is going to get some of that, but the center of this offense, the engine of this offense is Jaden Baugh and the physicality that he runs with.
Definitely. Who is the star defensive player for Florida that you want to break down?
I'm going to look back in the secondary. I'm going to go with a very experienced safety in Bryce Thornton, almost 1,500 snaps over the last 3 years in his career, 4 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. And to me, he's really the glue that holds this secondary together. He can do a little bit of everything. He's got good feet. He's got good long speed that really plays vertically when he's got to turn and run down the field. A lot better tackling in 2025. It looked like he got in the weight room and got a little bit stronger. Doesn't have the most height and length at 5'10", but when you talk about the footwork that he plays with, the ability to play man-to-man in the slot, and just the ability to kind of be the captain of this secondary. Bryce Thornton is a guy I think could eventually be something like a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. When you see the vision and the footwork that he plays with, I think the one thing for him, he's a little bit smaller naturally, and he's not as big a factor in run defense. But when you talk about a coverage safety, he's probably a top 12 to 15 guy in the country.
Yeah, you got a lot of talented players in the secondary right now. You got him, Bryce Thornton. You got Cormani McClain, former 5-star recruit at corner 2, going into his redshirt junior year. A lot of talent in that Florida secondary right now. Dalton, what's the bottom line for this team? What's in their first year under John Summerall? What's the absolute bare minimum record that you think they'll have? And what's the ceiling? What do you think is the best record that they could have in their first year under John Summerall?
Pretty wide range here. I mean, there's 2 games we know they're going to win, sadly, against FAU and then against Campbell also. I mean, we'll see if the Owls can improve on the national worst turnover differential, but, can't turn the ball over 5 times a game. Anyway, I think when you look at Florida going 4-8 last year, but obviously underperforming their talent level, I think there's a reason for a lot of optimism. I don't think they're ready to compete with, say, games at Texas or Georgia, even though that game's always weird, or, can they score on an Oklahoma with a young quarterback that they have? But it's a lot of 50-50 games on their schedule too, because to me, X factor, I know I've said it for a lot of the bottom half teams here, but trenches, O-line, got to see if the transfers can get it done. And then they didn't rush the passer hardly at all last year. It's going to be a really big storyline. Which young pass rushers can jump up for him, right? Is it Jaden Woods off the edge, Brendan Bett on the inside, the true freshman KJ Ford they're really excited about? So we're going to have to see who can rush the passer. I think considering their schedule and a lot of 50-50 games and a young team on offense and at quarterback especially that's going to take some lumps, probably 8. Maybe some will say like 9 wins if they can really get the ball rolling and Faulkner gets its offense going. But I would expect with a new coach, a better coach team, and a team that's not going to play so down to their opponents, like a 7 or 8 win season.
Yeah, the funny thing is with Florida is that our floor that we wrote down for them is 2-10 because of FAU and Campbell being guaranteed wins, basically. The ceiling I wrote down was 8-4. That's a massive range. Like I said before, it's usually like a 3-game difference that you usually see for these ranges, and it's a 6-game difference for Florida right now because there's so many swing games, right? Whether it be Auburn, Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida State, a lot of swing games for Florida right now. So do I think they're going to go 2-10? Absolutely not. They're going to be a lot better than that. I think they're going to be like a 5 or 6 win team probably, or we'll get actually to our predictions tomorrow, maybe even more than that. But I do think there's so many swing games right now that is a lot of 50-50 games for Florida going into next year that can, be the difference between a season where they miss a bowl game once again, or can they win 7, 8, 9 games, right? There's a lot of games that could decide that for Florida next year. So really fascinating year for John Summerall in his first year. But I think Florida, I know they wanted Lane Kiffin as their head coach, but a great consolation prize in John Summerall, who I think is a really great head coach that really deserves this kind of opportunity that he got at Florida right now. All right, John, let's get to Eli School here at number 9 in the Tennessee Volunteers. And, the 2025 season did not really live up to the hype of the previous 3, really, for Josh Heupel at Tennessee. They made the playoff in 2024. 8-5 record this past year was Heupel's worst year at Tennessee. Tennessee took the job over, and since it's really his first year on the job in 2021, it was the first time since 2021 that Tennessee ended the year unranked as well. Offense remained a top 10 unit in the country, but the defense completely fell off a cliff. They went from the 3rd best defense in the country in 2024 in terms of EPA per play to 81st this past season, 2nd in yards per carry allowed to 75th this past season. So they fired the defensive coordinator in Tim Banks. Josh Heupel hired Jim Knowles as the new defensive coordinator, formerly at Penn State. Joey Housel enters his 4th year as offensive coordinator as well. Brand new quarterback because Joey Aguilar lost his appeal to the NCAA for another year of eligibility. It will either be George McIntyre, the redshirt freshman, or 5-star true freshman Faison Brandon. only 9 career pass attempts between them, of course, all coming from George McIntyre last year. Really good offense around them, though. Really great running back in Deshaun Bishop. Offensive line is a top 15 unit in the country, pretty much as is the receiving core, too. Plenty of questions up front on defense, but the second and third levels have plenty of experience and talent right now. But it's going to be a really fascinating year, I think, this year for Josh Heupel at Tennessee, Dalton.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like this team was built for the idea that Joey Aguilar was going to have one more year, right? And they're going to have a veteran team and make another playoff push. And then they couldn't get his eligibility going. So now what you have is kind of like, to me, they're structured similar to what they were 2 years ago when it was, look, we got a great defense, we got a great run game, we have all this stuff, but we have a freshman quarterback and a redshirt freshman quarterback in Nico Iamaleava. And they found a way to make the playoffs that year, right? And then they got stomped by Ohio State, and it is what it is. But I think when you look at this team now, you go, okay, it's got to be a similar mentality. We're going to have a young freshman quarterback one way or the other, and we're just going to have to play really well around them to win a lot of football games this year.
Definitely. I think the biggest strength, Dalton, and I know there's some question marks on this defense, but I love the linebacker unit they got right now. Our number 7 linebacker unit in the country brought back 4 players who were solid starters either at Tennessee or another Power 4 school, in Edwin Spillman, Amari Campbell, Jeremiah Thielander, and Arion Carter. True freshman coming in, and TJ White, a top 5 linebacker coming out of high school as well. So, yeah, top 10 linebacker unit in the country is probably the best part of the entire team. I will also say, even though the quarterback is a big question mark right now because it's a very inexperienced player, whoever it is, I do really like the supporting cast for that quarterback too, whether it be at running back, in the receiving core. The offensive line is pretty solid too. I think that the supporting cast, and of course Josh Heupel calling plays, whoever is that quarterback is set up pretty nicely to succeed as well. But I think that the best part of the team, though, in terms of one unit, is probably that linebacker unit right now.
I'll even expand that to just the back 7 of their whole defense. Honestly, you look at Ty Redmond as a young stud at cornerback that brought in Kayan Lee from Auburn, TJ Metcalf from Michigan. I mean, they've got some really talented players in their secondary, too. I think it speaks to the theme that for the most part, they've got a really good football team with just a couple of big questions. Now, I'm going to go with the biggest question other than the quarterback spot. That's a different conversation. Who's going to rush the passer? So we've had this whole Chaz Coleman situation over the last couple of months. Is he in? Is he out? Is he dismissed from the program? Is he loosely hanging? Or it sounds like Chaz Coleman's not going to play for them this year. They were hoping he'd be the big transfer from Penn State, coming over with Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator from over there. They lost their top 6 leaders in pressures last season. Josh Josephs, Tyree West, Bryson Eason among those guys, Dominic Bailey, right? They lost their top 6 leaders in pressures. Tulane transfer Jordan Norman is the only player that had more than 15 pressures on their entire team last year, or I should say for any of their defensive linemen last year, right? They've just got this conglomeration of all of these unproven guys now on their defensive line. And I know they're always doing the hockey shifting and they're playing 8 or 9 guys at a time, but the last couple of years, we've had legitimate stars, right? We've had James Pierce Jr., we've had Josh Josephs and Tyree West last year. We had Omar Norman Lott inside a couple of years ago. Who is going to be the star on this defensive line? Because, there's a lot of bodies and there's a lot of guys with experience, but I don't know that they can replace it this time. They did a good job replacing Pierce and Norman Lott last year with another really good pass rushing crew, but that whole crew is gone. And the big guy that you were hoping in the transfer portal that was going to be with you in Chaz Coleman is not there. I would be worried about their pass rush. I love their back 7. Their defensive line, I'm not nearly as convinced on.
Yeah, the Chaz Coleman news is not great because Chaz Coleman, they officially did part ways 3 weeks ago. He was medically disqualified from the program. So wishing all the best for him in his future career, because it was, they paid him about $2 million, Dalton, to come over, which is a very high rate for a pass rusher, and he's just not going to be there anymore, right? So it ended up not being a great move for Tennessee, and unfortunately for them, because they needed him, right? Because that pass rush, like you said, is missing a lot of guys right now after losing so many guys, and after having back-to-back years with a superstar edge rusher with James Pierce Jr. and Joshua Josephs, and they thought they had one again in Chaz Coleman this year. They don't have that right now, so they're going to need a lot of unproven guys to step up in that defensive line right now. Speaking of unproven, Dalton, let's talk about the quarterback situation at Tennessee right now with Joey Aguilar now gone from the program. You're either starting a redshirt freshman quarterback in George McIntyre, who I believe was a 3rd-string quarterback last year as a true freshman at Tennessee, or you're starting a true freshman at quarterback in Faison Brandon, who was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, but still entering his first year of college football. So the pretty massive question mark as well for Tennessee on that side of the ball.
I mean, it's the biggest question mark on the whole team. It's one of the biggest question marks in the whole country. I would argue, other than the Alabama quarterback battle, that this is the biggest quarterback battle in the country, right? When you talk about two young kids who, again, the plan was to get Aguilar back and start him another year, but McIntyre's got 9 career dropbacks in mop-up duty last year. Kind of got the same skinny, pocket quarterback build as Nico Iamaleava. It's 6'6" and 200 pounds. For now, I don't think he's as good an athlete. I don't think he's as good an athlete probably as Faison Brennan, but he's got the delivery. He can throw the deep ball. It's over the top. It's kind of like just what a Josh Heupel quarterback usually looks like, right? I think what Heupel is going to just try to figure out for now with this team and so many veteran players on this offense is just which of these two guys can run this offense better. I think that's all it's going to come down to. Brandon may be the more talented guy, but I think he's really just going to want somebody who can come in and function and just functionally run the basic parts of this offense. So it's one of the biggest questions in all of college football, because did we not have this team as like out of when we did our 68 quarterback rankings, didn't we have them like 66 or 65, something like that? I mean, this is the pass rush is one thing. You can find your way around that. It's the biggest question on the whole team. Might be the biggest question in the SEC, honestly, is Tennessee's got a really good football team, but we have no idea if they have a quarterback. And McIntyre looks the part for Josh Heupel. No idea really if he can play the part.
Yeah, and look, he's a top 15 quarterback out of high school, right? So he was a highly rated recruit too. So there is talent there, and of course we've seen Josh Heupel make pretty much every quarterback work for him. Even Joe Milton had his highs, even though it was a relatively up and down year for him too. But we'll see what happens, right, with George McIntyre and Faison Brandon this year. But like you said, it was not the plan for Tennessee. They planned on having Joey Aguilar back for another year, and that didn't happen. So now they have to start a redshirt freshman in George McIntyre or a true freshman in Faison Brandon. But whoever it is, Dalton has a great running back next to him in Deshaun Bishop, redshirt junior, 5'10", 210 pounds, former walk-on, actually, at the Tennessee program. He had the 4th most rushing yards in the SEC last year with almost 1,100, 16 touchdowns, 2nd most in the SEC, almost 650 yards after contact, 4th most in the SEC. Outstanding on gap scheme runs. He had 640 rushing yards on gap scheme runs last year, averaged 7 yards per carry on gap scheme runs too. I do think his speed is just okay for the position. Probably runs in like the mid 4.5s, I would imagine right now. Doesn't really break that many tackles, but he can run through arm tackles. He breaks off a lot of big runs because he can follow his blocks really well and win with his vision. The explosiveness and the speed aren't the best right now, but really great vision, and he's coming off an outstanding year as Tennessee's #1 running back last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They added a good young player in Javen Gordon from Tulane also. But Bishop, this is really going to be his backfield this year, and he's going to play a huge part in it. We saw this with Dylan Sampson 2 years ago. Young quarterback, hey, man, we need you to be the engine of this offense. And we know the type of year that he had, and now he's on the Cleveland Browns. Bishop is going to have to, I think, have a similar type of year, but he's got the capability of doing it, especially behind a very, very good offensive line.
Definitely. Who's the star defensive player you want to talk about for Tennessee right now?
Let's talk about, one of the themes of our position rankings, especially when we did corners, was true sophomores at that position, right? And one of them is Ty Redmond, really good size, 6'2", 195 pounds. Tied for the most pass breakups in the SEC with 9, had 3 interceptions, 14 stops. This is a guy who really is a ball hawk. He likes to attack the football at all times, especially when you get him in man-to-man coverage. He got tested a lot last year, especially, some of the injuries. Jermod McCoy didn't play at all last year, so Ty Redmond all of a sudden is starting, and teams attacked him. And for for the most part, he responded well. He's a really good football player with good size, kind of like how he plays in press coverage, especially when he can keep his footwork right. The potential's all there for him to be one of the best cornerbacks in college football. Just going to see it again, clean up some of the little things, had some freshman moments, but I'll tell you what, this kid's got a boatload of potential with his size and his speed and his technique.
Yeah, really good player. Would have been a top 15 corner in the country for us if we extended that list too. Excited to see what we could do in his true sophomore year now at Tennessee, because he really did take over really well, Dalton, last year when they needed him to, and he did a great job in his true freshman year. What's the bottom line for Eli's Volunteers, Dalton? What's the floor of this team? What's the ceiling for this program right now? What do you think for Tennessee going into this year?
For as much as the quarterback situation is a problem for now, This team is sneaky, still really good. The back seven on defense is awesome. The receiving core is awesome. They got a good tight end in Ethan Davis. They can run the ball. I mean, really, other than quarterback and pass rush, I feel really good about this team. There's no reason they shouldn't, even with a young quarterback, still make a bowl game, 6-7 wins at the very least. But I'll be honest with you, I think if they were to get good quarterback play, there's a road here for this team to do what they did 2 years ago and kind of sneak into that 10-2 playoff conversation. And you look at a lot of the big games they're getting at home. Texas at home, LSU at home, Alabama at home, Auburn at home. They get the rivalry game with Vandy at home. There are so many games here they get in their home stadium that's going to be rocking against some of those big time teams that if they don't get good quarterback play, the rest of the roster will just probably drag them to a bowl game. But I think this is actually one of the sneakier, like, hey, there's like at least a minor road to playoff contention here type of teams. They just we don't know if they had Joey Aguilar on this team, there's a decent chance I'd pick him to go to the playoff with this schedule and the number of big home games that they have. It's just the quarterback problem.
Yeah. This is the first team that we're doing, by the way, where the floor is still making a bowl game. I think the absolute floor is 6-6 right now. I think they'll be better than that, though, because I think there's 6 games they should win. If they don't make a bowl game, I'd be floored, honestly, for Tennessee right now. Ceiling wise, 9-3, maybe 10-2 for this program right now, too, because I got the game against Texas and LSU, and at A&M is a hard game too as a playoff team from last year. So maybe 10-2, but around 9-3, 10-2 is the ceiling for this program right now. Before we move on, Dalton, we get our producer Eli in here if you can. Eli, what are you expecting for your Volunteers in 2026?
That's a great question. It doesn't feel great when Dalton says the biggest question on teams, quarterback and pass rush, considering those are in the modern game the most important things. I'm going to err on the positive side, especially I want them to start Faison. I just feel like that's a more exciting start for me. I'm going to go with 9-3. I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna say that they win most of the swing games. Alabama's kind of in the same situation where like their quarterback, you don't know what's gonna happen. So let's say they do that, and then maybe you steal a game against A&M. Defense can maybe cause some problems for Reed, but it's kind of where my head is going into the season.
So not 12-0 floor, 12-0 ceiling like Donnie said in the chat.
No, I like what Donnie's going for though. I respect it. What do they say? It's always bribery will get you everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. All right, fair enough. Fair enough for the Volunteers. Should be a fascinating year, I think, for the Josh Heupel-led Tennessee Volunteers this year too. Dalton, before we move on actually to the second half of the SEC preview that we got right now, we want to talk about a new sponsor of the show that we actually have right now, and a very exciting one as well, because All 22 is a new sponsor on this show, Dalton, and it is a really awesome fantasy football platform for you guys to check out right now. And if you think about it, Dalton, like all fantasy football platforms are basically the same limited player pool, same garbage time, stat padding, same lineup decisions. It's not really football or anything close to it. All 22 is doing something completely different in the fantasy football world right now. This is the only fantasy football game that you guys can get with 53-man rosters, including offensive linemen as well. So if you're looking to play a game and you understand football on a deeper level, which, by the way, if you're already watching this right now after watching our back half of the SEC preview for the last 2 hours, you're a diehard football fan. You probably love this kind of game as well. It's more than just quarterback stats or fantasy points. This is the game for you. You're managing a real depth chart using personnel packages, and you have access to advanced stats to make decisions every single week. And like I said, if you're listening to our show, man, this is your kind of fantasy football. It's kind of like Madden franchise mode, where you're drafting, roster building, and offensive line play actually matter too, using PFF grades as kind of a baseline as well. So if you're tired of cookie cutter fantasy football apps and want something deeper, smarter, and more competitive, go download All 22 Fantasy Football in the App Store, or visit all22.com and join the community now using promo code WALK, that's WALK, at all22.com right now, or on the app right now. All 22, less fantasy, more football. Again, full 53-man rosters, advanced stats, and real strategy. Download the app, or visit all22.com and use promo code WALK. All22, less fantasy, more football. All right, Dalton, let's get into the second half of this SEC preview right now. We're already 2 hours in to the stream, so maybe we'll make it a little more moving on these next ones. Missouri is up next at number 8 for us in this preview. A down year, sort of, for Missouri last year. 8-5 record after winning really 21 games in the past 2 years. All 5 of their losses came to teams that finished in the top 20 of the AP poll, but they also did not beat a Power 4 team with a winning record last year either. Still, even with kind of the down year, the best 3-year stretch for the program since the late 1960s. Missouri kind of staved off rumors of Eli Drinkwitz leaving the program. They gave him a 6-year extension in November, but they did lose their offensive coordinator in Kirby Moore, who is now the new head coach at Washington State. Michigan offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey was hired to be the main play caller at Missouri. Corey Batoon entering his 3rd season as defensive coordinator, the best running back in America, Ahmad Hardy, a top 10 offensive line, and a nice set of weapons in Caden Lee and Donovan Olugbode coming in at wide receiver as well. A new quarterback coming in Austin Simmons, who was the Ole Miss starter originally last year. There are some questions along the defensive line and secondary as well, but this linebacker unit is absolutely elite with Nick Rodriguez and Robert Woodyard Jr. too. But yeah, Eli Drake was doing an outstanding job turning around the Missouri program right now.
For sure. It's a different winning culture that they have now. And the down year last year, even down at 8-5, right, still a solid season. Really, to me, can just be attributed to their quarterback situation, right? Obviously, Bo Pribula with the injury, having to finish the year with Matt Zollers as the quarterback, and Pribula trying to come back, and it didn't really work. So, that's really a big question on this team. But he's really created a stable foundation for them with the O-line and the run game and everything they've got going. Obviously, you hope Ahmad Hardy's healthy for the season. We'll get into that in a minute. And then, what they've built defensively over the last couple of years. A lot of NFL talent coming out of this defense the last couple of years. So I think Missouri, they've become this program that's kind of stable. They're trying to break through into the top tier in the SEC, but Drinkwitz has done a great job of building the foundation for this football team the last 3 years.
Definitely. I think that really, Dolan, the biggest strength of this team is simply this run game could be the best in college football next year. If you get Ahmad Hardy fully healthy, which we're, of course, all our thoughts and prayers are with him after, really he got shot in the leg at a concert. He's really just a bystander in that incident too. So thankfully, it seems like his recovery is going pretty well. But if he's back, he's the best running back in college football. Your number 2 running back is Jamal Roberts. He ran for over 750 yards last year. Really solid player too. Number 6 offensive line in the country too, with a couple of really great players in that unit. Other 3 starters or previous starters too at other schools. They were 7th in the nation in yards per carry last year at 6 yards per carry. Could be even higher next year too, because you got a great running back unit and a great offensive line blocking for them too.
Don't forget, too, they've got their 3rd running back, Zayshawn Edwards, coming up from Houston Christian, who had a 1,000-yard season last year also. So even if Hardy isn't quite ready for the very beginning of the season, they're set with Roberts and Edwards back there. And obviously, maybe they're hoping Austin Simmons can add a little bit to the run game as well. But to me, I think also, other than the quarterback situation, the biggest question I would have on this team is their pass defense. They lost 8 of the 9 players who led them in coverage snaps last season. Santana Banner at safety is the only returning starter in the secondary. Obviously, at linebacker, we feel good about them, even in coverage with Nick Rodriguez and Robert Woodyard. But when you talk about then the pass rush, right, and losing Damon Wilson to the portal to Miami, losing Zion Young to the NFL draft, 6 of their 8 pressure leaders are gone from last season. When you look at the inexperience a little bit and the lack of production on their defensive line, Darius Smith is the only player returning who had at least 15 pressures last season. So I do have my questions about them in their pass defense. The linebacker unit is awesome with Woodyard and Rodriguez, but the secondary behind them, there were moments where they struggled a bit last year against better teams, and now there's a lot less experience back there, and really curious to see how they can replace the big-time pass rush production of Damon Wilson and Zion Young. That's a huge question for me.
Let's talk about the biggest question on offense, Dalton, really, and that is, of course, quarterback Austin Simmons, who was originally the starter at Ole Miss last year before going down with an injury, and of course, Trinidad Champs was so good that he couldn't really win his job back at Ole Miss, but now he transfers over to Missouri to be their starting quarterback right now. Only 2 career starts, but what should we know about Austin Simmons as the new starting quarterback at Missouri?
Yeah, so you've got a southpaw here with a really strong arm, and obviously his season didn't go the way he wanted it to with the ankle injury, and then Trinidad Chambliss basically just taking his job the rest of the way, right, taking the reins of that Ole Miss offense and going to the playoff. But you've got a kid with a big time arm. He's got, for PFF over a 7% big time throw rate in his career. He can make every vertical throw that you want to. When you talk about the speed in this receiving core that he has to work with, he can do that. The big thing with Simmons is that he's got to continue to get his feet wet and just get out there, right? He made 2 starts last year before getting hurt. He's only got 2 career starts, and he's got to just cool the decision making down under pressure, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Is it's good that he's playing behind a very good offensive line with Caden Green and those guys, but gotta not give the football away in tough situations. Throw it away, take a sack, check the football down. It just seems to be when he gets late in the play and the defensive line is starting to heat up on him, then he starts to get himself into trouble. If he plays with good ball security, this offense could actually be very good and possibly more two-dimensional than it was last year with Prbula and Zollers and everything else going on there. He's just got to be able to just calm down, get his feet set, and not worry so much about a pass rush coming at him. But he's got a very good offensive line that's going to be protecting him.
And a great running back, too, to rely on in Ahmad Hardy, our number 1 running back in college football, transferred in last year from Louisiana Monroe, led the nation with almost 1,200 yards after contact last year as a true sophomore, led the Power 4 with nearly 1,650 rushing yards last year, led the Power 4 with 96 broken tackles last year. He has almost 3,000 rushing yards over the last 2 years. That's 400 more than any other returning running back in college football. He has elite contact balance, compact build at 5'10", 206 pounds, only 94 receiving yards in his career. So he's got to show a little bit more as a pass catcher, too. And like I said before, he was shot in the upper leg at a concert in May as a bystander. The surgery was successful, though, and Hardy is apparently ahead of schedule in his recovery. But his status for the season, whether or not he'd be playing for the entirety of the year or miss a few games or what have you, that's kind of still up in the air right now. But it does fortunately sound like his recovery is going really, really well right now. Again, all thoughts and prayers are going out to Ahmad Hardy right now. But when on the field, Dalton, there's no way around it. He is absolutely minimum a top 3 running back in America, and not even argument. We would think right now he is the best running back in college football.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You talk about what he can do after contact and breaking tackles. 96 missed tackles forced last year, led the Power 4 over 1,600 yards, led the Power 4 1,181 of those yards after contact, which is just ridiculous. And his lower body strength and his contact balance is awesome. You'd like to see him add a little bit more to the passing game as a receiver and even as a pass protector. But as a pure runner, to me, I don't think there's anybody better in college football right now.
Definitely. Who's the star defensive player you want to highlight here?
Let's go to that linebacking core we keep talking about with Nick Rodriguez, our number 5 linebacker in preferred walk-ons position rankings, a wrestling background that really shows, plays with a low center of gravity, tackles low and tackles well. He's got enough speed to work in space, sideline to sideline, and in coverage. And this is a player who really came on in the second half of last season as he got more of a starting opportunity, 59 tackles, 5 pressures, 30 stops, was 3rd on the team, 3 pass breakups. And you just saw the improvement as 2025 went on. Now that he's a solid established starter for an entire offseason, really think that him and Robert Woodyard coming in from Auburn, they're going to be the leaders of this defense.
Definitely. All right, Dalton, bottom line time now for the Missouri Tigers. What is the minimum record? Will they bounce back after a somewhat down, quote unquote, year at 8-5 last year? What are you expecting? Like, what's the minimum? What's the maximum for Missouri next year?
I think what's funny with Missouri, and especially with their quarterback situation, we've talked about some teams with some wide variances that were like, hey, they could win 2, they could win 9, whatever. I think they actually just have a narrow, solid projection. Like they're just going to win somewhere from 6 to 8 games. Like we know they're a good team, right? And I feel good about, out of conference wins against Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Troy. And I think they're better than Kansas, but it's still a road game, right? Like we know it feels like they're the team that they're going to beat who they're supposed to beat, and they're probably going to lose to who they're supposed to lose to, teams like, at Ole Miss and Texas and at Georgia, right? It's just how much more can Austin Simmons raise the ceiling? Because that's really been the big question the entire time, right? A couple of years ago, when they had Brady Cook, and he was hot. He was hot. When he was cold, it didn't happen. Last year, the quarterback situation was a mess. So it's really, I think they have a solid football team all around. They do have some flaws to me in their pass defense. And then, Austin Simmons is really going to determine it. But I think they're good enough, absolutely, to make a bowl game, even with a tough schedule in the SEC. It's just a matter of how much more can they get out of the passing game this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a very narrow margin. I think a 6-6 is a floor. I think they're going to make a bowl game. 8-4, maybe 9-3 is the ceiling, I would say, for this program right now. A couple swing games in there against Florida and Texas A&M that I think will be interesting to watch for them too. But yeah, somewhere between 6-6 and 8-4, 9-3 is probably what I would expect for Missouri this year. Probably not a playoff caliber team, but also one that's gonna be a tough out in the SEC as well, and a team that definitely should make a bowl game in 2026 once again under Eli Drinkwitz. So also, let's get to our number 7 team now in the SEC, and maybe a surprise for some people to be this low on this list, but it's Alabama. Alabama is our number 7 team in the SEC going into the year. And in 2024, of course, a disappointing year for Kalen DeBoer, going 9-4 and missing the college football playoff. They bounced back in a big way, though. They went 11-4, beat Oklahoma in the first round of the college football playoff before getting smoked by Indiana in the quarterfinal round. But even with the bounce back year, these 2 seasons under Kalen DeBoer are still Alabama's 2 worst years in back-to-back years since 2006 and 2007, which was the final year before Nick Saban and the first year under Nick Saban. Even so, Kalen DeBoer did get a 7-year extension this offseason, making him one of the 5 highest paid coaches in the country. A lot of rumors that he would leave for the Michigan job, but of course he's staying now at Alabama. He's bringing back offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb for his 2nd season on the job. Kane Womack is back at defensive coordinator for his 3rd season on the job too. Really a fascinating year, Dalton, for Alabama offensively and defensively right now, because the offense is a lot of great players, a brand new quarterback this year. You lost your leading rusher from last year too. You lost 3 of your 5 leading receivers, lost 6 out of the 7 offensive linemen that played 300 snaps last year too. The secondary is outstanding, but there's a lot of question marks in the front 7 as well. It's just a really, really fascinating year for Alabama. It's almost the way to put it, because I think Alabama's a team that I can see being really good if all these guys hit their ceiling, but also a lot of new faces and a lot of unknowns right now for Alabama.
Yeah, it feels weird the further away we get from Nick Saban, obviously being their head coach, and having to readjust the standards and what we think of Alabama, right? Because I mean, there was a decade straight, maybe more than that, where it was, hey, they're probably going to win the national title this year, and that's just not. It's not the case anymore, right? And I think the big thing is, and first thing Kalen DeBoer needs, despite getting whacked by Indiana in the playoff, he needs to get credit for getting this team to the final 8 last year with the team that he had, because they were a very flawed football team. Now they're kind of a team in transition, right? Offensive line, quarterback. There's some key spots where it's like, we really don't know what to expect from this Crimson Tide team. And it's probably going to be a bit frustrating early in the season for their fans, obviously, who have high standards, at least I think. But, there's still a lot of talent. They recruit with the best of them, and they get all the talent and the players and everything. Like, they just, especially at quarterback and offensive line, to me, they're going to have to figure it out. There might be some bumps in the road here.
Definitely. I think the biggest strength, and the one thing that we do know about Alabama, it's arguably the best secondary in college football that they have right now. Our number 2 as a show, I had it personally number 1 on my list over Notre Dame. They brought back 4 of their 5 starters in that secondary from last year. Those already 6th in PFF coverage grade as a team last year. The number 2 corner in the country in Dijon Lee Jr., number 2 safety in the country in Bray Hubbard, number 10 safety in the country in Keon Sabb, and arguably a top 15 corner in Xavion Brown, who might be a first-round pick in the NFL draft too. Dalton, this secondary is absolutely freaking loaded for Alabama right now.
Yeah, you better throw the word arguably up on that graphic up there, because you were the one arguing it, and I ended up winning the battle with Notre Dame.
Right.
Anyway, I knew you had to throw it in there. No, I mean, I think it's the theme on this Alabama team, really on both sides of the ball, that we love the perimeter athletes. The secondary is elite. It's maybe the deepest secondary in the country. And then you look at him at wide receiver on the offensive side of the ball: Ryan Coleman-Williams, Lottie Brooks, Noah Rogers, the transfer in from NC State. I know he had a spring injury, but if he can get healthy, it doesn't get much better than those 3 at wide receiver, right? So kind of the theme here is the perimeter athletes on this team are awesome. They're as good as anybody in the country. And now we start digging into the hard part and the physical part in the trenches. And for all the questions that we do have, which quarterback's going to play and the offensive lineman, the thing that sticks from last year that I think is still the biggest question: are they capable at all of running the football?
Yeah.
Because by the time we got to the end of the year, and especially in the playoffs, they were incapable. It wasn't just bad. They were incapable of running the football, right? You look at last year, It got to a point where they just chose not to. As far as run call percentage, 121st. Yards per carry, even excluding sacks, 128th. Yards before contact per carry, 119th. Yards after contact per carry, 108. I mean, they were just awful. They couldn't run the football, and they asked Ty Simpson to carry them, and he carried them as far as he could. You've got Daniel Hill, you've got Kevin Riley, you've got AKD are all in the backfield. None of them had 300 yards last season because, well, it was just bad. And then, like you mentioned, all the turnover on the offensive line. Now, what I would hope for is that the O-line is just, even with some of the guys that they've lost, is just somehow kind of just better at run blocking and more in sync than last year's group was. And then if, especially if it's Keelan Russell, but whichever quarterback is going to start being more mobile than Ty Simpson, who is a true pocket passer, can open things up a little bit in this zone run game and get the option game going. I think if it is Keelan Russell, then you've got an argument where you go, okay, we could be back here, right? And the quarterback's going to be a big part of it. But I come into this year in the same spot with this as we were last year, where it's like, I have no idea if they're capable of running the football, even capable of it.
Yeah, and they lost the leading rusher, like I said, in Jam Miller, and they brought in Hollywood Smothers originally in the portal, but he decommitted and flipped to Texas in the portal. So they thought they had it fixed with Hollywood Smothers, but they didn't really add anything at running back either. You lost your leading rusher. I know, Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley and AKD especially are like highly rated recruits coming out of high school, but they got to prove it now. And now with an offensive line that lost so many starters, including a top 15 pick at left tackle and Caden Proctor, a lot of question marks for that run game right now too. And Dawn, a lot of question marks for the quarterback is who's going to be. It's going to be Keelan Russell or Austin Mack right now. The current projected starter is Keelan Russell as the younger player, but Austin Mack is an experienced player with Kalen DeBoer at least too. But Keelan Russell, Dalton, a lot of hype around him right now, considering coming out in 2025, he was the number 2 overall player coming out of high school, only behind Bryce Underwood.
Yeah, and Russell seems to have the inside track right now. There's been a lot of comps even since he's come out of high school that he's a similar player possibly to Jaden Daniels, right? You talk about the mobility, the smooth and quick and quiet release that he has in the pocket, the ability and the field vision to see things down the seams, down the middle of the field. And he's got the inside track this spring and summer, because in the spring game, he threw 4 touchdowns while Austin Mack left the game early with an injury. So it feels like we're getting to a path here where Russell is going to be the starter eventually. Kalen's going to obviously have the entire competition and play it out. He likes Austin Mack. He's been with him a long time, even going back to Washington. But if you do get Keelan Russell here, I think what you get back to is a true dual threat who eventually obviously is a way better runner right this minute than Ty Simpson. He's just a better athlete, but bringing that dynamic athleticism while also potentially being a much better passer than Jalen Milroe was 2 years ago. That's the hope, is that Keelan Russell becomes that Jaden Daniels type of supernova who can carry your entire offense, right, and make the run game better and get the ball down the seams and out to the perimeter to this great group of wide receivers. So a ton of potential here for sure. We just got to see him on the field. Only 17 dropbacks last season in mop-up duty.
Definitely. I think the star offensive player for him is another guy, Dalton, that needs to prove a lot, and that's Ryan Coleman Williams at wide receiver right now, who entered last year as our number 2 receiver in the country, of course, on the cover of the video game EA College Football 26, but nightmare of a sophomore year, right? Dropped 17% of his targets. That was the 7th worst mark in the Power 4. But still, it should be said he's still a top 10 receiver pretty easily in college football, borderline top 5 right now. Over 1,500 receiving yards in his first 2 years, second only to Jeremiah Smith among returning Power 4 receivers. About 730 yards after the catch over the last 2 years, third to Jeremiah Smith and Malachi Toney in that stretch too. He was only 18 years old for all of his sophomore year, turned 19 years old in February. Still a very young kid. Like the runs on the 4.2s, a very great top end speed, advanced route runner for his age as well. His agility and his speed are really great. He's a weapon after the catch. And yeah, he's got to clean up the drops and add some mass to his frame. He's only 180 pounds right now at 6 feet tall. But there's still a lot to bet on, and he's still a very young kid. I think Ryan Coleman Williams could be in for a huge bounce back junior year, I think.
Yeah, he's just got to get the confidence back, right? Got to get the hands back going. And I think just in general, it just seemed like mentally he just wasn't all there after a while, right? And it felt like he lost the confidence. We know he's so talented, right? Like he is absolutely talented enough to be one of the, 5'3" to best receivers in the country. I mean, I know we got a high standard there when we talk about Jeremiah Smith and Malachi Toney at the top, but he can be a wide receiver who's the center of your entire passing game and doing anything from all sorts of places in the formation. He's a little bit smaller, but I think there's a lot of his game when he's on that looks a lot like CeeDee Lamb. Like, he can be that type of weapon for you at all levels of the field. Just get the confidence back, find the chemistry with the quarterback, and he can be one of the best players in the country.
A lot of great secondary players, Dalton, for you to pick from here in the defensive player spotlight, but you went with Bray Hubbard, the superstar safety, the second best safety in the country from Alabama.
Our number 2 safety in college football behind another guy we're going to talk about a little bit later for the Georgia Bulldogs. But when you look at what Bray Hubbard's done over the last year and a half, really burst onto the scene in the second half of 2024. And then last year, really as the established enforcer box safety of this group. To me, he's the guy on the inside who you really worry about. He can hunt the football, right? 4 interceptions and 4 pass breakups last year. He makes a boatload of tackles for this team. He's one of the best run defenders in college football, 90 total tackles last year, 30 stops. He can blitz if you need him to, 11 pressures and 2 sacks. I think the rest of this secondary, when you look at everything they have, Xavier Brown and Deshaun Lee, Keon Sabb back there at free safety, everyone else has a kind of this defined role that, like, just in a singular sense, they're very good at. Bray Hubbard is the guy that fills in all the gaps, right? And every defense nowadays, with every team going to, nickel is the new base and 5 defensive backs all the time, you need a tweener. Bray Hubbard is that tweener. Down in the box, in the slot, man-to-man, blitzing, third linebacker, and run support. He just does everything else to fill in the gaps between that second. If you could call it like level 2.5 in your defense, Bray Hubbard is level 2.5 in Alabama's defense. And to me, he's just the enforcer of the entire thing.
Yeah, seven picks in his career, and he's maybe a better run defender than he is a coverage player, right? So it's unreal how good he has been over the last couple of years now for Alabama. Yeah, definitely one of the best safeties in college football, and great argument to be number 1 on the list too. We had KJ Bolden above him from Georgia, but it's a very good argument for Bray Hubbard to be number 1 on that list too. Dawn, what's the bottom line for Alabama right now? What do you think the floor is for this brand new roster the Crimson Tide are rolling out in 2026? And really, what is the ceiling if all goes right for this brand new roster for Alabama this year?
This is hard. I mean, because it used to be so easy with Alabama where you just go, well, yeah, they're going to make the playoff. They're going to be a top 8 team. They're going to be a top 5 team in the country. But with so much transition at quarterback, on the O-line, I have no idea if they can run the ball. And we haven't talked about, for as much as we love their secondary, I don't know that I love their front 7. I have this is another team other than Yancey Pierre. I have no idea if they can rush the passer outside of that one guy. And then they have so much inexperience at linebacker aside from Caleb Woodson transferring in from Virginia Tech. They're really relying on a lot of young pieces. Like, if you told me that things kind of went wrong here, especially with a young quarterback in the O-line, if you told me they went 7-5, I don't think I'd be that shocked. And then if you hit the ceiling on a lot of this, where you go, okay, the O-line just kind of functions better and they gel better in the run game, and Keelan Russell's a monster right off rip, and they find a second or a third pass rusher in there. Maybe it's Devin Tompkins or Jamarian Latham or Justin Hill, whoever that may be. If they find all of those things, they can get to where they got to last year. And depending on how good your quarterback and Keelan Russell is, maybe even further. It's probably going to land somewhere in between those two things with 8 or 9 wins, because their schedule isn't horrible. But there's a lot of youth on this team, and I think it's going to take them a while early in the season to really get everything gelled together.
Yeah, I wrote down 8-4 as the floor, but it could be even lower than that, considering they went or they had 9 wins a couple years ago. So it's weird. I think 8-4 is the floor. Ceiling, maybe 11-1. Like, right? I mean, the schedule is not that impossible right now. They play Georgia. They're at LSU. They host A&M. They're at Tennessee. But other than that, they probably should win every other game they play on their schedule. So I think 11-1 with maybe a loss to Georgia and making the quarterfinals once again in the playoff. I don't think I would expect anything more than the quarterfinals of the playoff for Alabama right now. But 11-1 is the ceiling. 7-5, 8-4 is probably the floor for Alabama right now. So we'll see what happens this year.
Yeah, I mean, I look at least 4 games that I feel, probably 5 games, maybe even 6 that I feel really good about. I mean, it's the thing of, like, it's Alabama, and you're used to them having this floor of talent where there's a handful of games where you go, yeah, they're going to win those. But then it feels like the last couple of years that shine is kind of off it, right? where it's like, all of a sudden they've lost to Vanderbilt and they're struggling with South Carolina and they lost to Florida State last year, who ended up, what, 4-8 or 5-7, whatever they ended up. It's hard. They're one of the hardest teams in this conference to project. I'm not sure. I think the ceiling probably rides with Keelan Russell in all likelihood, but there's real flaws on this team and there's a lot of youth on this team.
Yeah, it certainly is. Don, let's get into another team that made the playoff last year. That is the Texas A&M Aggies, coming in here at number 6 for us. Mike Elko, the head coach, heading into his 3rd year now. Starting off his tenure really solidly with an 8-5 record in 2024. Took a big jump last year, though, an 11-2 record for Texas A&M, its best record in 5 years. They started 11-0, actually, for the first time in 33 years before losing the last 2 games of the year to Texas and then to Miami in the first round of the college football playoff, their first playoff appearance actually in program history. Mike Elko got a 6-year extension worth about $70 million this past season. He did lose his offensive coordinator in Colin Klein, who left the team to become the head coach at Kansas State, his alma mater. So the wide receivers coach, Holman Wiggins, was promoted to offensive coordinator. Defensive coordinator Jay Bateman left to become the defensive coordinator at Kentucky. So Lyle Hemphill was promoted from senior assistant to defensive coordinator. So a couple of promotions for A&M at the coordinator spots right now. Brought back your starting quarterback in Marcel Reed and your top rusher in Ruben Owens and a top 5 receiver in Mario Craver. You lost 4 starters from an offensive line last year, though, too. A lot of key players gone from that defense, like Torian York and Cassius Howell as well. But still a top 10 linebacker unit in America, a top 10 safety in Marcus Ratcliffe, too. And plus, Mike Elko always seems to produce great results on that side of the ball. But really, Dalton, an excellent job by Mike Elko to turn around this A&M program after, it was kind of stagnant, it felt like, under Jimbo Fisher.
For sure. I mean, what a year it was for this A&M football team, starting 11-0, some dramatic wins mixed in there, some great defense played. You got a little bit hot and cold out of Marcel Reed, and even dealing with some running back injuries and working through that. And then the obviously last year, the duo of Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver really led the way on offense. But I mean, that was a team with so many veterans that they had that was ready to make a playoff push. And they did that. And they played obviously a very competitive game with the eventual runner-up in the Miami Hurricanes. But it was a great season. And Mike Elko's done such a great job in his first couple of years establishing the culture for this A&M team.
Yeah, I think the biggest strength of this program right now is probably the weaponry on offense. Even though they did lose a first-round receiver in Casey Concepcion, the weapons are still really good around Marcel Reed right now. Our number 7 receiving core in college football, a top 5 receiver in Mario Craver leading it. They also brought in Isaiah Horton from Alabama, and they brought back Ashton Bethel Roman, too. And your leading rusher is back in Ruben Owens, too. So we have some questions about Marcel Reed, Dalton, and of course, with that offensive line. But the weaponry around Marcel Reed is pretty excellent.
Yeah, no, certainly the weaponry is good. Isaiah Horton as an after-the-catch option. I really like the way that Ashton Bethel Roman came on as a vertical threat last year. I think that's going to be really valuable for them. And I think the idea this year needs to be, because obviously you had Craver and Concepcion last year, so you could do it with both of them. In the same way that Miami made Malachi Toney just the center of everything in their offense, I think A&M needs to do that with Craver. All 53 yards of width of the field, he needs to be lined up at anywhere, any given play. Every motion should go through him, jet sweeps, and just everything. I mean, when I tell you everything should be designed around Mario Craver, and then work from there with the rest of it, because he's your one elite player. Like, those other guys are good. They're good. Bethel Roman and Horton and Owens, all those guys are good players. Marcel Reed's a good player. Mario Craver's an elite football player who needs to get the ball 12 to 15 times a game.
You have one big question mark, though, on this offense. That's not Marcel Reed. It is this offensive line that lost a lot of stars. What was a really good unit last year?
So this team really does want to run the ball at the base of things first and foremost, and that was really established when Marcel Reed became the quarterback, about halfway through 2024. But you just lost 4 NFL offensive linemen and 4 pretty darn good ones, too. Trey Zune was the highest graded pass blocker in the country. Chase Basantis was a top 40 pick. He'll be starting for the Arizona Cardinals. Armaj Reed Adams and Demetrius Crownover got drafted. What are we looking at on this offensive line? The center, Mark Nabu Jr., is the only returning starter, and he only had a 64.8 PFF grade last year. You're bringing in, we've talked about, okay, LSU's offensive line has struggled the last couple of years. Well, you're bringing in Tyree Adams and Cohen Eccles to start. from LSU where they were struggling. Wilkin Formby, I saw someone mention him in the chat. He was getting rotated at right tackle at Alabama between tackle and guard last year. He looks like you're starting right tackle. I mentioned South Carolina's offensive line struggling. Trovon Ball looks like he's going to take a starting guard spot on this team. I'd be worried about this for a team that wants to be physical and run the ball. And Marcel Reed and some of the decisions he makes under pressure sometimes. These aren't just 4 new starters. You're going from 4 NFL players to 4 guys who have at least a year, if not 2, of really struggling at other programs. And again, you try to put it together. Plus, you have a new OC and Holman Wiggin, obviously only coaching, calling plays for 1 game last year, and they scored 3 points. I'm concerned with this. I'm concerned that Texas A&M, for as good as they are on the outside and at the skill spots, I'm worried that they can be had in the trenches in certain matchups.
Yeah, especially Dalton with a quarterback in Marcel Reed that, can produce some high highs, but also has some really low lows too. And, I know a lot of people last year were really high on him, and, we were always kind of pumping the brakes on Marcel Reed, and he kind of proved in the bigger moments last year against teams like Texas and then the first round of the playoff against Miami that there's still kind of a long way to go for Marcel Reed as a quarterback right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when if you want Marcel Reed, if you want to know everything about Marcel Reed as a player, just go back and watch last year's South Carolina game, right? Because in the first half, he looked like the worst quarterback in the country. In the second half, he looked like a top 10 quarterback in the country. And you can get the difference in those 2 guys in one body from half to half, from drive to drive, from play to play. And I think one of the things that really there's a couple of things. One, his mechanics are a little funky. The accuracy can be all over the place, right? 2, he loves the system. He loves play action. Max, last year with play action, 17 touchdowns, 1 interception, right? Spectacular. Without play action, traditional dropbacks, 8 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, right? So you sit here and you look at Reed and you go, is this a guy who, when it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, can get you through that? A year and a half, almost 2 years in, we still kind of really don't know that. And it looked for a moment like he could have done that against Miami. He let them all the way down, and then it got to 3rd down. He throws a game-ending pick, right? So there's such a high and such a low with him. He's also a big factor in the run game. I shouldn't forget that because he's a former basketball player. He's a great athlete. He can run the football, right? But it's moments with him, and I do worry about him a bit. Again, with a patchwork, I'm going to call it right now, offensive line. Is he going to be able to handle that pressure and really be the leader of this team? Or is it going to look something, I don't know that it'll be this bad, but who knows? Is it going to be something like we were talking about with Lenora Sellers last year, where it was like, boy, they can't block for him and he's struggling with it, right?
Yeah.
So nobody with a wider range of outcomes play to play than Marcel Reed.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to sound like we're hating on him too much, but again, there is high highs there with Marcel Reed, and Eli even put in the chat that Marcel Reed's the verbal meme of "I have 2 wolves in me." It's a great point, right? It's a great way to put it. It's that he's just a guy
it's like you and me.
Yeah,
exactly. What it is.
Exactly. I don't know what to expect from Marcel Reed. Every single play, every single game, whatever. It's really hot and cold for him right now, and you want to see him develop a little more. He's still a young kid. I believe he's a redshirt sophomore last year, redshirt junior this year, I believe now, but still a young kid. But yeah, he's got a lot to prove, I think, this year. And I think he got maybe a little too overhyped by a lot of people last year too. Star offensive player cannot be overhyped though, Dalton. That is Mario Craver right now, a top 5 receiver in America, transferred in from Mississippi State last year, 3rd in the Power 4 last year with almost 3.3 yards per route run, 575 yards after the catch, 3rd in the Power 4, 22 broken tackles after the catch, 5th in the Power 4. He only had 2 fewer yards than a first-round pick in Casey Concepcion in that offense. But also, he missed a game due to injury, whereas Concepcion played the whole season. So he missed a game and still only had 2 fewer yards than Casey Concepcion. He's very slight. He's only 5'9", 165 pounds. He has elite speed, one of the fastest players in the country, probably might run in the 4.2s in the 40-yard dash. Really unguardable against Notre Dame's elite secondary. He had 7 catches for 207 yards and a touchdown in that game, a win for A&M too. And despite being so small, does not go down easily in the open field either. He's really good after the catch. He's fluid in and out of his breaks as a route runner too. Good ball tracking ability on the deep ball. So his size is a big question mark for him right now, but elite speed, great agility, and he plays bigger than that size of the ball in his hands too.
Oh, totally agree. I mean, he's so much fun to watch. He's so dangerous after the catch. And I mean, we saw it so early last year against, in that game against Notre Dame, the win over Notre Dame, what he can do with the football in his hands. He's incredible. Obviously undersized, but again, I would make him just like Malachi Tony and just go, hey, everything runs through him or the threat of him at all times because he can score on any given play, man. And for him to be now, it's not 1 and 1A anymore with him and Concepcion, with him just being a clear cut number one player in this offense. It's got to run through him. And I think if A&M does want to get back to the playoff, we need to be talking about at the end of the year 1,300 yards from Mario Craver.
Definitely. Who is the star defensive player for A&M that you want to talk about right now?
Go with a guy who made our top 10 safeties list. That's safety number 9 here, Marcus Ratcliffe. And this is a guy, look, 3 years of starting experience, kind of the very, like a low key player who's got 4 career interceptions in 3 years. But I think for this defense, he does a lot of the same things that, say, Bray Hubbard does for Alabama, right? He kind of fills in the gaps at that, that level between 2 and 3 in there. Really good in run support, just a well-rounded football player. Didn't have any interceptions last year, but 3 pass breakups. And I like, this whole secondary, I think, is really talented. Des Ricks coming back, starting a corner. You lost Will Lee, but I like this safety combination of Ratcliffe and Dalton Brooks then as the true free safety behind him. But Marcus Ratcliffe is a guy who just is always involved in and around on and around the football. 63 tackles last year, 18 stops, more than willing to meet running backs in the hole as kind of that third linebacker. So I think when you look at that second level a lot too in the run game, really like Damian Sanford and Ray Coney at linebacker. And if you ask me who their third linebacker is, I'm probably not going to tell you another linebacker. I'm going to tell you it's Marcus Ratcliffe.
Yeah, he's an awesome player. Really great box safety. One of the most physical safeties you'll find in college football right now. Dalton, let's go to the bottom line now for A&M. Can they make the playoff again this year? What's the minimum? Like, what is the absolute worst case scenario for Texas A&M? And, at its ceiling, can this be a playoff team once again?
Worst case scenario that they certainly are not expecting is like 6 and 6 or 7 and 5, right? Like you've got some out of conference. Missouri State's a win, Citadel's a win. I would take them at home to beat Arizona State. We like them better than Kentucky, Arkansas, South Carolina, although at South Carolina is always tricky. So, that sort of thing. There's some tough games here. I mean, at LSU, the Texas game always looms at the end, and Texas beat them last year. You're at Missouri, you're at Oklahoma, you're at Alabama. Like, they're going to have to win some really tough road games. One of the low-key stories last year, I don't think that got talked about enough. I don't know if it was the number one easiest, but Texas A&M did have one of the easiest schedules in the SEC last year when it got down to it. Obviously, they lost the Texas game, but LSU was obviously down, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida. Like, they really got to play a lot of the bottom half of the SEC. That's not the case this year with a lot of big games on their schedule. So they need the offensive line it's not going to be what it was last year with all those NFL players, but they need the offensive line to be stable. They need Reed to be better in big moments. If they can do all of that, I think they do have enough talent to get to the playoff again, but the road is not going to be as easy as it was last year. And obviously the win over Notre Dame at Notre Dame, we got to give them credit for, but a lot of their SEC schedule that, they got away with a bit in certain games. Auburn game was close. The South Carolina game, the Arkansas game, they barely escaped. Like they're playing a better schedule this year. It's going to be tough. So there's a wide range for them to me.
Yeah, I think 6 and 6 is the absolute minimum. They're going to win 6 games, I think, at least. I think the ceiling is probably 10 and 2. I would give this program right now, and maybe making the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, taking a step forward from last year too. Don't know about much more than that though right now. So I think that's kind of the ceiling I see for them. But yeah, somewhere between 6 and 10 wins is probably what I would expect for Texas A&M going into next year, because they have a pretty hard schedule that they do have. But I think it's still a good enough team that'll win 6 or 10 games.
I'll tell you one more guy that they really need to step up, because this is also a team that lost their top 3 pressure leaders in Cassius Howell and Deion Hayes and Tyler Onyedem. They need Anto Saka, the transfer defensive end, to step up as the big-time pass rusher. They had success the last 2 years with a transfer pass rusher in Cassius Howell, absolute monster, Cincinnati Bengal, now second-round pick. They need Anto Saka's got a ton of potential. I need it more consistently. I need a more consistent run defender, but they're going to need him to be their number one pass rusher and really provide that, because that's something that Howell the last 2 years especially has provided this team, especially when they were ahead in games.
Yeah, Anto Saka is a really athletic player transferring in. I'm really excited to see if he could live up to that. The fill in the shoes that Cassius Howell left behind him as well. So that wraps up A&M. Let's go to our number 5 team now in the SEC. That is the Oklahoma Sooners, and Dalton has been a roller coaster for Brent Venables as their head coach in his 4 years there, but kind of a weirdly consistent roller coaster as well for Oklahoma, because his first year they were 6-7 in 2022, then 10-3 in 2023, then 6-7 again in 2024, and then 10-3 again this past season as well. And they made their first college football playoff appearance in 6 years this past season before losing at Alabama, to Alabama, I should say, at home in the first round of that game. And Dalton, the reason why they made the playoff this past year was one simple reason. It was the defense, coached by Brent Venables. Third best defense in the country in successful play rate allowed. Fourth best defense in yards per play allowed. Seventh best defense in EPA per play allowed. But on the other side of the ball, it was the offense, which is why Oklahoma could not make it farther than the first round of the playoff, because they were 100th in EPA per play on offense, 92nd in yards per play, and 91st in successful play rate. You brought back your offensive coordinator and Ben Arbuckle entering his second year as the offensive coordinator. Todd Bates and Jay Valai are back as the co-defensive coordinators as well for Oklahoma. Transfers on offense, though, and a healthy John Mateer should help on the offensive side of the ball, but that offense has got to be a lot better at Dalton. But it was an elite defense for Oklahoma last year.
Oh, absolutely. No single unit carried their team more last year than Oklahoma, right? Considering with the second John Mateer, once he broke his thumb and then came back from surgery, maybe too quick, and they were just struggling to score points. There was not a single unit in the country, I think, that carried their team more. I mean, when you look at some of these games that they won, right? You look at, they beat LSU 17-13. They beat Missouri 17-6. They beat Alabama 23-21, right? They beat Auburn 24-17. They beat Michigan even 24-13. I mean, they won, let me see this, 1, 2, 3, 4. They won 6 games where they scored 26 points or less. I mean, you talk about carrying the load as a defense against an SEC schedule and an out of conference against Michigan and all these. I mean, they did everything they could. And even, I know they fell apart a little bit in the second half in the college football playoff against Alabama. But even then, it was a 17-point lead they had in that game. So, I mean, when you talk about this defense at all 3 levels being an elite unit, that's absolutely the strength of this team. It'll be the strength of the team again.
Yeah, really, strength again is the defense should be, once again, an elite unit in the country right now. Our number 7 defense overall in college football, number 5 linebacker unit in the country, number 10 defensive line in the country for us, and the number 12 secondary in the country for us too. We got a projected top 15 pick in the draft at D tackle and David Stone, projected second round pick in the draft and Cole Sullivan at linebacker, projected day 2 pick in the draft and edge rusher Taylor Wine as well. I mean, all 3 units, Dalton, are at least top 15 in America right now. It's absolutely should be one of the best defenses in college football once again next year.
And you've got, I mean, arguably a top 5 defensive play caller in Brent Venables in the country. I mean, we've got some great ones out there right now, but every single week, not only is he just lining, he's not one of those coaches who just lines these guys up and says, just go do your thing. Like, he is creating, especially blitz packages and things like that, everything that he can to disrupt opposing offenses, to disrupt opposing quarterbacks. There's very few, if any, in the country better than Brent Venables at calling defensive plays and coming up with a great game plan. And his defense, once again, is loaded at all 3 levels.
And it really, Dawn, is pretty simple. The biggest question mark, biggest strength is defense. Biggest question mark is simply put the offense.
The whole thing. I mean, honestly, it really is. I mean, when you look at the amount that they struggled last year and they only scored 30 points, they scored 30 points in 4 games last year, and 3 of them were against non-Power 4 teams, right? Like, this team just struggled all the way around, as they did the year before with Jackson Arnold. Did they find enough points when they needed it? Yes. But, let's just call it like it is. They were 100th in EPA per play. They were 92nd in yards per play. The run game was really kind of a big factor in their wins and losses. 107th in the country in explosive run rate. And I mean, you just have to say it. John Mateer, after he came back from the injury, was one of the worst quarterbacks in the country. Were there moments where there's singular throws where it was good? There was a few throws against Alabama in the playoff game that were nice. But at the end of the day, when he had that injury, everything just kind of stopped. It came to a halt. So I think when you look at, this team and what they're trying to do, the goals are this: 100% healthy John Mateer, right? A little more consistency in the run game. Help me out. And that doesn't just mean Mateer carrying them. That's Xavier Robinson and Torrey Blaylock making things happen for themselves. Their running backs, Max, combined to only break 23 tackles as a unit the entirety of last season. Less than 2 per game. I mean, you just can't have that from your backs. And then the receivers, the transfer receivers are a big story. Trell Harris from Virginia, Parker Livingston from Texas. Those are really going to be the big story to help out Isaiah Satania. Is the potential there on this offense? Sure. We have to see it. We have to see Mateer healthy, and we got to see him gel with all of these new players around him.
Yeah, and I think it should be better with Mateer healthy and the upgraded receiving core. It seems like because last year it seemed like the receiving core just faltered at times last year too. But Don, talk to me more about John Mateer because it felt like he's a very polarizing quarterback. There's some people right now that think he's one of the best, if not the best quarterback in college football. I've seen some lists where he is number one in the country going into next year. And to give him credit, like in the first few weeks of the season, especially that win over Michigan, I think in week 2 of the year, he was talked about as a Heisman favorite going like midway through the season. And then all of a sudden, like you said, after the hand injury, it really kind of fell apart for him after that.
Yeah, you mentioned it. The injury, he was playing great through his first 4 games, one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the country, making the throws, scrambling. He's got the scrambling ability for days, no question. He can improvise. But after he got back from week 7 onward, 8 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and the accuracy, again, probably at least in part because of the injury, the accuracy was way, way off. It was just all over the place. And I think what you have with Mateer, I mean, you put him directly in that bucket of playmaker, right? As a quarterback, like certain guys, we talk about Lenore Sellers and we'll get to Sam Levitt. Certain guys are just playmakers and they're going to go out there and play like the Johnny Manziel bit where they're just playing with a ton of instinct and that's what carries them through. Loose kind of sidearm-ish delivery that gets a lot of velo on it, even on the move. He really loves to play playground football. But there's times where he relies on it too much, right? When you're talking about, okay, sir, you can't improvise every play at this level in the SEC. It's just not going to work like that, right? When pressure is coming or he feels it kind of squeezing down, his eyes drop, he gets jittery. That is what his instincts tell him to do all the time. Is just like, okay, all right, a jailbreak, let's go, right? And then there's some other times where the vision's got to get better and he predetermines some throws. Remember the pick 6 in the playoff game was a prime example against Alabama where it's just like, dude, you chose this throw well before this ball was snapped, right? We can't have that and losing underneath zone defenders and things like that. So John Mateer's a guy where there are moments where you're like, oh yeah, that's an NFL quarterback. And there's other moments where it really is like, what the hell are you doing? Right. Yeah. So I think you mentioned polarizing. I think it's a great word to describe his style of play.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to watch, but it's like taking Adderall. It feels like watching John Mateer whenever you play quarterback, right? It's just like it's all over the place sometimes, and some of the plays are like, wow, I see it. I see why people think it could be a first round pick and an NFL starter and maybe a Heisman Trophy winner. And there's other players you're like, man, should you even be on the field right now? Like, why not start out the backup quarterback for Oklahoma right now? Like, I felt like there were times last year I was like, man, Michael Hawkins should be playing right now. Like, it's just not working at all for Mateer. And to his credit, the hand injury did play a huge part in it. It seemed like you rushed back from that injury too to get back for that Texas game. But yeah, you got to see a lot more from Mateer this year. Now, he does have a lot better receiving core to throw to this year. Some transfers coming in. And also on Isaiah Satania coming back at receiver right now, who's our offensive player spotlight. Top receiver for them, redshirt senior, 5'10", 185 pounds. He was actually a transfer from Arkansas the year before. Last year, led the Sooners with 960 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. This guy has absolute blazing speed. He is one of the fastest players in college football. He hit 22.5 miles per hour last year, and he really uses that speed underneath after the catch. He's very dangerous with the ball in his hands thanks to his speed. Last year, he was 5th in the Power 4 with over 500 yards after the catch, and also 5th in the Power 4 with 22 broken tackles after the catch, too. So Isaiah Satania Dalton will be a massive part of John Mateer and whether or not he could bounce back from what was a roller coaster of a year last year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between there's guys who are fast and then there's guys that scare you. Satania has got scary, scary speed. I mean, you talk about how many times did we see last year where they just needed one home run play to turn a game around, and it was him, right? A guy who can take a slant on 1st and 10, 80 yards down the field, and he's just gliding, man. I mean, he really, when he opens it up and he has a crease at the second level, he can fly by anybody out there, even in the SEC. So for as much as we love Trell Harris coming in for Virginia, Parker Livingston has a lot more depth. the core piece still needs to be Satania and his speed and the big playability there.
What was the play where it was a very low scoring game and then all of a sudden 80-yard touchdown off the rip for Satania? Was that the Missouri game? I
believe the Missouri game, it was like 80 and it was just a slant. I think it was like 80 or 85 yards. I'm trying to find it here real quick. I think the Missouri game where it was ugly. I think he might have even been down 3-0. And 87 yards. He housed a slant. And it was just like, oh, okay, we got a whole different ball game now, right? I mean, I think is this against Ole Miss, a 76-yarder against, but I mean, that's what he can do on if he gets 2-3 yards of space, go sit down. Because I mean, that's really, when you talk about a home run hitter, Satania is one of the best ones in college football.
Talk about a home run player too, Dalton, on the defensive side of the ball, a guy who could be the best D tackle in next year's draft, an absolute freak at defensive tackle in David Stone.
Yeah, absolutely. He's seen by a lot of people as DT1 in next year's draft. He's DT4 on our college football list. Everybody relax, not a draft ranking. But I mean, you talk about a guy with as much potential as anybody in the country. The athleticism is explosive. The play style is so naturally violent. He's got a little bit to me of like this bull in a china shop kind of way of going about it, where he's got to develop a little bit of discipline, but quick hands, first step that can cause an immediate problem off the ball. He is like the textbook 3 technique when you talk about that style of player. 26 pressures and 2 sacks last year. I would expect more pass rush production. And then the only player in the FBS, the only D tackle in the FBS with a higher run stop rate than David Stone was Caden McDonald. And he was by far the best run defender in the country last year. So when you talk about the potential now, and if he picks up even more production as a pass rusher, we know Brent Venables for all the looks and creativity and blitzes and every exotic thing he can do. But with this crew, not just Stone, but with this crew, with Taylor Wine out there, he's got Jaden Jackson on the inside too, got some other depth in there. Kenny Ozawalu coming in the portal. They could just rush forward and let it rip. And David Stone is going to be the guy that you need to double team because his get off the ball and the violence that he plays with, the high end, high end's probably better than any D tackle in the country. I want to see it a little more consistently, but I get it, man. This guy is going to be a stud.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an absolute freak, man. He's one of the best players that we have at D tackle in the country, and the ceiling to be pretty easily the best D tackle in the country if he hits that ceiling this year, and could be a top 15 pick in the draft too because of how freaky he is as a player. Dawn, what is the floor for Oklahoma this year? What's the ceiling? Can they make it back to the college football playoff? What do you think is the minimum and maximum for the Sooners this year?
I mean, the floor is pretty darn high, right? This is a team that just made the playoff with an offense that was a lot of times atrocious, right? So when you talk about there's 6, maybe even 7 games on their schedule that they absolutely should win. And at Missouri is a little tricky because it's always tough to go into that stadium. But I think we're going to find out a lot about this team right away in week 2 when they go to the Big House and play Michigan, right? We found out a lot about them last year when they hosted them and beat them pretty decisively, especially in a gritty defensive battle. But, some games that are going to be tough against Georgia and Texas and Ole Miss, but their defense can play with anybody at all 3 levels. They're going to keep them in every game that they play in. And Oklahoma, I think they come back again this year, especially if they're better on offense, as a legitimate playoff contender and a team that, if the SEC gets 5 again and we have them at number 5 right here, that's fine. If they're in the top 4, I think they're certainly going to be in the playoff with at least 10 wins in their schedule. But their floor is determined by their defense. And I don't see any way they get less than probably 8 wins, even if their offense is as bad as it was last year. I don't think they get any less than 8 wins, but they're a legit playoff contender. Their defense is going to give them a shot against all 12 of their opponents.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. The defense sets the floor and the offense sets the ceiling. Dawn, is kind of like, it's basically the SEC version of Iowa. It feels like watching Oklahoma these last few years, where it's like it's an elite defense.
They might take some offense to that one. They might take a look because if you're going with it, I don't know. I know Donnie probably took some offense to that one too somewhere in there, but they might take some offense to that one if you're going, well, they're like Iowa if they could score any. I guess last year, I guess that's
last year they were,
case,
yeah,
man. Like I mean, but I think it's the right way to put it though. Keep going.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, hey, last year they were basically Iowa in the SEC. I think they have a better offense than Iowa does right now. But again, you need this offense to perform better if you want to make it past the first round of the college football playoff right now. I think worst case scenario, they're 7-5. I would look at the schedule right now. Best case scenario, I think 10-2. They're at Georgia and they play Texas right now too. I think maybe making the quarterfinals of the playoff is maybe my ceiling for Oklahoma. You got games against Michigan and Ole Miss and A&M that are kind of swing games for them right now. But I think, between 7-5 and 10-2 is my expectation for Oklahoma in 2026. Dalton, let's move in.
Donnie's so mad at you right now, by the way.
Donnie's mad at me, and I'm sure Oklahoma fans are mad at me for that comparison too.
It is an SEC. It's an SEC show, and you managed to get a stray for Iowa in there. So that was rude, man.
I'm compared to Oklahoma. It's like that's a great defense, man. You got a great team.
Now he's trying to twist it around.
Now I'm backtracking. All right, let's get to the top four now, Dalton, of our SEC show. And I think really, to me at least, Dalton, this top four is pretty clearly the top four right now. At number four for us is the LSU Tigers. Of course, the brand new head coach in Lane Kiffin, because head coach Brian Kelly was fired after 4 seasons on the job. He started last year 5-3 and then was fired after the 8th game of the year. They were as high as number 3 in the AP poll. 7-6 record overall this past season, and only a 3-5 record in the SEC. Both the worst since 2021. Ed Orgeron's last year on the job. Lane Kiffin was hired from Ole Miss, and one of the biggest moves in a very long time, felt like, in the coaching carousel. Very controversially left Ole Miss right before the program's first playoff appearance. He had 3 straight years with 10 or more wins at Ole Miss, the first time that ever happened in program history. He retained Blake Baker as his defensive coordinator. LSU had a top 30 defense in the country last year. Charlie Weiss Jr. comes in as offensive coordinator from Ole Miss, and a great transfer portal class coming in, a top 5 portal class in the country, headlined by guys like Sam Levitt at quarterback, Jordan Seaton at offensive tackle, and Prince Will Umanmielen as well from at edge rusher too.
Really, and I know this is a dangerous title to hold in football circles, but this was the team of the offseason, right? And even before the offseason even started, with Kiffin coming in and all the Ole Miss controversy and the portal and Sam Levitt and Jordan Seaton, all the big names they brought in. But there's going to come major expectations with this. The idea of this is that Lane Kiffin is going to Baton Rouge, and he's got the resources now where he can actually win a national title, even though Ole Miss had a Final Four team last year. It's going to be controversial. It's going to be the high wire. It's going to be everything's under a microscope. And boy, I can't wait for them to go to Ole Miss. Is that in week 3? I think it is. They go to Ole Miss for of course, because of course the schedule makers, they got one right. Give it to them in the SEC. Making that the first SEC game for those two teams. Love it. Absolutely love it. And also address him properly. 2-time Conference USA champion for FAU coach Lane Kiffin, please. If you
Definitely.
could.
I will, of course. Dalton, I love this LSU team, though. And actually, I ranked them 3rd in our rankings for this show. I think this team has a lot of potential, really, on the offense right now, especially because you have a top 10 quarterback in Sam Levitt for us, who has Heisman potential, I think, with Lane Kiffin. A top 10 receiving core, number 6 receiving core in the country, headlined by the best tight end in the country and Trey'Dez Green. Top 15 running back unit in America with Caden Durham and Harlan Berry back. One of the best offensive minds in the country as well, and Lane Kiffin. And I know you're going to get into the offensive line in just a second, but still probably a top 20-ish offensive line in college football, headlined by a guy who could be a top 10 pick in the draft at left tackle in Jordan Seaton. Like, this really could be one of the best offenses that we see in college football this year.
Yeah, we think, right? I think potential is always the dangerous word, right? When you talk about this team and everything they're supposed to be doing, and they were supposed to be a playoff team last year. And then, on the perimeter, it's almost like a cracked out version of what we talked about with Auburn, where it's like, hey, we love this team on the perimeter, right? You got 2 good backs. You got maybe the best tight end in the country, and Trey'Dez Green, Jace Brown, Jackson Harris, Trey Brown, Trey Wilson. They got Sam Levitt, and you want to talk about polarizing. We'll get to Sam Levitt in a minute. But this team's primary issue last year was their offensive line. Right. They, especially in the run game, they really couldn't block anybody. And Garrett Nussmeier was forced to get rid of the ball in 2.3 or whatever it was that he averaged last year. They got to be better up front. They should be better in pass protection, especially with Jordan Seaton at left tackle. Having a pass protector like that makes the whole unit better. Braylon Moore returning at center. Weston Davis really struggled last year, but returning at right tackle. Curious to see how many competitions we get across this offensive line other than at left tackle there. But that's really the unit right there. Is there, again, potential? Yes. But I do see a scenario, again, where if a team, the perimeter is great. Everybody in the SEC has athletes. If you're lagging in the trenches, you're going to have a major problem against certain teams on your schedule in the SEC. So the offensive line to me, and the quarterback, of course, and Sam Levitt as always, but the offensive line to me is definitely going to be the team. That's going to be the unit under the microscope, especially figuring out if they can run the football between the tackles.
Yeah, we still have it as the number 6 offense in the country right now, too. A lot of potential, but yeah, you're right. They need the offensive line to perform to reach that potential this year. And also, Dalton, a guy in Sam Levitt at quarterback who we loved going into the year last year, our number 2 quarterback in America going into the season. But whether it be to injuries or whether it be to him trying to play too much hero ball, a little bit of a roller coaster year for him in Arizona State last year.
Yeah, the roller coaster is the right way to put it. I think, to be honest, I think he's a more physically gifted version of what we just talked about with John Mateer, where it's the highs are as high as, I mean, he can do some freakish things outside the pocket, running the football, throwing on the move. I mean, if you want the high end of what this guy can bring you, go watch him beat Texas Tech, basically him and Jordan Tyson single-handedly last year in that defense. And he can make throws that you have no answer for. He can make plays with his legs that you have no answer for. The high end of Sam Levitt is as good as any quarterback in the country. And the low end is a serious, serious problem because the decision making and the accuracy and the footwork can all just get away from him. And the decision making basically at the point of the top of his drop is him deciding, okay, am I going to stay in structure or not? And the problem last year was he didn't stay in structure at all. It was like, okay, I'm going to look at Jordan Tyson and then I'm going to break the pocket if I don't feel like he's open. He needs to just adjust to this offense. Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss just need to reel him in a little bit because as a playmaker, as dangerous as anybody in the country, but he's got to be able to play enough within structure. I think this is the right offense for him. I think his legs are going to bring a jolt to this run game and relieve some pressure on the offensive line and the backs. As you saw 2 years ago when Jaden Daniels was in there, there's a lot more space to work with, right? Because you're worried about Daniels. Last year with Nussmeier, it didn't happen. I should say 3 years ago with Daniels, actually. We got 2 years of Garrett. But, with Nussmeier in there, he's not a rushing threat. So everything gets squeezed. Now with Sam Levitt, this is one of the most dangerous runners in the country as well. So he could be, honestly, everything that Trinidad Chambliss was for LSU last year. But Chambliss is better at playing within structure when he needs to. Levitt's got to reel it in and be able to do that and run the offense most of the time the way that it's supposed to be run.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a big part of it, you're going to need Kane Durham and Harlan Berry to really help out because it felt like Dalton is redshirt freshman year at Arizona State. He did a great job of just playing within the offense. His turnover worthy play rate was one of the lowest in the country. Cam Scatterby, he knew Cam Scatterby could rely on there. It felt like last year he's like, okay, without Cam Scatterby, I got to be the hero. I got to be the one that creates all the offense for us, even though he had a great running back in Ridley Brown there too. But I think you need Lane Kiffin to get in his head and say, hey man, just do the job. Do your job on this offense. I'm one of the best play callers in America right now. I'm going to put you in a spot to succeed. You don't have to be the one that single-handedly carries this offense. We've got a lot of talent around you right now. Just do your job. And I think if he does that and plays a lot more like the 2024 version of Sam Levitt, he could absolutely be a Heisman Trophy contender next year. So that's kind of a big X factor for LSU. And also, Dalton, they got a great left tackle blocking for him in Jordan Seaton right now, our number 5 tackle in America, projected top 10 pick in the draft right now, too. I would say right now the best pass blocker returning to college football, 85 PFF pass blocking grade last year on true pass sets, third best in the country and best of any returning tackle in America. Only 5 career sacks allowed and almost 900 pass blocking snaps. His lateral quickness is outstanding. He improved his punch timing, his hand placement too last year. But Seaton has really struggled in the run game in his career. Only a 52 PFF run blocking grade last year. That was 263rd in college football. He really misses assignments a lot in the run game as well. But his movement skills, his pass blocking polish still scream top 10 pick at his age. But his difficulties in the run game are why he's not like the number 1 tackle in college football right now. But if that does catch up enough, Dalton, he could be like an Olu Fashanu type of player and still be a top 10, top 15 pick in the draft.
He's got as much tackle as any or as much potential as any offensive tackle in the country, right? I think it's the same theme throughout this entire offense as you go so much potential at left tackle, at quarterback, at receiver, at everywhere, right? And I think you mentioned it, the run game. It's going to be interesting to see if Seaton himself can improve in the run game because they just didn't do it at all at Colorado, and then the rest of the offensive line that struggled last year in the run game, are they going to be able to figure that out? Again, I think Levitt plays a big part in it, but Seaton himself does need to get better. He's got to get stronger. But through his first 2 years in college football as a true freshman and true sophomore, can't really ask for much better, I should say, in pass protection than what he's given you.
Yeah. Don't lose the star defensive player for LSU right now.
Man, there's a lot to pick from. Actually, when you look at all the guys they have on this defense, we got to talk about this side of the ball because I think it's a similar case with Oklahoma where this defense actually sets the floor, right? You got Prince William Onmielen, Jordan Ross, and Deshaun Spears, Whit Weeks, all these guys. Give me the big monster out there at cornerback, though, and DJ Pickett. I mean, talks of this guy, a former wide receiver in high school. He's a 6'4" corner. We talked about it with Kelly Jones earlier. I mean, when he's impressed, man, good luck to you at 6'4" with the length that he has. 524 snaps last season, 3 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, allowed only 20 of 38 targets to be caught, and one of the best run defenders at this position in the country. When you look at the potential of DJ Pickett, I mean, the 2 themes again that we had in our cornerback rankings. Well, 3 themes. 1, Leonard Moore's great. 2, true sophomores, and he's another one. And 3, big monsters at 6'2" and above. He's way above at 6'4". And wasn't there at some point a rumored 6'5" for DJ Pickett? I mean, you just look at him out there and you go, does he belong out there? And then you watch him play and you go, oh, he certainly does. So you talk about, okay, yeah, they're losing Mansour Delane, top 10 pick to the NFL draft. And yet you feel really good about the fact that they have DJ Pickett on the outside and as part of just another great secondary they're going to have. And you mentioned Blake Baker earlier. Biggest win of the offseason was getting to keep him.
Yeah. Dawn, what is the bottom line for LSU right now? What's the floor with under year 1 of Lane Kiffin? What's the ceiling for LSU this year too?
I think we start with the ceiling. The ceiling is ridiculously high. I actually think they're on because, there's so many teams that are like, okay, they're good. They're not going to win a natty, right? I think the ceiling is they could win the whole thing. I think they have enough talent. I think they have enough talent to do it. If the offensive line comes together and Sam Levitt just doesn't have as many moments where his head is directly up his backside, they could win the whole thing. They've got everything that you could want on defense. They've got a brilliant defensive play caller. They've got brilliant offensive play callers. They're loaded at receiver. You've got a quarterback who's been in the playoff before at a program with a lot less resources. To me, O-line and quarterback are always your 2 biggest questions for me. But if this offensive line is solid, and especially in the run game, they can get something going to add balance. I think they have the potential to win the entire. I think they could be a national title contender. The floor to me is probably something like 8 wins, and it just doesn't click in some of those moments. And Levitt just has the bonehead moments.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think somewhere between worst case 7 and 5. I don't think they're gonna be that bad though. Ceiling maybe 11-1 and maybe making like the semifinals. But you're right, they have potential to win the whole thing. I think that's probably what I would say too for LSU. They have so much potential this year, and we'll get to our predictions tomorrow. I'm very high in LSU though going into next year. So yeah, I think between 7 and 5, absolute worst case scenario, but it's probably more than that. And then I think 11-1 probably. I mean, I don't know. I don't think they're gonna go 12-0 in their first year in the Lane Kiffin, but you never know. And they do have the potential to maybe lift up the trophy at the end of the year as a national champion. But we'll see with LSU. Dalton, let's get to the school that Lane Kiffin left to join LSU here at number 3. That is the Ole Miss Rebels. A magical year last year. They finished 11-1 in the regular season, and they made their first college football playoff in school history, led by a former D2 quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss, who really came out of nowhere. But then Lane Kiffin left the program right before the playoffs started in what was an absolute circus of a coaching carousel there. They promoted their defensive coordinator, Pete Golding, to permanent head coach, and he really righted the ship because they beat Tulane in the first round. They upset Georgia in the quarterfinal, and then they lost to Miami in the final seconds in the college football playoff semifinal. They finished the year as the number 3 team in the country, their highest final ranking since 1962. Chambliss won his case against the NCAA to get another year of eligibility. He's a top 5 quarterback in the sport. Kewan Lacey's on the cover of the video game right now. One of the best backs in America. Defensive line is loaded. There's some questions on the offensive line and the receiving core, I would say, right now for Ole Miss. And you got a new offensive coordinator in John David Baker from East Carolina. He was at Ole Miss, though, from 2021 to 2023. The question is, can he live up to Lane Kiffin right now? And Brian Brown and Patrick Toney will take over as co-defensive coordinator for Pete Golding, too. But really, Dalton, a magical year is the way to put it for Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. They got it rolling. And I mean, the strange blessing in disguise that ended up being, Trinidad Chambliss replacing Austin Simmons. And he just came in right away and played so well that you couldn't take him back out. You can't call a kid playing like that a backup. No way. Right. So, I mean, you won a lot of close games. You dug it out against Oklahoma, obviously lost the first game against Georgia and then got the win in the playoff. And, I think when you look at this team, they're really going to be built on the same foundation that they were last year with Trinidad Chambliss, with Kewan Lacey. And I think a team that could be much improved actually on defense with all of the work that Pete Golding did in the portal. And I know you mentioned the co-DCs. I think Pete Golding's still going to be calling the defense. I'm pretty sure.
I think so too. Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look at the amount that this team, then you get to the playoff and everything they had to deal with, and Lane didn't even coach the Mississippi State game at the end. This team just started, they just believe. It's like they just believed in themselves as far as they could possibly go. Can that magic stay for another year with a harder schedule? I think with the leadership that they have with Golding and Trinidad Chambliss, I think it could.
Yeah, and speaking of, I mean, I think the biggest strength is pretty simply they have the best backfield in college football right now, whether it be Trinidad Chambliss, our number 4 quarterback in America, second in the Power 4 last year with over 3,900 passing yards, 4th most big-time throws in the country last year at 29 of them. And then Kewan Lacey's our number 2 running back in America, led the Power 4 last year with 24 touchdowns, second in the Power 4 in rushing yards, second in the Power 4 in yards after contact, and second in the Power 4 in forced missed tackles. So a top 5 quarterback and a top 5 running back in America in Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacey makes up, in our opinion, the best backfield in college football going into next year.
Yeah, you have those 2 guys. You have a shot to win football games. But I think the one concern that I would have is the 5 guys in front of them on the offensive line, right? You lost both your starting tackles, Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams. You've got your 3 starters back on the inside with Delano Townsend, Bryson Sanders, and Patrick Kudas. But all under 65 PFF grades last year, kind of, I call it an average interior, right? And even for a team that, made the Final Four of the playoff last year, their offensive line was not necessarily the strength. You've got Terez Davis coming in from Maryland. He had a rough freshman season in 24. Tommy Kinsler, right tackle, played only 113 snaps in 3 years at Miami. They've got Carius Kern coming in from LSU. They're hoping that, that he can really bring an infusion of talent to that offensive tackle spot. But I think especially this offensive line is going to be the big question. I kind of like I know they're your Syracuse guys, and yet you're doubting them more than me. I kind of like the additions at wide receiver with Darryl Gill and Jonte Cook. I think they'll fit right in, and they still have Deuce Alexander, but the offensive line is going to be one. Ole Miss, it feels like the questions about them in most years are like, okay, are they good enough in the trenches to play with the Georgias and the Oklahomas and Texas and teams like that this year? We're going to find out the hard way. I think their D-line is good enough. We'll get to that in a bit. But their offensive line, to me, is the biggest question on this whole team.
Yeah, it's been a big question for them in the last few years, really, under Lane Kiffin. It felt like they've always had, relatively average offensive lines, if not below average ones, under Lane Kiffin. So we'll see what they could do now with Pete Golding as the head coach. But yeah, that is the question mark for them right now. Dalton, let's get to what is not a question mark, though. That is Trinidad Chambliss, their quarterback, who, like I said before, one of the best quarterbacks that we've got in the country.
How could you not love watching him? He was the coolest story in college football last year, the SEC newcomer of the year, Davey O'Brien, semifinalist, and didn't get to start until the 3rd game of the season. And then all of a sudden he rips off this run of like, wait, who is this kid? And why is he just dominating everything as a passer and as a runner? He attacks one-on-ones on the outside, but he's not afraid of the middle of the field. And you saw the ceiling that he can get to as a playmaker in that playoff game, the quarterfinal win over Georgia. I mean, it's a lofty comp because you're talking about a borderline Hall of Famer, but the playmaking looks that Georgia game, so that looked a little bit like Russell Wilson, didn't it? I mean, that's really the level that I would go with this. It's kind of, undersized guy, but he's just out there with his vision and his playmaking ability, and he can do whatever you need him to do out there. Compact mechanics, quick release, really good touch on the deep ball, one of the best deep passers in the country last season, and the leadership that he showed through all of that. And he's even said it. He goes, of course, Lane wanted me to go with him to LSU. And I said, you know what? I'm loyal to this Ole Miss program, and they're the ones who gave me this big shot, and I'm going to stick to it. So, I mean, another reason that the LSU Ole Miss game is going to be so much fun, but you can't really ask for much more out of your quarterback, the playmaking ability. And then, I almost forgot until I looked up the stats again for this preview. Really turned the ball over 4 times the entire year. Yeah. 3 interceptions and 1 lost fumble the entire season. You have a guy making with that high level playmaking and not turning the football over. What more could you ask for? He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
He absolutely is. And he has got one of the best running backs in the country right next to him, and Kewan Lacey, too, our number 2 running back in America, transferred in from Missouri last year. Led the nation last year with over 300 carries, so definition of a bell cow running back for Ole Miss. Again, led the Power 4, I should say, in rushing touchdowns. Second in the Power 4 with over 1,500 rushing yards. Second in the Power 4 with over 1,000 yards after contact and 89 broken tackles. also second in the Power 4. He's at breakaway speed, man. He had 22 miles per hour in tracking. He has very nice wiggle. His cuts are explosive too. He's very strong through contact. I mean, Keon Lacey is one of the best running backs, one of the best players that we've got in college football, a top 10 player in the country for us, Dalton, going into next year. And like I said before, he and Trinidad Chambers make up a great backfield. And also on defense, Dalton, they got a lot of great players on that side of the ball too, namely on that defensive line. You muted again, Dalton, I think.
We're going to get used to this. We're going to get used to hitting buttons. We're getting used to hitting buttons as we go. You remember, hey, listen, we talked about it earlier before the show. You guys are in your 20s. You know how to use things. I don't necessarily, right? So we're getting there. We're getting there. But either way, the whole defense starts with our number 2 defensive tackle in college football, Will Eccles. It's also been a long 3.5 hours. 39 pressures, 5 sacks last year, led the Power 4 with 35 total stops. Very durable, most snaps in the Power 4 among defensive tackles, 765 last year, 6 batted passes was 3rd. I mean, to me, their entire defense, and they added a ton of talent. Mekhi Barone next to him. They have Cam Franklin and some Taron Perkins off the edge still. Linebacker core is all new, but a lot of talent there. But this entire defense starts with Will Eccles moving all across the defensive line and making everything happen when it comes to run stops and rushing the passer from the inside. To me, he's the first problem you have to deal with, and there's a lot of problems you have to deal with. I think it's a very underrated, potentially top 15 defense with all the talent they brought in the portal. But the biggest name to me staying is Will Eccles in the middle. I think he's one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, he's unbelievable. He's one of the best D tackles we got in the nation right now. Led the Power 4 last year in stops and pressures, like you said too. He's a phenomenal player. So let's get to the bottom line now for Ole Miss. What is the floor for them in their first year under Pete Golding as head coach? And what is the ceiling for Ole Miss too?
The floor, kind of like LSU, where the floor is probably if their offensive line can't get better and you just kind of get some regression to the mean with between as well as Trinidad played last year and their schedule just being naturally harder. The floor is probably somewhere around like 8 wins, if they lose some of the tighter games on their schedule. And the ceiling is solid playoff contender and getting, as far, if not deeper than they did last season, right? If everything goes right for them again, if the defense is better. But this is another team where I think the offensive line, just like LSU, is going to be the big X factor here. And what happens in games, even right off rip, they got to go to Nashville and play Louisville week 1. And that's a dangerous pass rush, right? I mean, that's a pass rush that can take a game over. So you talk about teams that are really good in the trenches: Louisville, SMU, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are the teams that concern me with Ole Miss, teams with great defensive lines. If those teams give them a lot of problems, they could be 7-9 wins and miss the playoff. If they can find their way around it, or Trinidad just works the magic every single week and wins a Heisman, they could go a long way, maybe as far as it did last year.
Yeah, somewhere between 7-5 and 11-1. 7-5 is a floor. I don't think they're going to be that bad though. And then 11-1, I think maybe at Texas, a loss there, and maybe making the semifinals once again under Pete Golding. That's the ceiling. I don't know if they can win a national title though. So I'll say that. So yeah, between 7-5 and 11-1, I would say for Ole Miss in their first year under Pete Golding.
What do you think? What do you think of their line? If I saw this right, I think is their line on some of the books set at 7.5.
Oh wow, I'll take the over. Hard over.
It's either 7.5 or 8.5. I think that a lot of the books have their line set at, and I get where they're coming from, and a lot of good happened for them, and the schedule's harder. But man, that feels kind of harsh, doesn't it?
Yeah, 7.5 especially. That is a hard over. 8.5, I still would take the over on that. Yeah, I think they're gonna win at least 9 games next year. So I would take the over on that. But yeah, that wraps up our Ole Miss preview going into next year. At number 2 for us, Dalton, is the Georgia Bulldogs under Kirby Smart. Of course, they continued their dominance in the SEC last year. They won their 3rd SEC title in the last 4 years, made their 4th playoff in 5 years too. They lost in the quarterfinals to Ole Miss, a team that Georgia beat earlier on in the year. Their 12-2 record overall, 8th straight year with at least 11 wins, excluding that COVID-shortened 2020 season. Kirby Smart back for an 11th year as head coach. Both coordinators are back as well, and Mike Bobo on offense and Glenn Schumann on defense. Our number 11 quarterback in America, and Gunnar Stockton. Our number 6 running back unit, and 4 offensive linemen back who played a lot of snaps last year too. And the back 7 of that defense is loaded with a top 5 linebacker unit and a top 5 secondary in college football right now. So, Dawn, a really great year again for Georgia last year. And there's like a consistently elite program that Kirby Smart has right now.
Yeah, one of the few constants we have in college football is that Georgia's going to be really good, and they're going to do it their way. Kirby Smart builds a defensive monster. They have a great defense every year. They run the football. They don't turn it over. They get fundamentally sound quarterback play, if nothing else. And there might be little tiny tweaks they have to make to their team to win a national title nowadays. But I mean, Georgia, it's one of the safest bets in football that they're going to be really good. That's going to be the case again this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest strength of the team probably is the back seven of this defense. There's some questions with the pass rush with them, but the overall defense is phenomenal. I think because this back seven are number 3 linebacker unit in America, 2 top 15 linebackers in the country, and Chris Cole and Raylan Wilson, a top 5 secondary in the country with Ellis Robinson and KJ Bolden back there too. So an elite back seven, Dalton. Offensively, what is the big question mark you have right now?
Curious to see who steps up as far as pass catchers. 6 of their 7 leading receivers are gone. They have London Humphreys back, who had just 276 yards. They brought in Isaiah Canyon from Georgia Tech, but other than those two, it's pretty barren when it comes to proven production at receiver. They also lost Oscar Delp to the NFL draft. They've got Lawson Lucky and Elias Williams, who you feel good about their potential and what they'll still bring. And Mike Bobo loves to have multiple tight ends on the field a lot. You also lost your best pass catching back in Cash Jones, so they're going to have to figure out who out of the backfield is going to catch the football. This team, we questioned last year during the season if they were explosive enough in the passing game to go all the way. They showed it in flashes. You remember the Tennessee game was a high-scoring affair, and they won that one. But it looks like it's going to be the same problem this year. And the pass game last year was a lot of bootleg, play action, screens. I think Gunnar Stockton, if he didn't throw the most screens in the country, he was close. I don't know that you have a Zachariah Branch this year who can do all of that, right? And losing as much experience at wide receiver as they did, and Oscar Delp at tight end and Cash Jones in the backfield, I question in big spots whether they're going to be explosive enough in the passing game and have enough vertically in the passing game on the outside.
Let's go right into it then, Dalton. Let's go into Gunnar Stockton a little bit more as the quarterback for a second straight year now at Georgia. Overall, I would say pretty solid year, of course, leading them to an SEC title last year, but there are still some limitations with Gunnar Stockton as a quarterback of your program too.
Yeah, there's limitations. So him as a player, first and foremost, he's got a solid fastball. He's got a long delivery, which can kind of mess with the ball placement a little bit. It's almost like I don't know if he's got a baseball background, but it's almost like he used to play right field or something, right? Where he's got just kind of that longer load in his delivery. It can be kind of stiff sometimes. Definitely likes to throw the ball to the perimeter more so than the middle of the field. I think the big thing with Stockton to go along with all of this is that he's good. He's not going to lose you games, but he also kind of falls into the game manager bucket. Maybe he goes out and proves it wrong this year. But when you look at the amount of passes that were thrown behind the line of scrimmage, right, and all the screens and everything else, and he kind of runs the play action game the way that he's supposed to in the bootlegs, and you can't question his toughness. Like, he's a tough player. He can take off and run. He can make some plays with his feet. But at the end of the day, this passing game is very, very conservative. He had the 5th lowest average depth of target among quarterbacks with 200 pass attempts last year. Is there more? We've seen it in moments. Again, the Tennessee game sticks out to me, right? When he was finally gunning the ball downfield, and it was, okay, maybe Georgia's got a legit vertical passing game. And then it kind of shrunk back down. I would just worry, and Georgia's obviously a playoff contender. I would just worry as far as them being a national title contender that Stockton is a little too much of a game manager.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think he's definitely a little too much of a game manager right now, and especially with a quarterback that, they relied so much on the receivers to win after the catch. When you have a big question mark in your receiving core now, it's a little concerning, I think, for Georgia's passing game next year. But what's not concerning, Dolan, is that they have a star center in Drew Bobo, number 4 center in the country for us right now, the son of offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. He took over as a starter last year, 0 sacks, 0 hits allowed last year in about 350 snaps, 72 run blocking grade as well from PFF, 12th best in the Power 4. And you could tell that his dad's the coach, man. He's the leader of that offensive line. He calls out protections for Gunnar Stockton, too. Does a great job of sinking his hips and anchoring against defensive tackles. His technique is excellent, both in his footwork and hand placement, too. He plays with great effort as well, great length for the position, too. So Drew Bobo is one of the best centers that we've got in college football right now.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, the value in having a Drew Bobo as the leader of your offensive line at center, especially when they might have a very young interior this year and you've lost Monroe Freeling there at left tackle, first round pick. I mean, Bobo's so valuable to their offense, especially as much as they want to run the football with Nate Frazier and Chauncey Bowens in a deep backfield. It's going to be a big key to their offense is to continue to run the ball well. And then Bobo calling the shots. He's a veteran center. Stockton now a veteran quarterback with a year under his belt. The leadership of this offense is still there. They're just going to have to execute on the outside apart from those guys.
Yeah, sure helps when your dad's the leader of the offense too, as the offensive coordinator for Kirby Smart as well. Dalton, tell me more about the best defensive player for Georgia and the best safety in college football in KJ Bolden.
That's where you start. Best safety in college football, in our opinion. You talk about a guy in KJ Bolden. He's probably not, I wouldn't put him quite at the level of a Caleb Downs, but boy, his first 2 years at Georgia could not go much better. Terrific run defender. He kind of plays in this, in the whole role, kind of the tweener role in that defense where he floats between the second and third level, but he's got enough athleticism to play back free. He's great in the curl flat. He's unreal. He's the best run support safety, I think, in college football. It's just such a sure bet, and a guy who can be the third linebacker if you want him to, or if you wanted to step up from about 9-10 yards deep, he can absolutely do that. I think, you've put this the best way before. He puts the safe in safety, right? Is that your catchphrase for him? I'm in on that. I'm absolutely in on that. It's just so clean. It's so fundamentally sound. You don't see many big mistakes. 2 interceptions, 6 pass breakups, 13 stops last year, and only 4 missed tackles the entire season. He's just somebody, you talk about high floor. This is an incredibly high floor player. Again, I'd put him maybe a half step below Caleb Downs because Caleb Downs is special. I mean, just ridiculously. But when you talk about him compared to, say, 2 years ago with a Malachi Starks, yeah, I think it comps pretty favorably. Slightly different style, but man, that's the level of talent. You're talking about a guy who should go in the first round of next year's draft and one of the best defensive players in the entire country.
Yeah, he's special, man. And really, I think the career arc is very similar to Malachi Starks, where both of them are number one safety recruit out of high school, top 10 players out of high school, and both of them have lived up to that and then some in their career so far at Georgia. Dawn, bottom line time now for the Bulldogs. What is the absolute minimum for Georgia this year? What is the worst case scenario? And what's the best case scenario for Kirby Smart in year 11 at Georgia?
I mean, at this point, it's Kirby's. He's got it the same way Nick Saban used to, where if a disaster is just not making the playoff, right? Like if they go 9-3 and they have an upset loss or a couple upset losses somewhere in there where they don't make the playoff, that's a massive disappointment, right? If they make the postseason, then we start talking about, okay, how far can they get in there? What am I going to pick them to win? We're not into fully our predictions yet, but am I going to pick them to win the national championship? I'm not going to do it. Are they capable? I'm sure they are, but I worry about their passing game a bit. But this team, the expectation, regardless of what you think the ceiling is playoff or bust. And I'm sure, Kirby set the culture where they want to win a national title every year. I have my questions about that. I wonder if their passing game limits them to maybe a similar quarterfinal appearance like they had last year, or maybe making the Final Four.
Yeah, I think I said the minimum is 9-3, but even that, like, they have not had a 9-3 or worse season since 2016, which is Kirby Smart's first season on the job. So even saying that sounds wrong for Georgia. Ceiling is 12-0 national title. Like it feels like every year the ceiling's a national title for Georgia under Kirby Smart. I mean, that's really just how good of a program he's got going right now. Am I going to pick it to happen? No, like you, Dalton, but because I do have some question marks in their pass rush and with their weaponry and with Gunnar Stockton, whether or not he can elevate a receiving core either. But I still think this is probably going to be a playoff team in college football next year, which is evidenced by them being number 2 in our ranking right now. But they're not number 1, Dalton, because that number 1 for us is, of course, the Texas Longhorns. And, it was kind of a disappointing year last year for Texas, entering the year as the number 1 team in the country, their first number 1 ranking preseason ever, ironically, in history. They made back-to-back semifinals in 2023 and 2024 in the playoff. They missed the playoff altogether this past season, but they still finished as the number 12 team in college football. They beat 3 top 15 teams and 3 almost playoff teams. I should say 2 of them were playoff teams in A&M, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt, but they did lose to a 4-8 Florida team that did kill their season. Pete Kwiatkowski, their defensive coordinator, was fired after 5 seasons, and Will Muschamp, former Florida and South Carolina head coach, was hired in his place. He was also at Texas for 3 seasons as their defensive coordinator before getting hired by Florida. Kyle Flood entering his 6th year as the offensive coordinator. And Dalton, I think that not only is Steve Sarkisian trying to have a playoff team to make it back to the playoff, he's trying to have a national title team this year. The only school in America that was top 10 in every single one of our position unit rankings for us. 4 projected top 10 picks this year in Arch Manning, Colin Simmons, Cam Coleman, and Trevor Gooseby. Our number 2 offense in the country, our number 5 defense in the country. Not only is it the best team in the SEC, you can make an argument it's the best team in college football right now.
Well, we think it can be the best team in the SEC, right? We thought that last year, and it didn't quite happen. And then they turned it on the second half of the year, and they got hot a little bit too late. But I think when you look at the amount of talent this team has, you sit here and you go, yeah, this team should have national title expectations. You mentioned the top 10 unit bit with every unit in our rankings there. I mean, you have Arch Manning, a potential Heisman at quarterback. You've got Cam Coleman, who is looking, kind of the same way to get the potential out of him on a real team with a real passing game, right? Offensive line transfers, running back transfers. They've always got an elite defense, but Will Muschamp maybe is the biggest question on the whole team. But they're loaded. I think there's just, there's a few teams, 3 or 4 teams in the country every year. And we had them last year, and it felt like last year they all let us down, right? Texas and Clemson and Penn State. But you look at Texas again this year and you go, they're absolutely loaded. And there's no reason they shouldn't be in the national title picture. If they are not, it's their own fault. It's because they didn't execute in big games.
Yeah, the biggest strength is an offense that has the potential to be the best offense in the country. Our number 2 offense in America, number 3 quarterback, in Arch Manning, number 2 receiving core with maybe a top 10 pick in Cam Coleman, number 3 offensive line headlined by maybe a top 10 pick in Trevor Gooseby at tackle, number 6 running back unit led by Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers, 2 transfers coming in who combined for over 2,000 yards last year at Arizona State and NC State too, and one of the best offensive minds in college football in Steve Sarkisian. So really, Dalton, it could be one of the best offenses, if not the best, in college football. But you do have some question marks with that run game right now.
Oh, for sure. I think it's more about just, to me, even a bigger impact than what Cam Coleman could have in this offense. It's to me, Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown and re-sparking this run game, which other than last year has always been so good, whether it's Bijan Robinson or Roshan Johnson or Jonathan Brooks or, even the year before with Trey Wisner. Like, this team is so used to having a great run game, and they didn't have it last year. 4.3 yards per design carry, Max. 107th in the country. It's inexcusable for a Texas team. 101st in explosive run rate on design runs. That's 10 yards or more on those runs. 123rd in yards after contact per carry. Honestly, Arch Manning was their best rushing threat last year at 6.5 yards a carry and 10 touchdowns. Top 4 running backs all out of there. Hollywood Smothers, Raleek Brown, both guys had great seasons. Smothers coming in from NC State. Raleek Brown really carried a huge load at Arizona State last year. Probably 2 of the top 15 backs in the country. We didn't get either of them in our top 10, but probably 2 of the top 15. If they can jolt this run game and add balance back to this offense, because that's what it's supposed to be, is a 50-50 offense where Sark gets the zone run game going and then gets the play action and the boots and then gets into the big shots like we used to see with Quinn Ewers. That is, to me, going to have an even bigger impact than what Cam Coleman can have at wide receiver, and Sterling Burkhalter and the additions at wide receiver can have, because this team with balance can be the best team in the country, but we've got to see him get back to having that balance.
Yeah. Don, tell me more about Arch Manning, the superstar quarterback for Texas right now. One of the best quarterbacks in college football and really could have a Heisman year, like Don is saying in the chat.
I mean, there's so many things about Arch Manning that people already know. What more is there to say about him? But as a review one more time, got off to a cold start last year, looked a bit jittery as finally being named, after finally being named the starter, and the ball placement was off. And was there a shoulder injury or was there not? But you look at the end of the day, his total body of work, he still played like a top 15 quarterback in the country last year, especially with as hot as he got in the second half with not much of a run game and a lot of the vibe of that Texas team being off after a slow start. But he's a Manning that can run. He's got A-level arm strength. He's a really good athlete, even at 225, 230 pounds. Pocket management and strength in the pocket is big time for him. Clearly, he's learned through the family lineage that you need to step up in the pocket and make throws through it. Can certainly make an impact in the run game. I think the processing, especially of zone coverage, is really good. The one big question is just, hey, man, can the ball placement be better? I just need you to be more accurate, because that seemed to be the most frustrating part of it. Was, I think one part of it was confidence and conviction, and 2 was just, what is with the easy misses? And with him, I don't see a lot necessarily mechanically wrong. Like I watch so many quarterbacks and I go, your feet are a mess. You're over rotating. This, I don't see a lot mechanically wrong with Arch. I just was like, why are there so many easy misses? He could have had a 4,000-yard season if he had better ball placement last year, and they'd probably make the playoff if he has better ball placement last year. So I think just straight up, it sounds funny, but just completing more passes is going to go a long way towards him getting towards a Heisman Trophy because it's just the accuracy. Everything else, it's all in there. I mean, again, he's a Manning. Like, it's all in there.
Yeah, I want to shout out Cam Coleman for the offensive player spotlight here. 13 touchdowns over the last 2 years at Auburn, most in the SEC. Ridiculous athlete, man. 6'3", 200 pounds, likely runs a low 4.40. Very sudden at that size, too. His ball tracking ability, his hands are unbelievable, makes some absolutely ridiculous grabs. And really why his numbers aren't as high as, say, a Jeremiah Smith, coming out of high school, Dalton, was Auburn had a terrible quarterback situation, right? 63rd in passing grade in 2024, 111th this past season. Now he has an elite quarterback in Arch Manning, and he really could have a Biletnikoff type of season if he hits his ceiling and maybe a top 10 pick in the draft as well. But he needs to hit that ceiling this year. One guy, Dalton, that doesn't need to hit his ceiling though, because he's already pretty much at it, is Colin Simmons, the star defensive player for Texas right now.
Right. You wonder how much more have we hit the ceiling with Colin Simmons? Are we sure we have? I mean, you talk about the impact he's made through his true freshman and true sophomore years. Basically walks onto this defense and he's immediately the best player. Last year, 59 pressures, led the SEC with 12 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 90 plus PFF pass rush grades in each of his first 2 years. And, we've talked about this before. He is one of those players, and you get this out of certain, very few athletes, but certain ones. The game looks just like slowed down for him, and his approach to playing this position at whatever outside linebacker, edge defender, whatever you want to call it. He's so patient. His vision takes him where he needs to go. He's creative with his plan to beat blockers, whether it's in the passing game or in the run game. And he's just, to me, they've got a ton of defensive talent on this team. They always do, right? Ian Jaffard coming in, Rasheem Biles at linebacker, Bo Masco, Jelani McDonald, all the guys, one of the best secondaries in college football. Colin Simmons is the guy. You better find number one, and you better get more than one set of hands on him, because if you don't, he's going to kill you. I mean, this is a guy to me that should be a top 10 pick in next year's draft. His game is unbelievably polished for a kid so young, and he might not have the A+ tools of Dylan Stewart, but he's probably still got B+ to A- to work with when it comes to everything that he has. And then the mental approach and the arsenal as a pass rusher is unbelievable. Colin Simmons is the guy to have your eyes on this defense every single week.
Yeah, our number 3 player in the country, the best edge rusher 2 years in a row for us too. Maybe a top 5 pick. I would say he should be a top 5 pick in the draft right now. He is truly special. Dalton, let's get to the bottom line now for the Texas Longhorns, the number 1 team in the SEC. What's the bare minimum for them this year? What does the absolute worst case scenario season for them look like? And then what's the best case look like for the Longhorns this year too?
So similar to Georgia, they need to make the playoff. They need to. They cannot, if they go 9-3, which, I mean, the floor is always something goes wrong or somebody gets hurt and you miss the playoff. If they go 9-3 and they miss the playoff like they did last year, you could argue they're the most disappointing team in the whole country, right? They are national title contenders with this roster. Arch Manning's got to show better ball placement. They can do that. They need, it's the best way I could put it. I don't think they need to win a national championship because it's just hard and there's certain things that just have to go right to do that. Although it really, obviously they want to, but they need to make the playoff, or there's going to be hell raised in Austin if they don't at least make the playoff. They really need to compete, probably at least make the SEC title game again. Obviously they lost out on it 2 years ago. They didn't make it last year. There's a lot of boxes that need to get checked, or I don't think anybody's, there's going to be nobody on like a raging hot seat, but there's going to be some questions. There's going to be some leadership questions here. If you have a roster this loaded and you don't even win 10 games and go to the playoff.
Yeah, I think worst case is 9-3, but I'm with you. Best case, they win the SEC, they go 12-0, they go whatever, 15-0, 16-0, whatever, and win the national title. I think this is definitely a national title team. Even like bare minimum making the playoff though might not be enough. It might be bare minimum like semifinals or something like that, like maybe quarterfinals or something like that. Like, it's just, this roster is so freaking good, man, that they have the capability of winning a national title. And this feels like, I know they were number 1 entering the year last year, but this feels like the best chance that Steve Sarkisian has had as the head coach of Texas to win a national title. So we'll see with them this year. But yeah, I think the ceiling of this team is a national title. Is really winning the first national title in 20 years at that program. So we'll see with the Texas Longhorns. But that wraps up our SEC preview going into 2026, a marathon, almost 4-hour stream. Really appreciate everyone that watched this, whether it be all of it or even part of it. Really appreciate you guys. Again, tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, live here on the channel, we're going to be predicting the SEC in its entirety, predicting every record for every team, who makes the conference title game, who wins the conference title, all those predictions on those predictions show. For Dalton Wasserman, for Brewster Eli, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, live on this channel with our full SEC predictions.